Hello. Welcome to the Fanfic Majesty. If you want more content, you can follow me on Patreon. I will be uploading more content on there that will be exclusive. The link is in the description. Please support me.
1 centimeter Chimera Luffy. Years ago, there was a man named Goldie Roger, or as he was better known as, Gold Roger, who held the title of Pirate King due to his conquering of the toughest sea known to man, the Grand Line. Before his execution, he was asked where his vast treasure was. His final words were, "My fortune is yours for the taking, but you'll have to find it first. I left everything I own in one piece." This started the golden age of piracy, where every pirate in the world went searching for One Piece in hopes of becoming the next ruler of the seas as the Pirate King. Time passed and we find ourselves 10 years later in the quiet town of Windmill Village. Or not so quiet, since a band of pirates under the command of red-haired Shanks, one of the 4 emperors of the sea, 4 of the most powerful pirates of that era. What would this vicious band of bloodthirsty sea dogs be doing in such a remote part of the world, you ask? They were partying like there's no tomorrow in the local tavern with some of the locals. At the bar of the tavern we see a young boy by the name of Monkey D. Luffy and Shanks, captain of the red-haired pirates. Luffy is a young 7-year-old boy with jet black hair, a white shirt with a picture of an anchor on it, blue shorts, and a bandage currently under his left eye, while red-haired Shanks is a slightly average height man wearing a button-down long-sleeved white shirt, black pants with a sash holding them up, sandals, 3 vertical scars over his left eye, and a straw hat over his bright red hair, hence the nickname. The reason for the celebration was also the reason Luffy currently had the bandage under his eye. In order to prove his manliness to the pirate crew, Luffy had taken a dagger and cut himself to prove that he could withstand pain, despite the fact that he had tears in his eyes and was obviously trying to hold out, crying like a little baby. The crew had decided to hold a party to, in their own words, celebrate Luffy's craziness. "That didn't hurt at all," said Luffy in a voice that would make it obvious to a brainless monkey that he was lying. "Liar," said Shanks, his crew, most of the people in the village, and anyone who's ever read the first chapter of the One Piece manga. "I'm not afraid of pain at all. Next time bring me out to sea," exclaimed Luffy in the excited voice of a child ready for an adventure. "I want to be a pirate too." "You can't handle being a pirate. Being able to swim is a pirate's greatest weakness," said Shanks while supporting a knowing smile on his face, most likely thinking back to when he first wanted to become a pirate. Luffy, with a ticked-off look on his face, shot back, "As long as I stay on the ship I'll be fine. Besides, my fighting is pretty good too. I've been training my whole life and my punch is as strong as a pistol." Luffy finished with a proud grin on his face. Shanks seemed skeptical at the young boy's high opinion of himself, but his crew wasn't helping the matter by telling Luffy how awesome the life of a pirate is. Luffy listened enthusiastically, his eagerness only increasing by the minute. Shanks tried to act as the voice of reason by telling Luffy that he was still too young to live the life of a pirate, which Luffy heatedly denied. "Don't be mad. Here, have some juice," Shanks said with a mischievous smile. Luffy thanked the pirate and drank the juice down with the usual childlike enthusiasm. As soon as Luffy was done with the juice, Shanks could no longer hold it in and burst out laughing. "You really are a kid. That's too funny," he gasped out between bouts of laughter. "That was a dirty trick," Luffy cried indignantly as he watched the captain laugh at his expense. Luffy left the bar table in a huff, muttering about the indignity of it all when he noticed Shanks' first mate, Ben Beckman, make a come here motion while lighting up a cigarette. "Luffy, while I understand that you're upset, you should try to understand the captain's feelings," the pirate said between puffs of smoke. Seeing the small boy's confused expression, Ben explained, "While the captain knows that being a pirate is interesting, he also knows that the life of a pirate is hard and very dangerous. You understand? He's not purposely teasing your ambitions of being a pirate." "I don't understand," Luffy said, irritated. "Shanks just takes me for an idiot." Looking in said man's direction, Luffy noticed Shanks stifling his giggles about the prank he just pulled. "See?" Luffy shouted while pointing an accusing finger in Shanks' direction. A distraction came in the form of the bar's owner Makino asking Luffy if he wanted something to eat. Never one to pass down food, especially food of the meat variety, Luffy eagerly plopped down next to Shanks and dug into his food. Luffy then asked how long the pirates would be staying and, after finding out they would be staying for the year, promised Shanks that he would learn to swim by that time. Suddenly the tavern's door was kicked open by a man who looked like a cross between a hobo and a street thug walked in. Eyeing the pirates seated around the bar, the obvious meth addict made a snarky comment on the pirates' appearances despite the obvious fact that he was obviously outnumbered 50-1 against superior opponents, which let us know that the man has an IQ that makes Luffy seem like Stephen Hawking. Everyone was looking at the sad excuse of a bandit that they never noticed Luffy eating an oddly colored and shaped piece of fruit, not even Luffy. The hobo man walked up to the bar and introduced himself as a bandit and demanded 10 barrels of sake for he and his men. When told that the sake was sold out, the self-proclaimed bandit leader frowned and looked around the room. "Oh, that's strange. Then what are they drinking? Is it water?" the bandit, whose name was Higuma, asked. "No, it's sake, but it's all we had," explained Makino to Higuma. "Sorry about that," said Shanks, trying to defuse the situation. "Looks like finished all the sake here. Here, if you don't mind, take the last bottle," he said while holding up the unopened bottle of sake, which Higuma promptly smashed, sending sake splashing all over the pirate captain, much to the shock of Luffy and the others present in the bar. Most likely they were shocked at the stupidity of the bandit once again ignoring how outnumbered and outclassed he was. Higuma went into a small rant on how he was the prime fugitive figure around the village and how his head was worth $8 million and blah, blah, blah. Shanks ignored the man in favor of cleaning up the newly created mess on the floor. Higuma, seeing as no one seemed to give a crap about what he was saying, took out his sword, "Not like that, you perverts," and proceeded to smash all the glassware on the bar right on top of Shanks. Seriously, you'd think he'd quit while he's ahead. With a few more condescending words, the bandit leader stormed out of the tavern. As Makino checked on Shanks to see if he was alright, which he assured that he was, the rest of the pirate crew started cracking jokes on what just happened, with Shanks joining in to the laughter. The only person not laughing, however, was Luffy. "Why are you laughing?" Luffy shot out while looking quite ticked. Seeing Shanks' puzzled expression, Luffy went on a slight rant saying, "That was disgraceful. Why didn't you fight him? So what if they have more people? Who laughs after getting picked on? You're not a man and not a pirate either." Shanks paused for a second before saying, "Look Luffy, I know how you feel, but it's just a bottle of sake. There's nothing to get worked up about." Seeing as Luffy didn't like this answer and was leaving towards the door in a huff while calling Shanks a coward and that he didn't want to see him again, Shanks reached out to stop him saying, "Oh come on, don't go Luffy." Shanks stopped mid-sentence as Luffy suddenly came to a halt, gripping his stomach as if he was in pain. "Luffy, are you all?" Shanks started to ask before Luffy fell to the floor screaming in pain. "My body feels like it's on fire," Luffy managed to say before continuing his screaming and withering. Shanks and Makino were about to get a doctor before they and all the pirates in the bar noticed Luffy go through a startling transformation. Luffy's head and body became like that of a lion with goat horns, his arms became reptilian-like with sharp claws but maintained their opposable thumbs, his back legs took the shape of a goat's, and finally a long, lizard-like tail elongated from his spin. The entire bar was silent, save for Luffy's slightly animal-like gasps as he tried to steady himself. All the pirates and Makino stared wide-eyed and pale-faced at what Luffy had just become. Shanks was the first to compose himself, seeing similar things during his many years on the Grand Line. "Luffy, are you alright?" Shanks managed to ask in a voice just above a whisper. "Why yeah," Luffy managed to stammer out in slightly deeper voice, not that anyone really noticed or cared at this point. "Phew, that was weird, almost felt like my entire body was being turned inside out. Must have been something I ate." Luffy mused before turning and noticing that most of the other people in the bar were still staring at him in wide-eyed shock. "What's wrong? Is there something on my face?" Luffy asked while everyone in the bar felt the urge to face fault despite the shock they were still feeling. Most of the pirates were starting to get over their shock and took a closer look at the transformed boy. Despite his animal appearance, Luffy wasn't much different than when he was human. He was larger, but only by about 6 inches, his new mane was as black as his hair had been before the transformation, his eyes still held the childlike innocence they once held, only with slitted pupils. He still wore his clothes, but they seemed bulky under his new form and his bandage fell off, revealing a small scar under his left eye. What finally brought the pirates out of their daze was the confused expression held on Luffy's feline face, something that would make most little girls squeal on how cute it looked. Luffy, meanwhile, was started to get annoyed that no one was answering his question and hurried over to the mirror near the bar table, not noticing the changes to his body because now that the initial pain was over his body felt just like it always did, he just couldn't figure out why his clothes suddenly felt tight and why it felt like his spine was longer somehow and this is Luffy we're talking about. He probably wouldn't notice a forest fire unless someone pointed it out to him. When Luffy reached the mirror and looked in he gave a startled yelp and fell backwards. Getting up he went to look in the mirror again and noticed the strange, wide-eyed creature in it was following his movements exactly. It was then he looked down and took notice of his body. Luffy felt his panic growing as he looked over the changes his body had and looking behind him he finally noticed his tail. "Holy crap, I have a tail!" Luffy shouted out in shock. This caused any remaining shock the residents of the bar were feeling to disperse and they all sweat dropped. He only now noticing the tail? Everyone thought with exasperated expressions on their face. "Hey Captain," said Lucky Roo, a slightly fat member of the Red Hair Pirates who was almost constantly snacking on a drumstick. "You don't think Luffy—" "Oh no," he shouted, "the Chimera Fruit from our chest is gone." Lucky exclaimed while looking at the now empty chest next to where Luffy was sitting. Quickly going over to Luffy, Lucky pulled out a drawing of the fruit from somewhere and asked the monster-like boy, "Luffy, did you eat this?" Luffy, with a slightly confused look on his transformed face said, "Well yeah, isn't that dessert? It tasted pretty bad tough." Shanks ran up to the animal hybrid and shouted out, "That was the Chimera-Chimera Fruit. It's one of the most powerful of the legendary devil's fruit. It said whoever eats it can become any animal the person can think of as well as the mythical beast, the Chimera." Shock seemed to go over Luffy's face before he broke out into a wide Cheshire cat grin. "You mean I can become any animal, like a tiger or an eagle?" he asked excitedly. Shanks, able to calm himself down some, looked at Luffy with a serious expression. "Yes Luffy, you can become all that and more. The devil's fruits are one of the rarest treasures of the sea. There are 3 types of devil's fruit. The Parmesia, which gives the user superhuman abilities like being able to stretch like rubber or separate their body parts. The Zoan, which allows the person to become a certain animal as well as an animal-human hybrid. And the Logia, which turns the user's body into an element like fire or lightning. You Luffy, ate a Zoan fruit. Unlike other Zoan-type devil's fruit it is not limited to one type of animal or human-animal hybrid, as well as gives the user the form of a legendary chimera, like what you are now. That is why it is considered a mythical Zoan fruit due to its ability to turn the user into a legendary creature. However, it is said whoever eats a devil's fruit is cursed by sea devils and will never be able to swim." Luffy gained a shocked expression and cried out, "What? Are you kidding me?" "You idiot," yelled Shanks. Time skip a few weeks had passed since Luffy ate the chimera fruit, and after a few hours of concentration he didn't know he had, Luffy was able to finally shift back into his human form. He was still trying to figure out how to shift between forms at will, as well as how to shift into other animals, but so far the only progress he made was being able to change his hands into the reptilian claws of his chimera form. Life had went back to normal in Windmill Village. The red-haired pirates had gone sailing for a few days. The mayor of the town was annoying Luffy by repeatedly telling him to avoid hanging out with the pirates, and Luffy was getting the tar kicked out of him by Higuma and his gang of bandits. Wait, what? Let's rewind a bit. Luffy was back in the bar talking to Makino about Shanks when Higuma and his men came barging in and demanding sake and soon started insulting the red-haired pirates. This soon escalated into a fight between Luffy and the bandits as Luffy tried to force Higuma to apologize about the bar incident with Shanks. Luffy then tried to use his fruit's powers to transform into his chimera form to teach a lesson to the bandits, but thanks to his crappy control over his powers and his increasing anger towards the bandits, he was only able to make his arms into their reptilian claws like usual. Not one to back down, Luffy still tried to attack Higuma but was easily knocked back, only managing to slightly tear the end of the bandit's coat. You're a different type of human, aren't you? Higuma observed while looking at the slight tears in his coat, and you've ruined my best coat. Maybe I should sell you to the circus as payback, Luffy made several attempts to clobber the bandit, but said bandit was able to easily knock the Chimera boy around like a kicked puppy. The mayor and Makino came and tried to apologize for Luffy's actions, but the bandit decided to kill the 7-year-old out of sheer annoyance due to Luffy constantly insulting the man. Just as it looked like the end for Luffy, and a really crappy start of a story, Deus Ex Machina decided to raise its head in the form of the red-haired pirates returning to port. Shanks noticed the lack of welcome and, deciding to check out what was wrong, came upon the scene just as it looked like Higuma was about to kill Luffy. Luffy, what's wrong? Didn't you say your punch was strong as a pistol? Shanks asked as he casually walked up to where the bandits were. Higuma, annoyed by the interruption, threatened Shanks to mind his own business while one of his men pointed a pistol directly against Shanks' head. Well, since you pulled out your gun, I guess we have to fight. You know, you really shouldn't use guns to threaten people. Just then, Lucky Roo appeared out of nowhere, killing the bandit with a quick shot to the temple with his own pistol. The bandits and villagers stared at the scene in shock. Higuma recovered his senses and started yelling on how the pirates were using dirty tricks. Dirty? Don't make me laugh. The people standing in front of you aren't saints, we're pirates, stated Shanks calmly. Now listen well, bandits, you can insult me, you can pour drinks on me, but one thing I can't forgive no matter what the reason, nobody hurts my friends. Higuma laughed this treat off and sent his men to kill the pirates. Ben Beckman stepped forward and, using his rifle as a club, beat all of the bandits in a matter of minutes. Higuma, realizing how screwed he was, tried to defend his actions by saying Luffy started it. Shanks easily dismissed this, saying they just turned in the bandits' bounty. The leader of the downed bandits threw a smoke bomb and escaped in the confusion, taking a beaten Luffy with him. Higuma went out to sea on a small dinghy with Luffy and, seeing as he didn't need the kid as a hostage anymore, cruelly kicked Luffy into the ocean where he immediately started to drown. Higuma was so busy laughing at Luffy's expense that he didn't notice the huge shadow raise up behind him. By the time he turned around, he and his boat were already being swallowed whole by a large, eel-like sea king. The large serpent then tried to snatch up a struggling Luffy, but he was pulled out of the way just in time by Shanks. Get lost, Shanks stated while giving the sea king a look that would make most men lose control of their bowels. The sea king immediately swam off, leaving a sobbing Luffy and Shanks bobbing in the ocean. Makino told me what happened. Thanks for sticking up for us, Luffy. Luffy continued to sob and Shanks said, oh come on Luffy, boys don't cry. But, Shanks, your arm? Luffy cried out while looking at the bleeding stump that used to be Shanks' left arm. It's nothing, just an arm. As long as you're alive. Luffy learned a valuable lesson that day, that the sea could be a very dangerous place, which was why Shanks didn't want the boy to become a part of his crew. However, Luffy soon noticed a problem. They were in the middle of the ocean with no boat in sight, since Shanks' lifeboat drifted off during the excitement and Higuma's boat was in the belly of an overgrown eel. Luffy then noticed how pale Shanks was starting to look as well as the amount of blood pouring out of his new handicap. I've got to do something, Luffy thought. Shanks may die, and it will be all my fault. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, and that his newfound hero's life may be in danger, Luffy gathered on previously unseen determination in himself. I've got to save him. I can't let him die like this. Stupid body won't let me swim. Please, give me the strength to save him. Let me, huh? Luffy then noticed a change to his body. While he might feel as natural as he normally did, he realized he was no longer sinking. In fact, he was swimming. He also noticed that his body felt more powerful in a way, and it felt like he could hold his breath longer, and when he breathed in it almost felt like he was taking air in from the top of his head. Chapter 2. It has been a few days after Luffy set sail to start his life as a pirate. Currently we find him lying back in his small skiff enjoying the calm weather. He looks completely unconcerned despite the fact that he is currently heading straight towards a gigantic whirlpool. Hey, who would have thought I would get into such a huge disaster? How careless of me, Luffy stated with a large, slightly idiotic smile on his face. I could transform into something that could swim or fly, but I honestly don't think that swimming would help me in this situation, and I have no idea where the nearest island is, so flying's out, he said while bopping his fist into his other hand in an aha moment. He was so caught up in his musings that he didn't even notice that he was already being sucked into the whirlpool. Scene break. On a remote island we see a ship docked near land. What is strange is that the ship has a swan headmast and is decorated in more hearts than a Valentine's Day card. On top of the ship flew a Jolly Roger, also decorated in hearts. This was a pirate ship, owned by the feared, Iron Mace, Alvida, the self-proclaimed most beautiful in all the seas. The woman herself looked like the byproduct of an inbred redneck relationship with morbid obesity running in the family. The grotesque woman was also wearing cowgirl-style clothing and had a huge spiked iron mace strung casually over her shoulder. This abomination to self-respecting women everywhere was currently checking her ship for dust and, unsatisfied with the results, brutally beat the man in charge of cleaning over the head with her mace. Kobe, what's the most beautiful thing in all the seas? The sea cow called out. Why you of course Lady Alvida, stammered a small, glasses-wearing boy with pink hair. It was quite obvious that the boy was expected to lie through his teeth to the woman when asked this question out of fear for his life. This fact was cemented when the hag started to kick the small boy while reminding him how she hated dirty things and that the only reason he was alive was because she valued his navigation skills. After she was done with the beating, Alvida ordered Kobe to clean the ship. Oh, of course Lady Alvida, I'm on my way, Kobe said nervously. Later we find Kobe rolling a large wine barrel to the storehouses for the Iron Mace pirates. The other crewmen there decided to drink the contents, confident that Alvida wouldn't know, and after not so subtly threatening Kobe not to tell anyone, proceeded to pry the barrel open. Suddenly, the top of the barrel burst open and out popped Luffy like a jack-in-the-box, much to the shock of Kobe and the Iron Mace pirates. Aw, what a nice nap that was. Looks like I'm saved. I seriously thought I was going to die too, exclaimed the straw hat wearing boy before he started to laugh like he didn't have a care in the world. He then took notice of his slack-jawed audience. Who are you? Luffy asked. Who the heck are you? Came the incredulous reply from the other pirates. One of them further elaborated, why would someone come out of a wine barrel? Suddenly, an iron mace came spinning through the room. I'll give you 3 guesses on who threw it. The first 2 don't count, with a yell of, "Stop slacking off!" ringing through the building. The storehouse was immediately flattened to reveal the knocked-out forms of the pirates, with Luffy, barrel and all, went rolling into the jungle, with Kobe following close behind. After Alvida showed up, the pirates quickly jumped to the wrong conclusion, thinking that Luffy was a bounty hunter after Alvida's head that Kobe brought. Meanwhile, Kobe had finally caught up to the Straw Hat Boy and asked if he was alright. After assuring the pink-haired boy that he was fine, they gave brief introductions to each other. Luffy then asked Kobe if he had a boat, seeing as his was lost in a whirlpool. The glasses-wearing cabin boy then showed Luffy one of the most pathetic excuses for a boat that has ever graced God's green earth. What made it even sadder was the fact that Kobe had spent the last 2 years working on the piece of rubbish in order to escape Alvida's fat grip. Kobe then explained how he wanted to be free of Alvida after she took him prisoner one day as he was fishing, and he's been too scared to try and leave since. Luffy, being the happy-go-lucky kind of guy, he has tried to cheer him up by saying, "You're pretty stupid and useless. You also seem kind of wimpy. I don't like you." "Hey, that's Luffy for you. What did you expect?" Kobe asked the Pirate King in the making why he was sailing, to which he boldly pronounced, "I want to become the Pirate King." Kobe then started spouting how crazy, impossible, and suicidal that dream was and was promptly punched in the forehead by Luffy. Luffy said, "I'm not afraid of dying, because it's my dream, and I wouldn't mind dying for it. Besides, I think I can do it, although it'll be pretty tough." Inspired by the older boy's declaration, and now crying, Kobe asked, "Will I be able to accomplish my dream if I'm willing to die?" Kobe said with increasing determination, "Will I be able to become a Marine? Luffy, I know it will mean becoming enemies, but joining the Marines and catching bad guys has always been my dream. Do you think I could do it?" "I wouldn't know," came Luffy's honest answer. "I have to at least try," declared Kobe. "I'd rather die trying to escape from here and join the Marines, than spend the rest of my life as a cabin boy, and then I'll be able to rest people like Alvida." Suddenly, Alvida appeared crushing Kobe's boat with her iron mace, saying, "Who did you say you were going to arrest, Kobe? Did you honestly think that you could escape from me?" She then turned to look at Luffy. "Is that who you hired to capture me? He sure doesn't look like Roronoa Zoro. Anyway, before you die I want to ask you, what is the most beautiful thing in the sea, Kobe?" Before the glasses-wearing boy could answer, Luffy decided to open his big mouth and ask, "Hey Kobe, who's the fat lady?" much to the shock and horror of the surrounding pirates. Luffy, quick, say, "Lady Alvida is the most." Kobe then thought of the life-changing commitment he made not 3 minutes ago and, gathering his courage, shouted out, "The ugliest, fattest hag on the entire planet." To which Luffy laughed and the other pirates looked like they were about to have a stroke. "Now you both can die," screamed Alvida as she swung her iron mace on the 2 boys. However, to the complete shock of all those present, Luffy calmly walked forward and caught the mace with his bare hand like it weighed nothing at all. "What? Impossible!" Alvida cried in shock. "Sorry, but this thing's too light to hurt me," said Luffy as his body started to shift. Before the stunned pirate's eyes, Luffy shifted into his Chimera form, which was a good deal taller than it was when he was a kid, standing at nearly 8 feet tall, and it now had 2 bat-like wings jutting from the shoulder blades. What the heck are you?" exclaimed a shocked Alvida as she hurriedly tried to back away from the hulking monster in front of her. It was too late as Luffy reared back his large, scaled fist and shouted, "Chimera pistol," and smashing his fist into the pirate captain's face, sending the sea cow flying back unconscious into her surrounding crew. Luffy smiled, showing the crew a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth in his lion-like head, and said in a more growling voice, "Prepare a boat for Kobe. He wants to join the Marines, so stay out of his way." Scene break. "You actually ate the Chimera fruit? That's amazing," said Kobe as he and Luffy set sail on a small skiff, courtesy of the Iron Mace pirates. After getting over his initial shock, Kobe started to bombard Luffy with questions from his powers to what he plans to do in order to become the Pirate King. To the pink-haired boy's surprise, he found that their current destination was to recruit the famous pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro from the next town where Kobe plans to sign up for the Marines. Kobe started rapidly telling Luffy why that would be a bad idea, but Luffy just simply laughed it off as they sailed into the horizon. Chapter 3. In a galaxy far, far away. Oops, my bad. On a small boat somewhere in the East Blue, we find Luffy and Kobe a few days after the Alvida incident, sailing towards the topic of the 2 boys' conversation, one infamous pirate hunter, Roronoa Zoro. Kobe was fervently telling Luffy why it would be a bad idea to recruit the swordsman due to his reputation as a monster and bloodthirsty hound, but Luffy decided to see him first before deciding whether or not to have the hunter join his crew, much to Kobe's dismay. Shortly afterwards, the duo find themselves on an island with the local marine base in the center of town. Luffy congratulated Kobe on finding land so fast, while the former cabin boy tried to explain to the future Pirate King that he needed to understand the basics of navigation, or at least find a navigator, if he planned to sail the seas. Luffy's response was to completely ignore him and look for food, as we soon discover is pretty much habitual of Luffy. After a quick, by Luffy's standards, meal at a local inn, Luffy and Kobe prepare to part ways when Luffy again brings up searching for Zoro. The response from the other customers at the inn was simultaneous as they all suddenly jumped up, ran to the other side of the room, and stared at Luffy and Kobe like they had the plague. Kobe, trying to change the subject, mentioned to Luffy how he noticed that the marine base was ran by a captain named Morgan. It was by some strange workings in the universe that each and every one of the inn's patrons jumped into the air, flipping tables and sending tableware flying everywhere while striking poses like a model having a stroke. After observing the odd, to say the least, behavior of the townsfolk, Luffy and Kobe paid their bill and quickly exited the inn while discussing what the heck just happened. Luffy seemed to be under the impression that Captain Morgan Rump was not liked by the townsfolk, while Kobe, in his slightly delusional state of mind, seemed to think that it was impossible for a marine to do wrong. After walking a ways, the Chimera boy and the hopeful marine made it to the front of the base, which just screamed, "Do not enter." Luffy quickly climbed to the top of the surrounding wall while looking for Zoro. In the middle of the courtyard hung a figure on a cross with his arms bound by rope. The figure revealed to be a man only a few years older than Luffy, with a black bandana on top of his short, curiously green-colored hair. The man had on a plain white t-shirt and black pants on with a sash wrapped around his waist. The man had a look on his face that said, "Annoy me and I'll kill you before you can blink." Kobe, after much freaking out, identified the man as Roronoa Zoro. Zoro spotted the two and tried to talk them into untying him. Luffy, of course, was all for it while Kobe, also of course, was highly against it. The argument between the two was interrupted when a ladder suddenly was placed on the wall near both boys and a small girl climbed up while making shushing sounds to the duo. The girl quickly ran up to Zoro and offered him 2 rice balls which Zoro denied, stating he wasn't hungry, even though it had been weeks since his last meal, and tried to get the girl to leave. Suddenly one of the gates opened to reveal a boy around Kobe's age with the face of a pug with a helmet-shaped haircut and dressed in a suit that made him look like a pimp. The boy was flanked by several Marines and was revealed to be Captain Morgan's son, Helmeppo. After berating Zoro for picking on little kids, Helmeppo saw the food the girl was offering Zoro. "Look, here are some tasty rice balls." Helmeppo then snatched up one of the rice balls and took a bite before spitting it out and telling the girl off for having put sugar in the place of salt, before grabbing the other rice ball and stomping it into the ground. The girl started tearing up over her now crushed rice balls, but immediately froze when Helmeppo stated the law that Morgan had placed, being that any who aid criminals will be executed. The spoiled brat then turned to one of the Marines and ordered him to throw the girl over the fence and threatened to tell his father if a Marine didn't comply. The man walked over to the girl and apologized before suggesting that she curl up into a ball to prevent too much damage. Luffy quickly caught the falling girl as she was thrown out of the base. The Ball Cut team congratulated Zoro on his endurance and reminded him of their deal where he had to stay tied up with no food for 1 month and he would then be a free man. When the boy left, Zoro looked up to see Luffy standing in front of him. "So, I hear you're a bad guy." "Didn't I tell you to get lost?" Zoro said in a voice that would make most men run for the hills. "You're out here in the open with what to show for it. Are you really as strong as people say?" Luffy continued to question the pirate hunter. "What's that got to do with you anyways?" asked an annoyed Zoro. "You know, if that were me, I'd have probably starved by now." Luffy was grinning by now. "Well, I have way more fortitude than you ever have, which exactly why I'm not going to die." The pirate hunter smirked and watched as Luffy turned to leave before calling out, "Wait up. That rice ball, would you pick it up for me?" Luffy bent down and picked up the crushed rice ball and commented that it was little more than a ball of mud. "Just shut up and give it to me." Zoro spat out before swallowing what was left of the rice ball with a look that made it seem like he would barf and said, "Would you tell that little girl?" The rice ball was delicious, much to Luffy's amusement and pleasure, since he had just found the perfect first mate. Luffy left the square and returned to Kobe and the little girl, whose name was Rika, and then retold to them exactly what Zoro had said. Kobe started to wonder whether Zoro was actually a bad guy, only to be berated by Rika, who then explained the reason that Zoro was tied up, being that he had sacrificed himself for the sake of Rika and her mother by killing Helmeppo's pet wolf that the boy let run loose and almost killed the girl. When Rika had finished recounting how Zoro ended up tied to the stake, a crash was heard from the street behind them. Turning around to see what had caused the ruckus, Luffy, Kobe and Rika saw the one known as Helmeppo, the captain's son, cockily strutting down the street and having all the townspeople bow to him on threat of telling his father. The helmet-haired boy then started spouting of his gripes of boredom, even suggesting that to help clear that boredom he could execute Zoro. Hearing the captain's son speak of potentially killing Zoro, Luffy walked over to the boy and spoke to him. "Did I hear you were going to execute that pirate hunter in the crucifixion yard?" Helmeppo laughed and, puffing out his cheeks in a mocking manner, then stated that he never had any plans to do otherwise, and before he could finish his sentence beyond that, Luffy backhanded him like the pimp the other boy dressed as, much to the shock of the crowd. Helmeppo pulled himself up with the help of his guards, crying out in pain. You hit me," Helmeppo screamed while holding his face, but pulled himself together enough to blurt out, "My father is Captain Morgan." Luffy's glare hardened. "Like I care. If you want to fight, fight me yourself." The boy scampered away and called out before leaving, "You'll care when he executes you." Luffy then declared that he would make Zoro his crewmate before storming off to the marine base with Kobe in tow. Back at the crucifixion yard, Zoro was startled awake by the sudden presence of Luffy. "Oh, it's you again. What are you doing here this time?" Luffy looked at the pirate hunter and grinned. "I figure I'll get you out of those bindings and then you can join my pirate crew. I'm currently looking for members to join me." Zoro scoffed at the proposition. "Forget it, I'll never stoop that low to join with a criminal." Luffy looked at the man with a bemused expression. "But you're already known as a bloodthirsty demon of a bounty hunter, aren't you?" "Who cares what they think? The point is that I have never once done anything that I regret. I will survive these next 10 days, after that I'll do what I set out to achieve." Luffy's expression became completely blank for only a few moments, and only changed when Luffy up and declared that Zoro would be a part of his crew, despite Zoro's obvious complaints. "I've heard you could be the best swordsman in these parts." Zoro's complaints died. "Well yeah, but that idiot captain's son took my swords away, and he's keeping them in that base over there." Luffy looked at the base in question and turned back to Zoro. "I can go and get them for you, but if I do then you'll have to join my crew." And to this, Zoro exclaimed his annoyance once more with the young captain's disregard for his refusal, while Luffy simply laughed and sped off to the main building. Meanwhile, on top of said building, a group of Marines was lifting up a giant statue of Captain Axehand Morgan while Helmeppo was trying to convince the man himself to go after Luffy for hitting him. He had little success on the matter, because as it turns out the only reason Morgan never hit his son was because he was too worthless to hit, which he exclaimed as he punched Helmeppo square in the face. Morgan was revealed to be a tall muscular man with metal plating covering his lower jaw and a huge axe attached to where his right arm should be. Large statue plus large weapon equals overcompensating much, and had a marine jacket covering most of his body. He is shown to be incredibly cruel and narcissistic when, after he attacks a marine for refusing to execute Rika, he boasts on how his rank makes him the most powerful one on the island, and the statue would help symbolize that fact. Meanwhile, Luffy found himself to be incredibly lost before he noticed noises coming from the top of the marine base. Thinking there was someone there who he could ask for directions, Luffy took on a look of concentration. Suddenly, his legs morphed into the legs of a cricket and, backing up a little bit, gave a cry of "cricket hopper," jumped high enough that he reached the roof of the building. Unfortunately, Luffy underestimated his jump and started to go over the building. Fortunately, there was a large statue, that he was able to grab onto to stop his ascent. This caused the symbol of vanity to topple over and shatter to 1,000 pieces, much to Morgan's horror and everyone else's shock. Sorry, came Luffy's weak apology. Capture him, I'm gonna kill him, screamed the captain, with the Marines hurriedly complying. Before the Marines could grab him, Luffy grabbed Helmeppo and dragged him off to find Zoro's swords. The Marines were about to give chase when they noticed Kobe in the courtyard trying to free Zoro from his bonds, which Morgan quickly ordered them to be executed. Down in the courtyard, Zoro was trying to tell Kobe to run away, but he replied, "You shouldn't be arrested. I can't stand those kinds of Marines, that's why I'm going to become a real Marine." Just like Luffy is determined to become the Pirate King, much to Zoro's shock. Suddenly, a bullet grazed Kobe's shoulder as it was shot from the base's tower. Meanwhile, Luffy was dragging Helmeppo through the base by his neck while demanding to know where Zoro's swords are. Helmeppo finally gasped out they were in his room and directed Luffy did. Back at the courtyard, Zoro tried getting the injured Kobe to run away, but Kobe refused and told Zoro about his planned execution, stating the Marines never intended on freeing him. Suddenly they were surrounded by Marines with their rifles pointed at them and ordering them not to move. It was at that moment Luffy discovered Zoro's katana and noticed the commotion outside. It looked like this was the end for Zoro and Kobe as Morgan ordered his men to fire. Zoro thought that he couldn't die here and remembered his promise to Kuina, his deceased childhood friend and rival, to become the best swordsman in the world. Just as the Marines opened fire, Luffy appeared before Zoro and Kobe, knife drawn, deflecting the bullets with ease. Everyone stared at the straw hat wearing boy in shock as he batted the bullets aside like one would swat at insects. Zoro was wide-eyed by the show of seemingly impossible blade work. Who are you? Luffy turned to face Zoro, his grin never having left his face. My name is Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm going to be king of the pirates. Zoro scoffed at the idea, but Kobe piped up in defense of Luffy's dream, stating that he didn't believe at first either, but Luffy's complete determination was what convinced him. On Luffy's back were 3 swords. He took them off and presented them to Zoro. You know, I found all of these in the same place, but I couldn't tell which was yours, so I took them all. They're all mine. I use a style called Santoryu, and it uses 3 swords. Zoro said calmly while struggling in his bindings. Luffy pushed the swords towards again and reiterated, look, just take them, but just remember that if you do, then you'll have defied the government and will be a criminal. I mean, you could choose to just stay there and be executed as well if you want. Zoro smirked. You're a jerk, you know that, because I either choose to side with you or I die here on these sticks. So let's do this. Luffy started pulling on the ropes, but Zoro just told him to place one of the katana in his mouth. Placing one of the swords in Zoro's mouth, Luffy stood back and watched as in moments, the swordsman freed himself, drew all of his swords and then proceeded to block a group of 8 Marines as they all attempted to attack at the same time. Move an inch, and I'll cut you down. Zoro glared at the Marines despite his back being to them. Looking up, Zoro addressed Luffy, alright, since I'm now a criminal for having fought the Marines, so I'll become a pirate, but I'll be out to accomplish my goal and you are never to forget that. Luffy asked what his goal was and Zoro just smirked, to be nothing less than the greatest swordsman this world has to offer. So if I have to give that up along the way, I'll cut you down before making you apologies to me. The world's greatest swordsman, hey, sounds nice, and the king of the pirates would have nothing less than the best on his crew. Luffy grinned at the response that Zoro gave. From this point onward, criminal or not, my name will be known throughout the world. Zoro's last statement was then followed by Morgan's demanding that the Marines kill the 3 people in the yard, being Luffy, Zoro and Kobe. Luffy grinned at this and said, let's get wild. Before the Marines or his 2 companions could blink, Luffy sped off towards the Marines with his body starting to shift. Where once stood a young teen now ran a large, humanoid cat with black spots. Luffy had turned into a cheetah man. The people in the courtyard heard a cry of, cheetah barrage. In seconds the Marines found themselves on the ground with either the wind knocked out of them or completely out cold with lumps on the back of their heads. The only Marine left standing was Morgan as he observed the scene with wide eyes. Luffy suddenly appeared between the captain and his friends, shrinking down into his human form. A gaping Zoro managed to sputter, what the heck are you? To which Luffy happily replied, I'm a Chimera man. The recent displays of strength made the still conscious Marines question their ability to overcome the 2 pirates. Morgan's expression darkened and he immediately ordered every Marine who spouted out weakness to shoot themselves in the head. Zoro braced himself for a fight, but Luffy dashed forward, through the Marines, and slashed at Morgan himself with his knife, only to be blocked by the giant axe head that was in place of his right hand. You pathetic and reckless punks, how dare you defy me? First I'm the Marine captain, axe hand Morgan. As he said this, Morgan took off his captain's coat. Hi, my name's Luffy. Luffy stood, completely unaffected by Morgan's attempt at intimidation. When Luffy had finished talking, Morgan rushed the teen with a sideways swipe which Luffy jumped over. Turning around to face his opponent, Morgan then brought his axe hand down which split the earth, but once more, Luffy had leapt safely into the air. While airborne, Luffy sheathed his blade and suddenly shifted his legs to that of a mule and with a cry of donkey drop kick, kicked Morgan straight in the face, knocking the captain off his feet. Getting back onto his feet, Morgan saw that Luffy was running towards him again, and lifted his axe hand into air once more to bring down on the teen pirate, bellowing out a cry for the teen's death. To the shock and surprise of everyone present, Luffy's lower body shifted into a snake's tail and he twisted out of Morgan's attack and belting the Marine with his tail back down onto his back. Luffy shifted back to normal and walked over to the downed man, lifted him by the scruff of his shirt, and started to punch him over and over for having ruined Kobe's dream by soiling the name of the Marines. Hold it, Straw Hat, look at what I've got. Helmeppo's shrill voice cut over the sounds of Luffy's punching. When he realized that he wasn't getting the result he had originally desired, he continued calling out. Helmeppo was currently holding a gun to Kobe's head and his limbs were all shaking with nerves. Eventually Luffy stopped punching the Marine captain and looked over at Helmeppo and Kobe, and then Kobe called out and told Luffy not to worry, even if he should have died. Of course, so what will you do now, helmet head? Luffy was grinning as he walked away from Morgan's prone body and then shifting back into his hybrid cheetah form, grinning a Cheshire cat smile. As he was walking away, Morgan rose from the ground and attempted to cut down the teen pirate captain one more time. Zoro noticed Morgan's movement and readied his swords before moving close enough to help Luffy should it be necessary. Cheetah blitz, Luffy said under his breath, and moments later, Helmeppo's head snapped back and he then collapsed on the ground, completely unconscious with Luffy standing where the brat once stood. Behind Luffy, Morgan wasn't in much better shape as he fell back completely unconscious from Zoro's attack. Luffy became human again before he turned to the swordsman and thanked him, only to be told by Zoro that he was just doing his job. Luffy and Zoro turned to the Marines and put out a challenge to what had just happened. The two pirates were surprised when the Marines then tossed their hats, guns and swords into the air while spouting off that they were free from the corrupt captain. Later, both Zoro and Luffy were enjoying a lunch in the bar that the Rika's mother worked in and Zoro started to question his captain. So Luffy, you said that you were looking for crew members, how many do you have so far? Still with food in his mouth, Luffy just pointed at Zoro who gawked at the prospect, then please tell me you at least have a ship. At this, the Chimera boy pointed to the docks that could be seen from the window in one of the dinghies there. Don't worry so much about the ship for the moment, with just the two of us that will be perfect, for now. Luffy attempted to calm the swordsman from stressing out. We may not have much now, but things will work out to our favor in the end, we just need to be patient. Rika asked Luffy where they would be going when they left town. Well, I figure that we'll just sail around until we pick up a navigator and a bigger ship before heading to the Grand Line. Chapter 4. We find Luffy with his first and so far only crewmate Zoro on their dingy a few days after the Morgan incident planning their next move. Ah, so hungry, moaned Luffy. Well, planning in the terms of two knuckleheads that is. Zoro started to berate Luffy for his lack of navigation skills, hypocritical much. While Luffy just said he was just wandering and asked Zoro if that was what he did as a pirate hunter. As it turns out, Zoro had left his home to find a certain man and had gotten lost, so the pirate hunting was just to pay for his travels, again, hypocritical much. This led to a brief argument between captain and crew member before both collapsed on the floor of the boat with growling stomachs. They suddenly saw the shape of a bird fly overhead in the distance and Luffy got a clever, for him, idea on catching the bird to eat. Spreading out his arms which started to sprout feathers, Luffy suddenly turned into a full-blown red-tailed hawk and flew up to the bird. The problem was that the bird was a lot bigger up close and was able to snag the smaller bird boy up in its beak and started to fly off. Luffy quickly changed back into his human form but found his head still caught in the bird's beak. Normally someone with Luffy's powers would just transform into something too big for the bird to eat, but since Luffy is kind of a moron and also still wanted to catch the bird to eat, that thought did not cross his mind. Zoro in a panic started frantically rowing after his bird-jacked captain. Soon Luffy found himself being carried to an island with a bizarre, circus-themed ship docked at the harbor when suddenly a cannonball was fired, hitting the bird who was carrying him and caused him to crash into the town below. Unknown to Luffy, he just crashed next to a trio of pirates who were chasing an attractive girl around Luffy's age with orange-red hair and wore a t-shirt with a short skirt. The reason for the chase was that the young woman had stolen a map from the pirates that led to the Grand Line, and the pirates had to return it before their captain found out and killed them. As Luffy pulled himself up from the small crater his fall created and was wondering where the heck he was, the young girl suddenly started calling him boss and said she'd leave the rest to him, before running off. Luffy was trying to figure out what was going on, completely oblivious to the three pirates coming up behind him. 5 seconds later the three thugs found themselves with their faces planted in the ground courtesy of Luffy when one of said thugs knocked off his straw hat with a punch. Luffy turned and saw the girl from earlier sitting on the roof of a nearby building who introduced herself as Nami and was a thief who stole from pirates. She then asked if the pirate captain wanted to partner up with her. To which Luffy flatly refused before walking away. Nami quickly jumped off the roof she was on and followed the young captain asking him about why he got so mad at the pirates for touching his hat, to which Luffy replied, "It's my treasure." Nami took Luffy into one of the nearby deserted houses while Luffy told the pirate thief on how he was separated from his crew. Name in turn told Luffy on how all the houses were abandoned thanks to the town being overrun by pirates led by the fierce pirate captain Buggy the Clown. She explained on how Buggy was a cannon-happy maniac who once destroyed a town due to some local children making fun of his nose, and how it's said that he has devil fruit abilities. Luffy then asked Nami if she would rob the empty town, to which she flatly replied no, saying she only stole from pirates and hoped to gain 100 million berry in order to buy a certain village. She then explained how she would use the map she stole from the Buggy pirates in order to find the Grand Line and get the money from pirates there. Nami then repeated her offer on the two partnering together in order to gain Buggy's treasure. Luffy, using his head for once, asked the redhead if she knew about navigation, to which she replied, "Of course I know. Don't look down on me because as for navigation skills, well, there aren't a lot of people who know more about it than I do. Especially since I love the sea." Luffy gave a whoop of joy and told Nami that his crew was heading to the Grand Line and asked her if she would join his pirate crew, idiot. To which Nami got a dark look on her face and said there was no way that she would join up with pirates. She then asked if his hat contained a map to his treasure and Luffy explained on how the hat was a gift from a friend that symbolized his promise to become a great pirate captain with the best crew on the ocean. Nami then told Luffy flatly that she hated pirates and the only thing she loved was money and tangerines. Luffy then asked again if she would join his crew, to which Nami was again about to reject but then gave a mischievous smirk. Nami then told the Chimera captain that she would join his crew, on the condition that he went with her to where Buggy is. Luffy, being none the wiser, quickly agreed and started to walk off, not noticing Nami grabbing a long rope and sneaking up behind him. Scene break. Buggy the Clown was a man in his mid-30s and wore a colorful orange striped shirt with an elaborate captain's hat that had tassels on it over his bluish hair, as well as a large red cape strung over his shoulders. He had crossbones tattooed on his face and red lipstick on, giving him the appearance of a clown dressed as a pirate, but his most distinguishing feature was the red bulbous nose on his face that made him look even more clown-like. He was about to execute the 3 pirates that failed to capture Nami when another of his crew members came up to him and informed him that the map thief had returned on her own. Nami then walked in with a hog-tied Luffy and proceeded to tell the clown captain that she was tired of working for Luffy and was wanting to join the buggy pirates, to which everyone present stared at her in wide-eyed disbelief before the circus-themed pirates broke down in laughter before throwing Luffy, still hog-tied, in a cage and welcomed their newest crewmate with an elaborate party. Everyone, minus Luffy, seemed to be having a great time. Nami was drinking her new crewmates under the table while having a mischievous grin on her face, thinking she'd be able to rob the buggy pirates blind when they all fall into a drunken slumber. Meanwhile, our favorite pirate captain, who doesn't have a ridiculous large red nose, author dodges cannonball fired at by Buggy, was trying to bite his way through the bars. One would wonder why Luffy didn't just change into a smaller animal like a mouse to escape. Well, it could be that he didn't want to reveal his abilities to a room full of enemy pirates that could easily kill him while he's vulnerable, or the more likely scenario is that the thought never even crossed his mind. As Luffy was running up his future dentist bill, Nami walked over and playfully asked her, Captain, how he was doing. Luffy had a few choice words to say to the redhead, involving yelling at her to get him out and asking if she could bring him some food since he was still hungry. Nami brought the boy a mouthful of food which he quickly devoured, and Luffy's mood instantly shifted to cheerful and asked the girl if she'd become their navigator again. After heatedly denying that offer, Nami told the Chimera captain that if all went well she might free him after she stole the other pirate's treasure. Suddenly, Buggy stood up and announced it was time to punish Luffy for his part in stealing the map. After asking Luffy if he had any last requests, to which Luffy asked to be let go, got shot down in record time, the clown captain ordered his men to prepare the special Buggy ball. The crew brought forth a cannon and a strange red cannon ball with the ship's Jolly Roger painted on the front. Buggy decided to give his captive and new crewmate a demonstration of his power and had the now loaded cannon aimed at a row of nearby houses. As soon as the cannon was fired, the entire row of houses was reduced to a smoldering pile of splinters. Satisfied that he had his audience's attention, Buggy aimed the cannon at the still captured Luffy and ordered Nami to light the fuse to prove her loyalty by blowing away her old boss. Nami tried to look for a way out of her current predicament because, while she hated pirates and was a thief, she was no murderer. Seeing the girl's dilemma, Luffy told the cat burglar that she made an oath and now she had to find the courage to stand by it. Before Nami could think on what she should do, the matchbox was yanked out of her hands by a member of the crew who was becoming impatient with her lack of action and moved to light the match himself. Before the fire touched the fuse of the cannon, Nami pulled out a collapsible staff and smashed the pirate in the face before she could contemplate the consequences of her actions. As the buggy pirate stared in shock and anger, Nami declared that she'd never stoop to a pirate's level and said that a pirate took someone precious from her. Luffy commented on how that's why she didn't like pirates. The young captain then noticed that the fuse on the cannon pointed at his cage was lit and proceeded to bite at the bars with a greater ferocity. As the fuse got smaller, Buggy ordered his men to kill the backstabbing thief, to which they circus-themed crew immediately rushed over to do. Nami tried keeping the attacking pirates at bay with a swing of her staff, but the pirates used acrobatic moves to dodge the strike. Nami noticed the almost completely burnt fuse and ran over, grabbing it with her bare hands in hopes of stopping the cannon from firing. Then 4 pirates tried to jump her unprotected back, but a figure suddenly appeared and smashed the incoming pirates in the face with 2 of his sheathed swords, asking them how many pirates it took to fight one girl. Luffy noticed who the stranger was and happily cried, Zoro. As Nami and the buggy pirates realized that the newcomer was the infamous pirate hunter Zoro, the swordsman walked over to the cage his captain was locked in while berating him for being reckless. Buggy then appeared next to the green-haired pirate and asked if he was after his head, but Zoro said his pirate hunting days were done. Buggy then declared that killing the recently turned pirate would make him even more famous and proceeded to charge at him with knives. Zoro proceeded to cut the man into 3 pieces to the shock of Luffy and Nami and to the growing amusement of the buggy pirates. The circus crew members proceeded to chuckle darkly while the Straw Hat crew demanded the key before breaking out into laughter. Suddenly, Zoro stiffened as it was revealed that a knife was lodged into his back by a floating hand. The pieces of Buggy started to float into the air and smugly told the shocked teens that he ate the chop fruit, so no matter how much he's sliced to pieces he can't be killed. Just as Buggy moved to finish off the downed swordsman, Luffy said a taboo, stabbing someone in the back is dirty, you big-nosed creep. WHO are you calling big-nosed? Screamed Buggy as he shot his hand holding a knife straight into Luffy's face. To the shock of all those present, Luffy was able to catch the knife with his teeth and broke the blade in half. Elsewhere in the world, all the dentists out there gained a strange gleam in their eyes and declared that he'd clobber the nose-sensitive pirate. Luffy then told Zoro to run away, and Zoro, understanding what his captain wanted, ran to the cannon while blocking Buggy's knives thrown his way and was able to flip the cannon so it pointed directly at the buggy pirates. Nami was then able to light the much shorter fuse and a portion of the roof they were on was blown away in the ensuing blast. Zoro ran over to Luffy's cage and was about to lift it up to carry him away when a thought suddenly struck him. Hey Luffy, he asked with a steadily increasing twitch to his eyebrow, couldn't you just turn into a smaller animal like a mouse to escape from there? Luffy looked confused for a moment before gaining an aha face while Zoro face-palmed while muttering, idiot. Luffy quickly shrunk down while gaining whiskers, rounded ears, and a tail before disappearing into the ropes that bound him. A mouse wearing a shrunken version of Luffy's outfit scurried out of the cage before shooting back up to human form. Luckily nobody but Zoro noticed the change as the roof was still covered from smoke due to the previous explosion. The 2 pirates grabbed their future navigator as she tried to see through the smoke and quickly bolted into the town. The trio stopped a few blocks away due to Zoro needing to rest his wounded body. They found themselves in front of a pet shop with a white dog with old battle wounds standing guard out front. Zoro sat down for a rest while Luffy was investigating the dog to see why it wasn't moving, only to get bit in the face after poking the dog in the eyes. Nami meanwhile was trying to figure out both why Zoro risked himself for Luffy. She thought all pirates were greedy and cowardly by nature and wouldn't hesitate to abandon a crewmate, and how Luffy was able to escape from his cage so easily. Luffy was and the dog were wrestling on the ground when an elderly man with a poodle-like haircut wearing glasses and armor while carrying a spear came along and demanded the boy to stop pestering the dog, whose name turned out to be Cho-Cho. The old man introduced himself as Boodle, the mayor of the town they were in. After allowing Zoro to rest and recover from his injuries in home, the mayor proceeded to feed the guard dog and proceeded to explain why the dog was standing guard like that. Boodle explained that the store was opened 10 years ago by his friend who was Cho-Chow's owner, however the man passed away several months ago and the dog had been guarding the store ever since. Despite popular belief that the dog was waiting for his owner to return, the mayor claimed that Cho-Cho most likely knew his owner was dead and he was guarding the store because it was his owner's, and now his, treasure. Suddenly, a terrifying roar went through the village. Panicked, Boodle exclaimed that it was Moji the animal tamer and first mate of the buggy pirates. Nami and Boodle quickly hid behind a house down the street before noticing Luffy wasn't with them. They soon spotted the straw hat wearing boy standing where they were at moments ago with a confused look on his face. Before they could run back to grab him and or hit him over the head for his stupidity, a man riding a large lion came into view. The man himself seemed to have white fur covering his chest and head that formed rounded ears on the top while wearing shoes with similar fur on them. The man stood directly in front of Luffy and introduced himself as Moji the animal tamer before mocking the boy on how it looks like his friends abandoned him after their escape. Luffy simply commented that the man was wearing a weird hat, to which said man angrily pointed out was his hair. Luffy just said that was weirder, to which the man told him to shut up. Moji tried to intimidate the boy by saying he could control all manner of animals and proceeded to try to get Cho-Cho to shake his hand only to receive a bite on the arm for his troubles. The man proceeded to demand that Luffy tells him where Zoro was and Luffy immediately said no way to. The lion, named Richie, jumped at the boy who swiftly dodged only to be smacked through several buildings by Richie's paw. Moji was about to continue his hunt for Zoro when Richie went in the direction of the pet food store with Cho-Cho growling dangerously. With Luffy he quickly recovered from his ordeal having being hit worse by his grandpa and proceeded to smile toothily while saying he'd clobber the animal trainer before asking Nami if she'd be their navigator again. After meeting up with Nami and Boodle, who were both incredibly shocked to see he was largely unhurt after going through buildings via giant cat punch, the trio came upon a heart-wrenching sight. Cho-Cho the dog was giving mournful barks as the store he guarded burned. Regardless of the fresh claw wounds on his white fur, you could tell by the tears falling from the dog's eyes that it wasn't the physical pain that hurt so much. Luffy stared at the scene while remembering the old mayor's explanation on how the store was the dog's treasure with a dark shadow on his face. Moji was riding on top of Richie nursing a dog bite wound to the arm while the oversized lion munched on a battered box of pet food they stole from the store before setting it ablaze, receiving minor resistance from the little guard dog. As the duo continued their search for Zoro they came upon a startling sight. The straw hat wearing brat that Richie sent flying earlier was standing unhurt in their path. After getting over his initial shock, Moji sent Richie to try and tear the boy's head off. Luffy, however, just smirked and said, "Let me show you how a real lion fights." To both the lion and tamer's shock, the boy in front of them started to grow till he towered over Richie while growing a large mane of black fur as well as razor-sharp teeth and claws. The now human-lion hybrid let off a terrifying roar that shattered a few nearby windows and grabbed the other lion under the front legs while lifting it up into the air. Lion pile driver. The Chimera boy roared as he planted the still shocked Richie headfirst into the ground, knocking him unconscious. The now terrified animal tamer stuttered out, "What the heck are you freak?" The now lion-like boy stalked over to where the petrified pirate was rooted to the spot while cracking his knuckles and explained, "Long ago I ate the Chimera-Chimera Fruit, now I'm an animal man." Moji tried apologizing to the approaching lion man and said he'd pay whatever he wanted. Luffy was having none of that and growled out, "I don't want your apology or your money, because that won't bring back Cho-Chow's treasure." He gained a dangerous glint in his cat-slit eyes and roared out, "I came back to clobber you." With that he reared back his fist and punched Moji straight in the face, sending the man into blissful unconsciousness with his pet. Nami and Boodle stood watching over Cho-Cho as he stared at the smoldering remains of the pet store. Nami commented on how all pirates were the same and didn't care on who they hurt. She then noticed Luffy, back in human form, walking up and started to rant against him about how this was how pirates acted and how he was no different. The straw hat wearing captain ignored the girl and walked up in front of the dog, placing a battered box of pet food in front of him. The pirate then apologized to the dog that he couldn't bring the rest of his treasure back but congratulated him on how hard he must have fought. The dog picked up the box and started to walk away but turned around and started barking what had to be a thank you. Nami meanwhile was busy pulling her foot from her mouth as she watched the pirate do the selfless deed. She went over to apologize to the captain about her outburst when suddenly the mayor started yelling how he couldn't stand living in fear of the buggy pirates anymore and how he was going to fight them now and protect his treasure, the village they worked so hard to build. Suddenly, all the houses on the block they were on were blown away thanks to buggy balls. Zoro suddenly sat up from the wreckage that was once the mayor's house saying that was one heck of an alarm clock. The chief then started to run off in the direction of the buggy pirates and said Eve. Chapter 5. Luffy, Zoro, and Nami were sailing on their two small dinghies a few days after the buggy incident. Nami had graciously fixed Luffy's hat from the knife slashes that Buggy gave it and the animal boy couldn't be happier. Soon though both of the boys' growling stomachs told them it was time to eat, however there was barely a loaf of bread to share between the two small ships. Luffy then noticed an island in the distance and decided it would be the perfect opportunity for a new adventure. Luffy quickly steered the boat towards the seemingly deserted island, despite Nami's protests. Once they landed, Luffy quickly jumped out and observed the heavily forested island. Nami reluctantly followed while Zoro went back to sleep. Once the duo reached the forest they noticed some really strange animals like a fox with roster-like characteristics, a snake with white fur and rabbit ears, and a pig with a lion's mane. Unknown to Nami, Luffy was studying the animals intently. You see, while Luffy might have the mental maturity of an 11-year-old on a sugar rush, he was quite clever in two aspects, fighting and animals. After obtaining his powers from the Chimera-Chimera Fruit, he started looking through all sorts of animal books to see different kinds of animals, both real and mythical, to figure out different forms he could take as well as different attacks. He also studied the animals he's seen on the island he grew up in and in the forest his grandfather threw him in as a child to get more ideas. So, whenever Luffy finds new types of animals, he is always sure to study them intently so he can become a more effective fighter. Suddenly, a voice boomed out from seemingly everywhere demanded, "Don't come any closer. Get out. I am the guardian of the forest and I demand you leave or face the judgment of the forest." Luffy let his curiosity get the better of him and, ignoring the voice, walked deeper into the forest. Suddenly, the Straw Hat Captain felt his instincts go crazy and, quickly morphing into a kangaroo, jumped out of the way of a bullet fired at his back. The voice sounded again but it was more shocked than anything else. "Huh. What kind of being are you?" Nami noticed where the shot came from and tracked it to what appeared to be a large green bush sticking out of a chest with a smoking pistol still in front of it. The two stared at it for a minute while the bush seemed to sweat nervously before a pair of feet came from the bottom of the chest and started to run off before tripping a few feet away. Suddenly, a man's head popped out of the chest and it was revealed that the bush was actually the man's hair. The man yelled for help while the two teens watched with sweat drops on the back of their heads. After helping the shrub-like man, whose name is Gaiman, onto his feet the trio started talking. As it turns out, Gaiman had arrived on the island 20 years ago as a member of a pirate crew and had gotten stuck in the chest after finding a multitude of treasure chests on the top of an extremely tall plateau and was left behind by his crewmates. The man then asked Luffy if he himself had any treasure maps and Luffy explained his map and his dream of going to the Grand Line. Gaiman warned the duo about pirates he'd seen who came back from the Grand Line and how they were shadows of their former selves. Gaiman then explained that he stayed on the island and used the guardian of the forest routine to scare away visitors who might try to steal the treasure on the top of the plateau. The Straw Hat Pirates were taken to the plateau and Luffy offered to retrieve the treasure for the castaway. Quickly changing himself into a hummingbird, Luffy darted to the top of the plateau and eventually called down that he found the chests, but he wasn't going to bring them down. While Nami started berating her new captain, Gaiman started crying tears of relief, joy, and grief all at once. He understood now that the chests that he'd wanted so long for were empty. Luffy decided to ask the wild man if he would join their crew, in order to make up for the severe disappointment. Gaiman, however, declined, stating that he'd grown fond of the island and its exotic animals over the years, and people had come to try and collect the animals as pets. He said he felt it was his duty to guard the animals that had been his friends for 20 years. So, after being given supplies by Gaiman, the Straw Hats set sail onto their next adventure, with Gaiman and the animals waving goodbye on the mysterious island. Zoro having slept through the whole thing. Scene break. Nami and Luffy were on the decks of their small dinghies debating on what they should do next before heading to the Grand Line. Luffy was busy thinking about food and Zoro gave his input about how they should have more booze on board, but Nami quickly shot down both ideas. She explained that the most important thing at the moment was finding a decent ship that could carry them to the Grand Line, as well as more crew members. They eventually landed on an island that, according to Nami, had a small village located on it. As the crew landed on the island and went to stretch, Zoro noticed 4 figures on the nearest hillside and asked out loud what they were doing, catching everyone's attention. There was some rustling from the bushes that Zoro was looking at, followed by hysterical screaming, and finally a young man around Luffy's age revealed himself to the group. The boy wore long brown overalls with a sash as a belt and had a bag slung over his shoulder. He had long dark hair with a green bandana tied on top of it, but his most distinguishing feature was the incredibly long, Pinocchio-like nose on his face. The boy laughed boisterously and proclaimed, "I am the great Captain Usopp, commander of over 1,000 ships and 80 million men. This island is under my protection, so if you plan to attack, you better leave now or face my wrath." "Liar," Nami said, not amused by the clearly bluffing boy's antics. "Crap, she saw through my lie," Usopp cried out in a panic while clutching his head and sweating bullets. Nami's sweat dropped and said, "See, I knew it. Double crap. I admitted that I lied. She's a master of deduction," exclaimed Usopp dramatically while twisting his body into odd angles while still clutching his head and sweating bullets. At this, Luffy cracked up at the other boy's antics and started laughing out loud, much to Usopp's ire. A little while later the group was taken to one of the local taverns and were engaged in conversation over a meal with Usopp, who was eager to hear about the crew's exploits. Once he found out that they were looking for crewmates in a big ship, the liar thought it sounded like the start of a great adventure. Deciding to help the pirates out, Usopp told them that their best chance for a ship on the island was to ask the local owner of a large mansion who was the wealthiest person on the island. It turns out the owner was a sickly girl who inherited her fortune from her parents after they died from disease. After hearing that, Nami said that they should look for a ship somewhere else. Usopp gained a smug look and said that, since they were looking for crewmates, he'd happily join if they let him be the captain. The crew unanimously said no to that in a deadpan voice, to which Usopp face vaulted at. Soon after, the long-nosed boy left the group to attend to personal business, and around 5 minutes later 3 kids came in calling themselves the Usopp Pirates and demanded to know where their captain was. Luffy then decided to comment on how good the meat he was eating was, and the kids, having a very morbid sense of imagination, thought that the crew had eaten their captain. Zoro didn't help matters by jokingly saying that their captain was gobbled up, causing the 3 youngsters to faint while Zoro laughed and Nami scolded the swordsman. After the Usopp Pirates regained consciousness and Nami explained that they were joking and told them that their captain had left a little while ago to attend to business. One of the kids said that the business was to go visit Kaya, the owner of the mansion, and he would tell her tall tales in order to help her feel better. After hearing that, Luffy decided that Usopp was a good person and would be someone he'd be willing to let join the crew. Luffy then thought it would be a good idea to go ask Kaya for a ship, seeing as she would feel better after visiting with Usopp. Dragging his two crewmates along, Luffy headed towards the mansion with the Usopp pirates in tow. Arriving at the mansion, Luffy loudly asked for a ship before he started to climb the gate surrounding the building. Soon the group found Usopp talking to a young girl at her window who could only be Kaya. Usopp did a double take when he noticed the group while Luffy went to Kaya and asked her if she could spare them a ship. Suddenly, a voice called out, "What are you doing here? You can't just barge onto private property like this." A man wearing glasses, stripped shoes, and a fancy suit with what looked like two golden turds attached was walking towards the gathering, and Kaya introduced the man as her butler Clawhador. The man proved to be an exact representation of the decorations on his suit, minus the gold. Clawhador told the gathered people to leave the area immediately and denied Luffy's request for a ship. He then spotted Usopp and called him a lying low-life son of pirate trash, and he should no longer bother Kaya if he was after her money. Kaya berated her butler and told him to stop insulting Usopp, but the man kept running his big yapper, and Usopp, in a fit of anger, slugged the douche square in the face. The long-nosed liar then said that he was proud to be the son of a pirate and that his father was a good man, and he would tolerate no insults towards him. Usopp then left in a huff of anger, with Luffy following close behind, not that anyone else noticed. The animal boy found Usopp on a hill overlooking the sea and went to greet him. By which I mean he climbed a nearby tree and scared the crap out of the liar by jumping down from a branch right in front of him. After the long-nosed boy recovered from his mini heart attack, the two settled down and stared out at the sea. Suddenly Luffy said, "Usopp was your dad, right? You look just like him." This got Usopp's attention and asked Luffy, "How do you know my dad?" To which he replied that he met the man when he was young because the pirate was with Shanks' crew. "He's with Shanks," came Usopp's incredulous reply. He couldn't believe his dad was with such a famous pirate captain. Luffy told Usopp on how his dad was a great marksman, able to shoot the wings off a fly at 80 paces. He also told the boy how his father would use to constantly brag about him to Luffy and how his dad missed him even though he had to heed the call of a pirate's life. This filled Usopp with pride as he told Luffy how much he admired his father, and Clawhador's biting comments really hurt his pride. The young captain asked if he'd ever go to visit Kaya again, to which Usopp said he would, but only if the jerk of a butler apologized first. They both then noticed that said jerk was on the beach below the cliff they were on, talking to a man with a disturbing resemblance to Michael Jackson, only with blonde hair and a goatee with heart-shaped sunglasses. He even dressed and did the moonwalk like the king of pop. What a rip-off. What the two heard shocked them. As it turns out, Clawhador was actually the thought-dead pirate captain, Kuro of 1,000 plans, and he, along with his first mate, Django the hypnotist, were planning to murder Kaya to get her money. They planned to have their crew, the Black Cat Pirates, attack the town, and during the confusion Django would hypnotize Kaya into write out her will and leave everything to her butler Clawhador before suffering a fatal accident. This was apparently a plan 3 years in the making when Kuro decided to quit the pirate life and went on to play the part of the loyal butler to Kaya's family. Usopp was planning to run into town to warn everyone when Luffy suddenly stood up and yelled down, "Hey, don't kill Kaya." We heard everything, while Usopp looked at him like he was the dumbest person on the planet. Unfortunately, both of them were noticed by the two conspirators, and Django pulled out a ring attached to a string. The Michael Jackson impersonator then said, "When I say, 1, 2, Django, you will fall into a deep sleep. Ready, 1, 2, Django." Luffy, who was staring directly at the ring, fell into a deep sleep and took a nosedive off the cliff, while Usopp, who was too busy panicking to look at the ring, watched in horror as the Chimera captain fell to a likely death. Django himself also fell into a deep sleep for staring too intently at the ring. After Kuro woke him up, Django asked if he should kill the other one, but the Black Cat captain said it was alright because even if Usopp told everyone, no one would believe him due to his reputation as the town's liar. Usopp ran off into town while the two pirates left the area at a leisurely pace. If any of them actually stayed to investigate, they'd notice Luffy was still alive and still sound asleep. Because of his animal-like endurance, as well as having experienced worse from his grandpa's training, the fall was just a minor inconvenience to Luffy. The straw hat-wearing boy was awoken several hours later by his crew and the Usopp pirates and told them everything that happened. Luffy then wondered how he got down the cliff and why he was sleeping while everyone else was thinking of their next course of action. The group went into town and ran into Usopp, who was bleeding from his left arm. Apparently he had tried to warn the town, but like Kuro predicted, no one believed him. What was worse was that Kaya didn't believe him either, and one of her guards shot him as he tried to convince her. After getting over the shock at seeing Luffy alive and well, Usopp then told his followers that he made the whole thing up so they wouldn't get hurt trying to back him up. He planned on stopping the pirates before they attacked so no one would know what happened and it would just be another lie to them. That was how much the boy loved his village. Admiring his courage, Luffy and his crew agreed to help the long-nosed boy defend his town. Usopp led the group to a hill that led from the beach to the town and had a narrow path that was flanked by 2 large cliffs. He told the Straw Hats that it was the main way to get to the town from the slope, so they had to defend it with their lives. The long-nosed boy asked the group what they were best at to evaluate their chances. Zoro was cutting, Luffy was shifting, and Nami was stealing. Usopp, his best skill was running and hiding, causing the group to face Vault before yelling, "You have to fight too." Usopp then got a large amount of oil and poured it down the slope and said that the best way to fight the pirates would be to prevent them from climbing the slope and attacking them from a distance. Soon the sun rose, but there was no sign of the pirates. Suddenly they heard a loud noise coming from the opposite side of the island, and Usopp realized, to his horror, that there was another identical slope to the north of the island. He figured since the pirates had their meeting at their current position that they would attack from there. The sniper then said it was a 3-minute run to the other side of the island, and Luffy took off at superhuman speeds while Nami accidentally pushed Zoro down the oil-slicked slope in her hurry to get to the other side of the island, where she realized both their ships and her treasure were at. Luffy realized that he was running the wrong way before he decided to do this the faster way and changed into a horse before galloping towards the northern slope. He met up with Zoro, Nami, and Usopp at the slope and was able to repel a wave of pirates with Zoro's help. It looked like Nami and Usopp arrived first and had already fought for a while if Usopp's wounds were anything to go by. The real fight had just begun. Chapter 6. The Straw Hat Pirates and Usopp stood at the top of the hill, staring at the vicious black cat pirates being led by Django the hypnotist. The enemy pirates all seemed to wear fake cat ears and had black eyeliner on, which you would think would make them seem comical but in reality gave them a slightly fierce look. Luffy and Zoro seemed calm if slightly out of breath from running the entire island while Usopp and Nami looked ready to pee their pants. Nami took this moment to yell at the two newly arrived teammates, "What took you two idiots so long?" Zoro seethed, "Me, you're the one who pushed me down an oil-covered hill. What are you blaming me for, huh?" Luffy meanwhile laughed sheepishly before saying, "Well, you guys didn't tell me which direction north was so." Usopp looked at the straw-hatted captain incredulously. "You're the one who ran off before I could tell you," he said in an exasperated tone. "Well, we're here now so no problem, right?" Luffy said with a carefree grin. Meanwhile, the black cat pirates Luffy and Zoro knocked down in their entrance were picking themselves up while wondering how a couple idiots were able to send them flying. Django looked at his crew with disdain and said, "Hey, you idiots couldn't have been so easily bested by one blow from those fools, are you? Get up. The longer we make Kuro wait the more likely it is he'll kill us, and I don't know about you guys but I happen to like living." Django made it a point to do various Michael Jackson-like moves while driving his point home. The hypnotist then pulled out a ring on a string, "Hey," rhymed and stated firmly, "If the opponent is strong then we must be stronger." Pulling his hat over his eyes while swinging the ring back and forth he continued, "Look at my pendulum, at 1, 2, Django, you will be strong, you will not feel any pain, and you will be unstoppable." What the man didn't realize was that a certain idiot captain was also staring at the ring as it rocked back and forth, wondering what was going on. 1, 2, Django. Django yelled. Suddenly, the wounded pirates shot up as if they were on Red Bull and Vicodin while yelling like the Incredible Hulk. One of the pirates decided to go all Mr. Universe and was able to crush a solid rock with only his hand. Things were looking bad for the Straw Hats as Zoro told Nami and Usopp to retreat while he turned to his captain. But, before Zoro could form any plans with Luffy, the captain let out a loud roar while changing into his chimera form, startling Zoro and Nami while scaring the crap out of everyone else. It was at this moment the Straw Hats noticed the blank look in Luffy's eyes and realized that the moron got himself hypnotized as well. The beastly boy gave another roar as he plowed his way through the enemy pirates and sending them all flying with at the very least a mild concussion one associates with running headfirst into a building. Usopp stared in naked shock as the boy he had befriended the other day transformed into some sort of hybrid monster and began manhandling the black cat pirates like a red-headed stepson. Django was also staring in shock and quite a bit of terror as his superpowered crew was laid out faster than a 5-year-old versus Mike Tyson. The pirates who remained conscious after the initial assault ran screaming like little girls in the opposite direction while the Chimera boy ran past and grabbed onto the cat-shaped figurehead of the black cat pirate's ship. All of the cat-like pirates watched in horror as the monster with the straw hat tore off the bow of their ship like it was a band-aid. Luffy then started to chase the scared senseless pirates while wildly swinging the bow of their ship. Thinking quickly, Django placed the rabid monster under another hypnotism that made him fall asleep. Unfortunately, the bow Luffy had been wielding fell on top of him and the majority of the black cat pirates, knocking them out while Luffy slept like a baby, a mythical beast baby that is. Django seethed at the sheer stupidity of the situation he found himself in while the Straw Hats sat back to relax. Seemed like it'd be an easy victory, right? Wrong. Everyone present and conscious heard two voices coming from the now headless ship, talking in concerned voices about the impromptu remodeling that just occurred. Django gained a smirk, at last someone who could set the plans back into action and hopefully spare him Kuro's rage. "Come on out, Mioban brothers," he shouted out. There was a burst of movement from the ship and two figures jumped to the ground below. The new figures were, odd to say the least. One of them was named Sham and he had a hunched back while wearing a shirt with a bow tie and shorts, as well as having curly green hair and slit pupils. The other was a large fat man named Butchie and he simply wore a cape with a hood on it and a cat bell with stripped shorts. Both wore cat-like gloves with claws and had cat ear-like accessories similar to the rest of the crew, except Butchie's was worn on his hood. "You called for us, Captain?" Sham asked while Butchie simply asked, "What's up?" Django jerked his thumb over his shoulder to point at the remaining Straw Hats, more specifically Zoro who was looking quite intimidating with his bandana on and sword drawn, and stated, "Butchie, Sham, we couldn't get up the slope thanks to those meddling kids." Kidding, what he actually said was, "Because those guys are blocking our way. Now go and destroy them." The two ship guardians looked over at the Straw Hats again, Zoro looking quite intimidating and suddenly shook with fear spouting crap like, "How can we beat them?" Exclamation mark quote. And, "Those guys look really strong." The Straw Hats looked at the two scaredy cats bada bing. Incredulously and wondered why in the heck Django thought they'd be a threat to the crew. Said hypnotist soon got fed up by the brothers' antics and ordered Sham to attack, which he did so reluctantly. As he charged at Zoro, the swordsman simply told him that he wasn't a match for him and that he should leave before he got himself hurt. Suddenly, Sham gave a burst of speed and was able to get into a deadlock with Zoro using his clawed gloves. "Let me guess, you thought I was a coward, right?" Sham said with a smirk, "Idiot. I was only pretending to be scared to get you to lower your guard." With that, Sham disengaged their stalemate but it soon became apparent something was wrong. Nami called out, "Zoro, your swords." With a jolt, Zoro checked his waist and noticed his other two katana were missing. Looking over, Zoro noticed in anger that Sham had swiped the two swords and placed them on his back while looking pleased at his little, cat burglar, performance. To his increasing ire, Zoro watched as Sham carelessly threw the two swords down the slope stating, "I should get this junk out of the way before the fight, huh?" Zoro charged forth with blinding speeds, seemingly cutting Sham in half but this was just a ploy. Sham's actual body was really thin so the cut only went through his clothes. Sham used the distraction to jump onto Zoro's shoulders and grabbing his arms while calling out to Butchie. The fat cat jumped high into the air over the immobile Zoro and called out, "Cat stomp," while extending his leg into a dropkick. Fortunately, Zoro was able to just barely avoid the attack, which caused cracks to appear where Butchie's foot landed. The duo started attacking Zoro with wild scratch-like attacks, which he had trouble blocking due to only having one blade. Usopp tried to help the struggling former pirate hunter by firing a lead shot from his slingshot, but Zoro blocked the shot with his body, giving an opening for Butchie and Sham to claw his chest. Nami reasoned that he did that so the pirates wouldn't make them their target if the attack had landed. The thief then decided to make a run for the discarded swords but was unfortunately spotted by Django. Using one of his rings, the hypnotist slashed Nami across her back with the ring's bladed edge. Suddenly Django, the Mioban brothers, and all of the Black Cat pirates became still while shaking in uncontrollable fear. The reason for their fear came in the form of Captain Kuro, who had just arrived and was looking extremely ticked. Kuro said in an icy voice, "It's been a while since dawn. Why haven't you attacked yet, huh Django?" The pirates cowed under their captain's harsh glare, remembering how cruel and remorseless he could be. Kuro then said condescendingly, "I wouldn't have expected the Black Cat pirates to be held up by some kids. This crew has been reduced to a truly sad state, right Django?" Said hypnotist started sweating waterfalls under his captains. "I'll kill you, look." Django sputtered, but why you told me to let that kid go? You said he wouldn't affect our plans." Kuro gave a nod and stated, "That's true, however it doesn't excuse your uselessness. I expected that brat to come after us but he cannot affect our plans." Suddenly, Butchie and Sham were finally able to overcome some of the fear they were feeling and cried out, "Don't look down on us, Captain Kuro. You said we're useless, but you've been living here in comfort for the past 3 years while we've been active this entire time. It's true you were powerful in the past, but we've never stopped attacking villages and ships." The duo continued, despite Django's attempts to warn the two. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats stared at the internal conflict, hoping it could work in their favor. The duo then leapt at Kuro screaming that they wouldn't be killed over something as stupid as a failed plan, also stating that Kuro was no longer a threat to them, allowing them to kill him. They then did a combo slash at their former captain, only to find that they only got the bag he was carrying. Kuro had moved behind the two now wearing clawed gloves, except they held katana blades at each finger, with his signature, silent step. The Mioban brothers quickly turned around only to find him missing. Kuro then was behind the duo, placing his arms around their shoulders saying, "Who were you going to kill? It's true that I may not be feeling too active, and I also may not be your captain, but as of now I'm your client. A client who can kill you if the plan fails." The Straw Hats and the Black Cats looked on in awe at Kuro's speed while Django stepped up stating, "What are you so surprised about? His silent step technique is a silent movement technique that could allow him to kill 50 assassins silently. We can't escape from his plans. You may think Kuro's gotten soft over the years but, you can tell by how he still only pushes his glasses up by the palms of his hands like he does while wearing his cat claws that he hasn't forgotten how to fight." Kuro ran the blades of his gloves over Sham and Butchie's throats while musing, "I must have gotten soft over the years because I'm feeling generous. I'll give you 5 minutes to kill these brats and if you can't get it done in that time frame, I'll kill you all." Kuro finished in a dark tone. Just as the Mioban brothers prepared to attack, Nami kicked Zoro's swords over to him, much to his ire, allowing him to properly defend himself. With his swords at hand, Zoro was easily able to KO Sham and left Butchie heavily injured. Butchie then had Django hypnotize him to increase his power, causing him to go into a berserker rage. Nami was able to get over to Luffy's sleeping form which had reverted back to human after he fell asleep while dodging Django's razor rings and kicked her captain awake right in the face. Luffy awoke with a start and turned to yell at Nami, only to receive a razor ring right to the back of the head. After pulling it out, Luffy cried out, "That hurt," with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, Nami and Usopp relaxed a bit, seeing as the battle just became much easier. After getting over the fact that he just had a sharp object literally jammed into his head, Luffy checked to see if Nami was okay after noticing her shoulder injury to which she said she'd be fine after getting the Black Cat's treasure. He then noticed with a smirk that Kuro was there, and said, "Hey, even the evil butler's here." Meanwhile, said evil butler was wondering how the heck Luffy survived falling off a cliff. It was at this time someone made a highly untimely intervention, Kaya. After trying to convince Kuro to just take her money and leave the village alone, Kuro seemed undisturbed by this event. He calmly and coldly told Kaya that it wasn't just her money that he was after, but peace of mind, and in order to obtain both peace and money, he explained that his crew needed to attack the village and she needed to die for his plans to be complete. To everyone's shock, Kaya then pulled out a pistol and pointed it straight at Kuro. After she demanded him to leave the village, Kuro decided to play dirty and shifted to his Clawhador personality, reminding Kaya of all the good times they had together, in order for Kaya to lower her guard. It was then he stated cruelly, "I've suffered taking care of you long enough. Can you imagine how I, a former pirate captain, felt by taking care of a brat like you every day for the past 3 years? It was insulting. That is why you have to die today." Suddenly, Usopp charged at Kuro with his fist cocked back for a punch. Kuro easily dodged the swing and said while smirking, "Ah yes, now that I think about it Usopp, I still owe you for the punch you gave me earlier. You really hit me hard," the vicious pirate said with a predatory look in his eyes as he slashed his clawed gloves to bifurcate the wannabe pirate. Before he could touch the liar though, Kuro was struck down by a speeding blur, much to Django's shock. The blur turned out to be Luffy, who had shifted into humanoid black and white long-legged bird that had a bushy crest and long, thick, dark bill with a long, dark tail, a dark head and back, and was blue on the front of the neck and on the belly, all while still wearing his human clothes and having feathered arms instead of wings. The humanoid roadrunner smirked as much as his beak allowed and said, "If you hate being hit, I'll make sure to hit you 100 more times." The black cats, Kaya, and Usopp openly gaped at the transformed boy, wondering just what in the heck he was, while Kuro simply glared up at the boy through his now cracked glasses. The enemy pirates were able to snap out of their shock to shudder in fear at the near-visible rage Kuro was emitting. Luffy meanwhile jumped back in preparation for a counterattack. Suddenly, a battle cry echoed through the clearing, and out of the woods popped the Usopp pirates carrying random implements like a shovel and a frying pan, and started whacking Kuro over the face like he was a whack-a-mole. Apparently they hadn't bought their leader's lie on lying about the pirate invasion and had followed Kuro to the beach when they saw him leaving the mansion. Everyone in the clearing stared in shock at the sheer gall and stupidity of the three kids while Usopp tried to tell them to run away. The trio turned to their captain, ignoring the seemingly knocked-out pirate behind them, and exclaimed, "Captain, you were fighting all this time without us. That's disloyal while it should have been dishonest. Besides, we'll fight for you till the bitter end." Suddenly, Kuro sat up like a zombie out of a horror flick while adjusting his now ruined glasses. The Usopp pirates all screamed like little girls and scooted as far as humanly possible from the man. Kuro simply stood up and calmly walked over to Usopp before savagely kicking the boy in the ribs before turning to the now transformed back Luffy. "I'm curious, just what was that attack earlier? Your entire body changed into some sort of creature. Do you perhaps possess the power of a devil's fruit?" Kuro asked. "Yep, I ate the Chimera-Chimera Fruit, now I'm an animal man," Luffy happily explained. The black cats gawked at this piece of information while Kuro simply nodded before calling out, "Django. I'll handle this kid while you go after Kaya. Make sure she writes her will and then kill her. As for the brats, they irritate me." "Got it," responded Django, who proceeded up the slope but was stopped by Zoro, who stood in his path. Annoyed, Django called out to Butchie, who did another cat stomp at Zoro, who was able to dodge, but the attack was able to shatter a good portion of the ground, thanks to Butchie's enhanced strength. Django continued up the slope while Zoro was distracted and Usopp was too injured from the beginning of the battle to move. Usopp called to his band of followers and gave them a direct order to protect Kaya, to which they promised that they would. The boys grabbed the girl and carried her off to the forest with Django in hot pursuit. Fortunately, Usopp was able to slow the hypnotist down with a well-placed shot fired from his slingshot. Kuro ordered Django to hurry up, which resulted in the man to chase after the fleeing group. Afterwards, Zoro and Luffy got ready for the fight of their lives. After about 5 seconds, Butchie was knocked out cold thanks to Zoro. "Okay, maybe not the fight of their lives," and the swordsman picked up the wounded sniper to help him save Kaya. Kuro crouched into a fighting position and asked the fleeing duo, "Who said I'd let you pass?" "I did," Luffy cheered as he rushed forward, morphing into his cheetah form as he ran in increasingly higher speeds. Kuro was just barely able to dodge the swipe Luffy made at him with his claws that snapped the tree behind the conspirator cleanly in half. "Go Zoro! Go Usopp!" Luffy cried out as he sent a series of rapid-fire swipes and punches at the former pirate captain. As the duo ran after Django and the Usopp pirates, Kuro found himself having a hard time dodging the steady stream of attacks coming from the cheetah boy. Luffy sent a swiping kick with his clawed foot that would have taken Kuro's head off if it connected, only for the villain to seemingly disappear with his silent step. If Luffy was a normal person, he wouldn't be able to keep up with Kuro's movements at all, but thanks to his enhanced vision granted by his cat-like eyes, as well as his experience moving at high speeds, he was able to see the direction Kuro sped off to. Using his enhanced speed, the Chimera captain sped over to Kuro's new position in speeds equal to, if not slightly faster than the false butler. Kuro's eyes widened as he was just able to make out Luffy's speeding form and made a wide slash at the black and yellow blur with his clawed gloves. Luffy was fortunate to see the attack coming and was able to leap over the attack, landing behind the traitorous captain with cat-like grace and sent a vicious backhand into Kuro's face, causing him to rocket backwards at the strength behind the punch. Kuro pulled himself up as his crew stared in awe at the kid who landed not just one, but 2 hits on their captain and seemed to match him in terms of speed. Kuro noticed the wide Cheshire cat grin on the transformed boy's face and asked, "What are you so happy about?" "Well, it's not often I get to do these high-speed fights. Normally I only use my faster forms if I either try to end a fight fast or just need a quick speed boost. Fighting you though will really help me test my limits with speed. It really makes me excited," Luffy explained with a laugh. Kuro seemed to ponder this for a moment before asking, "Before we continue, I want to ask you one question. You're a stranger here, so why are you getting involved with this village?" Luffy paused for a second before breaking out into a toothy grin. Given his cheetah anatomy, this was actually a fairly intimidating sight, and said plainly, "I have a friend in this village, and I don't want to see him dead." The schemer gave a mocking smile and said, "What a simple reason. Are you sure you're all right with it? After all, it'll be your reason for dying." With that, Kuro spread out his bladed fingers so it looked like wings. Luffy gave another grin as he shifted back into human form before getting into a ready stance and proclaiming, "That's okay. I'm not gonna die anyway." The two fighters shot at each other like they were fired out of a cannon. Luffy started to seemingly get bigger and suddenly there was a charging rhino in his place. Kuro was able to nimbly jump over the rampaging Luffy by using the tip of his horn as a springboard. The butler gave a powerful backwards kick into the back of Luffy's head which, when added to his momentum and mass, caused him to go crashing into the ground with a mighty bang. The Straw Hat Captain quickly shifted back to human as he dodged Kuro's follow-up slash and transformed his body into a black mamba-like being with a human torso and arms and hissed out, "Snake sweep," flicking his powerful tail at Kuro's legs. Once again the glasses-wearing pirate jumped over the incoming attack, but Luffy anticipated this move and shot his arm forward, allowing it to stretch out longer than normal due to a snake's natural flexibility. Before the surprise attack reached Kuro, the man simply vanished in another burst of silent step. Luffy and the black cats were shocked to see Kuro casually standing on Luffy's outstretched arm. "Is that all? I feel like I might fall asleep at this rate. Where was your speed from before, Kuro said mockingly before bringing his leg back for a vicious kick to Luffy's snake-like face, throwing him backwards in a heap. Luffy shifted once again back to his human form while shooting out some blood from his damaged nose. The black cats started cheering for their former captain and started chanting his name. Kuro only seemed to be annoyed by this and yelled out, "Don't call me using that name. You don't get it yet, do you? The real purpose of this plan is to eliminate the name, Captain Kuro, forever. I'm sick and tired of planning for you reckless morons." As I became more and more notorious, more of the Marines' dogs and bounty hunters started to come after me and it quickly grew annoying. That is why, 3 years ago, I killed myself to escape that life. What happened that day was essential for today's plan to be successful. My plan can only be completed when I have achieved wealth and peace. Do you understand now, brat? I cannot allow you to disrupt my plans. With that said, Kuro charged at Luffy with his claws bared. Luffy's body quickly grew in size as thick brown hair covered his body and knife-like claws sprouted from his hands, making him a human grizzly bear. With a grunt of effort, Luffy picked up a huge boulder and used it as a shield against Kuro's attack, causing the claws of his one glove to be stuck in the rock. "So I see you're not just an animalistic brute," Kuro said with a scowl as he tried to remove his blades to no avail. "That's right, I've been training to become a pirate," Luffy said with a toothy grin, and with a roar the bear boy gave the boulder a sharp twist, snapping the blades like toothpicks. The black cats watched in shock as their captain's infamous cat claws were broken. Luffy then lifted the rock over his head and said, "You said you were sick and tired of your name being known. Then how can you call yourself a pirate?" With that, Luffy gave another bear-like roar and smashed the rock over Kuro's head, knocking him to the ground. Luffy said triumphantly, "My dreams are far greater than your plans." Kuro slowly got up. His slick-backed hair hung loosely from his face as blood dripped down from a gash in his forehead, giving a truly haunting image. His crew tried cheering him on, but realizing he didn't want to be called Kuro, they tried calling the man by his fake name, Clawhador. "Shut up," Kuro said with venom in his voice. "After this is done, all of you must die, and Django is no exception." This shocked Luffy and the black cats at the man's cruelty. Suddenly some members of the crew started laughing nervously and making calming gestures. One member said, "Please stop joking, Captain Kuro," while another cried out, "It's still not too late to attack the village." And yet another pointed out, "As long as Django can make that girl write the will, the plan will still succeed." Kuro shook his head bemusedly and explained, "You don't have to worry about the plan. As long as your corpses are here, I can place all the blame on you. I never intended on any of you leaving this village alive because it would be a disadvantage leaving anyone who knows my plans alive." With his current disheveled state, the statement made him look that much more depraved. "Why, you mean from the very beginning, you planned to kill us all?" cried out his crew in shock and dismay. "Yes, ever since that day 3 years ago, this has all been a part of my plan," Kuro stated with a devilish smirk. Luffy, shrinking back into his human form, commented loudly, "You guys are dumb, gotta love the blunt honesty that is Luffy. What a bunch of loser pirates." Kuro scoffed, "Losers, a pirate crew is just a gathering of outcast outlaws. What could these fools do without my plans? You should continue to quietly follow my plans. In a pirate fleet, the crew is just pawns for the captain to use as he wishes, which means their life and death are in my hands. Even if there's a cliff in front of them, you'd have to follow my orders and charge at it. And sacrifice themselves for my plans." Now Kuro looked furious. That is the way of the pirate. A wandering little brat like you would never understand. Luffy just gave a confident smile and said, "Even though you're a captain who controls hundreds of men, you still can't beat Usopp." Kuro then paused and had confused expression as he asked, "What? You say I'm inferior to that captain in a kid's pirate game?" After Luffy gave the affirmative, Kuro let out a bark of laughter. "Ha! You're so stupid. Don't get cocky just because you've broken my cat claws. In what way am I inferior to him?" he exclaimed as he disappeared behind Luffy in a burst of silent step. "The way you think," came Luffy's simple response, which made Kuro pause long enough for the Straw Hat Captain to deliver a vicious backhand to his face while saying, "You don't know what a true pirate is supposed to be." The black cats were shocked to see someone see through their captain's silent step, but in reality it was thanks to Luffy's higher than normal instincts and reflexes that he could easily keep up with Kuro's speeds. Kuro meanwhile pulled himself up with a bloodthirsty look on his face and said, "You've insulted me. Don't get cocky just because of your powers. I've noticed one weakness to your fighting style is that you have to shift back to human before you can transform into another creature. With this in mind, I'll show you what a real pirate is supposed to be like, as well as the terror of a real pirate. A real pirate, who's been at the brink of death and survived," he exclaimed while getting into a slouched position, much to his crew's horror. "It's his out-of-the-bag attack. He's using it against only one person." Exclamation mark quote. One member screamed in fright while another yelled out, "He really is trying to kill us all. None of us are safe here either." The crew started backing away while some begged for their lives and begged Kuro not to use that technique, saying that they'd leave and forget they ever knew him. Kuro meanwhile continued to sway in his hunched-over position before calling out of the bag attack, and disappeared in a dust cloud, much to Luffy's confusion. Suddenly, there was a blood-curdling scream from one of the enemy pirates as his torso gained deep claw marks across it in a spray of blood. Another soon followed and then the claw marks appeared on nearby rocks and trees. Some of the pirates called out for Kuro to stop while one yelled out, "It's no use. Whenever he uses this attack he moves so fast that he can't tell what he's attacking. He won't stop till he gets tired." As more and more pirates were cut, Luffy's anger grew and grew as he watched the pointless massacre in front of him. Luffy threw back his head and yelled out, "Come out, you evil butler. Just what the heck do you think crew members are?" Even as he got a few cuts along his arms and chest. Little did he know that Nami saw the whole thing and was shocked at Luffy's outburst. Luffy then took on a still pose and waited for the right moment. Suddenly, his instincts screamed out at him and he reached out, seemingly grabbing air until a surprised Kuro suddenly appeared in his grasp. Luffy quickly tossed the shocked man on his back while giving a happy call of "Gotcha." Kuro got up with a snarl and spat out, "You punk. You should have let me kill you quickly. Now look, my beloved, yeah right. Crew is half dead and in pain because of you, cough bull cough." Do you have something to say? He asked as he noticed Luffy had gone silent during his tirade. Yep, I swear I'll never ever be a pirate like you. Luffy declared with a smirk as he cracked his knuckles. Oh, you won't be, stated Kuro as he once again got into a slouched position, because you're going to die right here, right now. Before Kuro could once again use his deadliest attack, Luffy was right in front of him in a burst of speed similar to Kuro's with noticeably longer legs that had hooves and faint spotted markings on them. Luffy grabbed onto the butler's arms and wrapped a thin, whip-like tail growing from his spine that had a small bush of hair at the tip around the villain's waist and cheerfully said, just try it. Try and use your silent step now. Curse you, let me go. Kuro howled as he tried with no avail to break out of the transformed boy's grasp. Now your 3-year plan will fail, Luffy stated confidently, to which Kuro gave an indignant, what did you say? The Black Cat pirates had started to cheer again, but they were cheering for Luffy now in hopes that the Chimera man would finish their traitorous captain off. Luffy gave an irritated huff before snapping his head back to face the pirates, his neck elongating with yellow fur with brown spots growing on it till his head was a foot from the pirates, freaking them out. I don't need your cheers. I'm gonna beat you all up too, so be ready, Luffy said through clenched teeth. With that he called out, Giraffe. Captain Kuro meanwhile was still struggling in the newly dubbed Giraffe man's grasp and he yelled out in outrage, how can this be? My plan cannot fail. Headshot, Luffy called out as he retracted his neck at a shocking rate before his head collided with Kuro's in a savage headbutt, snapping the evil pirate's head back and knocking his glasses off. As Kuro fell back unconscious, the Black Cat pirates stared in awe at the man who took down the pirate who was able to defeat a ship of marines, Kuro of 1,000 plans. They asked in fright, who are you? Monkey D. Luffy, there's no way I'd lose to a pirate who gave up his name and runs from the sea. With that Luffy turned around and gave the staring pirates a wide grin, you better try and remember my name, because I'm the one who's going to become the pirate king. Luffy then hefted Kuro up before tossing him back to the shocked pirates and yelled out, take him and don't come back. He finished with an animalistic roar. The pirates didn't need to be told twice as they took the phrase, scaredy cat, to a whole new meaning as they bolted to their ship. Luffy then started to sway from taking so many cuts during the battle and was caught by Nami, who had finished robbing the other pirates blind. After lying her captain down, Nami sat beside him and said, I guess even you can't stand up after being cut so many times. Why did you get so mad earlier? To which Luffy replied, I don't like them, they're wrong. Nami stared at the boy curiously for a moment before commenting, what are you talking about? It's obviously because they're pirates. Luffy just stated that he wanted meat, to which Nami sweat dropped. Meanwhile, Usopp and Zoro were able to stop Django with the help of the Usopp pirates and surprisingly enough Kaya. The hypnotist was laid out cold after an exploding shot fired from Usopp caught him square in the face. Usopp had his followers promise to keep the day's events a secret so the townspeople didn't get scared. Afterwards, the kids had gone home and the town was none the wiser of the day's events. Back at the slope, Usopp gave a heartfelt thank you to the Straw Hats. The pirates brushed it off saying that it was no trouble at all. Usopp then said in a determined voice, in light of this, there's a decision I've made, much to the crew's curiosity. Scene break. Usopp stood in front of his crew and addressed them once he was sure they were all there couldn't be hard with only 3 members. Usopp said in a proud tone, you guys fought bravely against those Black Cat pirates, a fight worthy of the Usopp pirates, I am proud to call myself your captain. It was 5 years ago when you were all 4 years old that we formed this group, and this was the greatest, most magnificent battle we've experienced in all that time. And now, it's sudden but I've decided to go to sea myself and become a real pirate. Seeing the group's stunned silence, the long-nosed boy continued, after seeing them, I decided that I'm going to leave this village. There is only one reason, that the pirate flag is calling me. The group gave loud protests to this, checking to see if their captain was lying again and asking what was to become of the Usopp pirates. Usopp smiled and said calmly, thanks for everything guys. I don't plan on telling the folks in the village, so say bye to them for me please. He then gained a reminiscent look on his face despite the group's protests as he said, don't you guys remember that this was the spot that we first met? A lot has happened since then, he stated with tears forming in his eyes that didn't match his smile. What are your life ambitions? The marksman asked, and as the kids told him what they hoped to become when they grew up, a bar owner, a carpenter, and a writer, he said with a trembling voice, while not losing sight of our ambitions, swear that you'll go on the road you've chosen. Starting today, the Usopp pirates are disbanded. With that all 4 former members started crying tears of both joy and sorrow. Scene break. Luffy pulled a fishbone out of his mouth that had gotten caught in his throat while Nami and Zoro berated him on chewing before swallowing. After they had finished their meal, the door to the inn opened and in walked Kaya. Nami asked the girl if she was feeling alright enough to be up and about, and the heiress explained that she couldn't be weak with Usopp encouraging her all this time. She then gave a bright smile and said, so, I heard that you guys need a ship. Much to Luffy's excitement. Scene break. The Straw Hats found themselves at a nearby beach where one of Kaya's other butlers, a goat-faced man named Mary, greeted them. Both Kaya and Mary showed a boat that was a floating caravel, with a goat-shaped figurehead with cartoonish eyes and curly horns, a brightly colored deck and stripped sails, and cannons poking out at different sides including under the goat's head. Mary said merrily, bada bing. This ship is of a slightly old style but I designed it myself. It's a caravel that uses a staysail. The controls are in the back. It's called the Going Merry. He then started to explain the controls to the ship to Luffy, who just gave a blank stare before Nami called the man over and told him to explain it to her, since her captain's a dunderhead. Luffy happily exclaimed, this is a cool ship. To which Kaya told him that she had the ship stocked for their voyage, and Luffy thanked the girl sincerely. Suddenly, the group heard a shrill scream and turned to the hill only to see Usopp, in a bag packed with what looked like the entire inside of a house, came rolling down the hill at worrying speeds. Before the rolling boy could crash into the Going Merry, both Zoro and Luffy stopped the human boulder by placing their feet up and accidentally kicking Usopp square in the face. After shaking off the mild concussion he had, Usopp turned to Kaya. Are you leaving to the sea, Usopp? Kaya said in a sad but understanding voice. Yeah, I'm leaving before I change my mind, so please don't try and stop me, Usopp said in determined voice. I won't, I was actually expecting it. It still makes me really sad though to see you go, explained Kaya. The next time I come to the village, I'll tell you adventure stories that are even more unbelievable than lies. Stated Usopp, to which Kaya giggled and said, I look forward to it. Usopp then turned to say goodbye to the Straw Hats, but before he could, Zoro shot out, hurry up and get on board. And Usopp gave the intelligent reply of, huh. Luffy stated plainly, you're already our companion, aren't you? Usopp stood gawking for a moment before he happily asked, can I be the captain? And Luffy shouted out, no way. I'm the captain. After tearful goodbyes were said, the Going Merry hoisted anchor and set sail, with the crew toasting their latest crewmate and friend. Chapter 7. Alright, Luffy cheered as he held up a black tarp, our pirate flag is done. The tarp was shown to have what appeared to be a Jolly Roger, if said Jolly Roger was drawn left-handed by a right-handed 4-year-old. The rest of the Straw Hat pirates stared at their captain incredulously. That is our symbol. Zoro asked warily. Calling our captain artistically challenged would be an understatement, Usopp commented while gawking at the poorly made flag. Maybe it's some kind of abstract art. Nami asked thoughtfully, though you can tell she didn't believe her own words. A pirate's flag should be a symbol of death, but this, well, I guess it is terrifying in a sense, Zoro deadpanned. So what do you guys think? Luffy asked while giving a smile that threatened to split his face in two. You're beyond terrible, Usopp groaned, leave the drawing to me. 5 minutes later both Zoro and Luffy were braining Usopp over the head for his design, which was a Jolly Roger with Usopp's nose sticking out and had slingshots instead of the usual crossbones. After the moment of silliness was over, Usopp made the finished project of the Straw Hat's flag, which showed a grinning Jolly Roger with a straw hat on top. Coming to a unanimous agreement, the crew quickly decorated their ship with the new flag and also painted the symbol on the sails before setting sail. The crew was busy relaxing after their little Martha Stewart moment before they heard the sound of cannon fire. Looking up warily they noticed their captain by the ship's cannon and was aiming it at a random rock jutting out of the sea. What are you doing, Luffy? Zoro asked warily, seeing as his immature captain had somehow figured out how to operate firearms. I'm trying to get the cannon to work, cause it'd be a shame to not use it. I can't seem to get it to work right, though, Luffy sighed the last part as he stared off to the area he had been aiming to hit. Stand aside, my amateur friend, and watch how a pro does it. Usopp boasted as he strutted over to his captain. After making a few adjustments to the cannon, Usopp was able to hit the rock on the first shot. This greatly impressed Luffy and secretly Usopp as well, and he decided to make the liar the crew's honorary sniper. Usopp agreed, on the condition that he becomes captain in the event that Luffy would want to step down, to which the Chimera boy agreed to reluctantly. The next half hour involved Luffy trying to convince his crew that their next member should be the musician, to which they all flatly denied. Before the crew could further discuss the next crew member who should join, they all heard a large crash on the upper decks. Luffy ran on deck and was confronted by a man wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses with a tattoo on one cheek and was wielding a machete-like sword. Before he knew it, Luffy was jumping over the man's wild swing before the hat-wearing captain could even ask what the big idea was. Meanwhile, Zoro was asking Nami and Usopp to evaluate the situation while the swordsman got ready to help his captain if needed. The assailant started screaming out that he'd defeated dozens of low-life pirates before, yet a no-named pirate like Luffy was able to kill his partner, much to the animal man's confusion. Luffy quickly jumped over the man's wild swing before grabbing him by the head and flipping him over his shoulders, causing the man's face to be acquainted with the wall. Zoro then decided to see the aftermath of the incredibly one-sided fight, but was shocked to find that the assailant was someone he knew. The man's name was Johnny, and he was a bounty hunter who did some work with Zoro from time to time along with his partner Yosaku. Zoro then asked the man, after he calmed down some both due to his beating and recognizing that there were friendlies on the ship, where Yosaku was, and then the man started blubbering like a 5-year-old on how his partner had apparently fallen ill. It had started a few days ago when the other bounty hunter's health took a rapid decline and they were resting on a small island to try and recover his strength before they were assaulted by cannon fire. Luffy and Usopp started freaking out at this little tidbit of information. Fortunately for the ailing bounty hunter, Nami quickly recognized his symptoms as signs of scurvy, and quickly had the two idiots, Luffy and Usopp, pour some lime juice down the man's throat while the navigator lectured everyone aboard on how they need to be better prepared while being out at sea, to which was largely ignored by the others who just thought she was some kind of miracle worker. The bounty hunter Yosaku was quickly able to recover, much to Nami's shock, and the duo went along to properly introduce themselves. Yosaku wore clothes slightly similar to his partner, however he had a shaved head with a metal-plated headband and lacked the tattoo and sunglasses. After introductions were out of the way, Yosaku had another bout of illness before he was sent to rest and recover. This little scare led the Straw Hats to decide that their next member needed to be a chef, in order to provide them with proper food and nutrition. Johnny came by during this discussion and recommended that they head to a restaurant on the seas that he'd heard about if they were looking for a chef. Zoro's attention was further piqued when Johnny mentioned that that man was rumored to have been sighted there before. Soon, the crew was sailing off to see this acclaimed restaurant. Time skip. It had been a few days since the crew ran into Yosaku and Johnny, when suddenly Johnny announced that they had arrived. The Straw Hats looked in awe at the floating restaurant, which truly looked like a cross between a ship and a restaurant. The main body was shaped like a restaurant, yet it had masts and a fish-headed bow of a ship. On the front it read, Restaurant, Barati. Unfortunately for our heroes, a marine ship was anchored just off to the side of the Barati. Suddenly, a man came on deck at the marine vessel. The man was blonde and wore a striped suit and had, curiously enough, brass knuckles that seemed to be screwed onto his hand. Seriously, what is it with high-ranking marines and self-mutilation? Closing parenthesis. The man introduced himself as Lieutenant, Iron Fist, full body, and mentioned that he had never seen that pirate flag before, and then he demanded to speak with the captain. Luffy stepped forward and introduced himself before claiming that they just finished the flag the day before yesterday, to which Yosaku and Johnny seemed to find funny because there was no way such strong pirates were just a bunch of rookies, aren't they in for a surprise. Full Body then turned to the two bounty hunters and idly commented on how he'd seen the two at collection offices before and how the two seemed to be finally caught by pirates. The duo, not liking being looked down on like that, got ready to attack the preppy jerk. After what could only be considered a joke of a match, Tweedledum and Tweedledummer found themselves flat on their backs with their faces a bloody pulp. The Marine lieutenant then stated that the pirates were lucky he was on a break today to eat at the restaurant, but the next time they meet they should consider their lives forfeit. Nami was momentarily distracted by a wanted poster that fell out of Johnny's pocket, when Usopp cried frantically that the Marine ship was aiming their cannons at them. Luffy jumped in the way of the incoming projectile and cried out, "Leave everything to me," before shifting to his monkey form and caught the ball bare-handed, much to Yosaku, Johnny, and Usopp's shock. The animal man then used his momentum to swing the cannonball back in the Marine's general direction with a cry of, "Monkey hammer throw." Unfortunately, Luffy overthrew the shot and ended up blowing up a portion of the Barati's roof instead. "Who are you aiming at, idiot?" Zoro shouted at his now human captain, who was in shock at how epically he failed at his counterattack. Time skip. Luffy was dragged into the head chef's office by two surly-looking cooks and his reaction was instantaneous when he saw the man, who had apparently been wounded during the attack. The chef, whose name was Zeph, was a sour-looking man who had a braided mustache and a goatee, and had on an incredibly tall hat on his head and "Wah, I blew off your leg. I'm so sorry," Luffy screamed as he saw the man's peg leg, which had quite obviously been there for a while. After being told that the leg had been lost long ago, Luffy quickly relaxed a bit. This changed with what the head chef said next. 1 year, Luffy blurted out after finding out the amount of time it would take for him to pay off the damages done to the restaurant, seeing as he had no money to speak of. The pirate captain tried to haggle with the surly chef, which just earned him a drop kick to the face. Luffy still proceeded to try lowering the amount of work to 1 week, but then Zeph got a dangerous look in his eyes. "You know, there is a way you can leave here earlier," he said with a straight face before pulling out a hacksaw from somewhere and said with a maniacal grin, "You just have to leave one of your legs behind." And with that, the deranged lunatic jumped at the poor dimwit, causing the floor under them to give out. The two landed in the middle of the dining room, much to the inhabitants' shock. After Zeph was able to pull himself out of the tangled mess of limbs he found himself in and quickly blaming Luffy for the newly acquired hole in the ceiling, even if it was technically his own fault, he quickly went over to investigate a disturbance in the dining area. Apparently, the assistant head chef, Sanji, had been involved in a disagreement with the Marine lieutenant the Straw Hats met earlier. And by disagreement, I mean he literally kicked the tar out of the man for wasting food and for generally being an unpleasant human being. Sanji was a man around Zoro's age with a crisp suit on and had blonde hair that covered his left eye but showed his right that had a curiously swirly eyebrow, and he seemed to constantly have a lit cigarette in his mouth. Another chef named Patty, who looked like a flaky version of Popeye, asked Zeph if he could reason with Sanji before he tried to kill another customer. Zeph, in an irritated manner, proceeded to kick both Sanji and Full Body in the head for causing a scene. An argument quickly developed between the three cooks before a bloodied Marine came barging in and saying, "Lieutenant Full Body, sir. Forgive me, but the prisoner escaped." "This place is too noisy," whined Luffy as he covered up his animal-enhanced ears. Full Body proceeded to spout off on how that was impossible, that the man who was a member of the Creek Pirates was half dead when they caught him and hadn't eaten since then and blah, blah, blah. Suddenly, the bearer of bad news was struck from behind and a man calmly walked in and took a seat at a table. The man looked like he had seen better days, with baggy eyes, a scruffy beard, and dirtied clothes. He looked like he had 1 foot in the grave already, but something about him screamed, dangerous. The man idly looked at the assembled chefs and demanded something to eat. Patty suddenly came forward and said with a pleasant smile, "Welcome, you squid-faced moron." Much to the other customers' shock, "Excuse me, idiot, but do you happen to have any money?" To which the pirate pointed a pistol at the man's head and asked, "Do you take lead?" Patty calmly said, "So you don't have money then?" Before proceeding to punch the man straight through the table he was sitting at, much to the Marine's shock and Zeph's ire, seeing as Patty broke another table. The beefy-looking chef then proceeded to kick the starved pirate out, saying that if he couldn't pay then he wasn't a customer, and the other restaurant patrons cheered while Sanji looked thoughtful. Luffy later came upon an interesting scene. Apparently Sanji had given the pirate food, despite his lack of funds. The Chimera man gave a toothy grin, as he found a good cook. The newbie captain then joined in on the two and started a conversation. Luffy learned through Sanji that Zeph himself used to be a pirate before he opened the Barati, and the chefs that joined were as tough as any man you'd find on a pirate crew. It turns out the waiters had to quit a few days ago due to the constant brawls the chefs would get into with pirates. It was then Luffy's turn to ask Sanji if the blonde would become a member of his crew, but the man denied his request, saying that he had his reasons for staying with the restaurant, but Luffy ignored this and continued to pester him about joining his crew. The pirate, whose name was Jin of the Dawn Creek Pirates, then butted into the heated argument, asking Luffy what his objective as a pirate is. Luffy answered with a large grin that he was going to the Grand Line to find One Piece and become the king of the pirates. Jin gained a serious expression and stated, "Seeing as you don't have a cook yet, I'm guessing you don't have a large crew yet, huh? Counting this guy there'll be 5 of us." Luffy happily chirped while pointing to Sanji, much to the chef's chagrin. "You seem like a decent enough guy, so let me give you advice." Jin cut in before another argument between the two could ignite. "Give up on going to the Grand Line. You're still young, so there's no need to rush into things. The Grand Line is only one part of the ocean, there are plenty other places you can sail to." The sickly-looking man said in all seriousness. Luffy asked the man if he knew something about the Grand Line, to which he replied, "No, I don't know anything, and that's what makes it so terrifying," he said while trembling a little. Sanji then noted that for a member of the Krieg pirates was acting like a scaredy cat, and Luffy asked who Krieg was. Apparently, Don Krieg was considered one of the strongest pirates in the East Blue, and was reported to command 50 ships that housed over 5,000 men. After chatting for a bit longer, Jin got into a small dinghy and was getting ready to set sail, wishing Luffy luck on his voyage and gave his deepest gratitude to Sanji for saving his life. Suddenly, Zeph appeared on deck calling for them to get back to work, and Sanji, after getting rid of the evidence of Jin's free meal, waved the man goodbye as he sailed off with his head bowed in thanks. Luffy then put on an apron and got ready to start his temporary career as an errand boy for the Bharati. Little did he know that things were about to get really interesting very soon. Chapter 8. Pirates, was the shout that echoed through the Bharati a few days after Luffy became the chore boy for the sailing restaurant. Let's just say that whoever thinks letting Monkey D. Luffy work any kind of stable job is a good idea should be dragged into the middle of the street and repeatedly hit with a trout. He broke dishes when asked to wash them, never got orders right as a server, lazed around until he was yelled at, etc. It was getting to the point where Chef Zeph was almost ready to start pulling his hair out and wonder if he'd be able to make money by letting Luffy go. Meanwhile, the animal man had continuously begged the assistant head chef Sanji to join his crew, causing the blonde smoker to send him flying back with a kick to the face every single time. Luffy did learn a good trick though. When none of the other chefs were looking, Luffy would transform himself into a little puppy similar to Chow Chow with black fur and would beg for food at some of the tables before he was missed, earning himself plenty of pets and scraps of food from customers who commented how adorable the floating restaurant's pet was, much to the other chefs' confusion. Back to the present, the pirate Don Krieg's ship appeared in the distance. At first, the chefs and the customers were terrified at the idea of getting into a fight with Don Krieg. However, what they saw was anything but a dangerous pirate. The enormous ship looked like it had seen one too many storms and it looked ready to sink at any moment. The men on board were barely alive, looking thin and starved, and when Krieg finally appeared, he was too weak to stand on his own feet and had to be assisted by Jin. Krieg was an enormous man with short-cut gray hair and long sideburns, with a thick gauze wrapped around his head. The most notable aspect of Krieg's appearance is his golden woot steel armor that was made up of a chest plate, shoulder guards, and elbow guards, and it all seemed to be fur-lined. With a great effort, Krieg made it to the deck and began asking for food before he fell to the floor. Jin begged them all to help his captain, but some members, like Patty, laughed at that. Jin continued to beg, saying that they could pay so they were customers. The rest of the cooks refused, knowing all about Krieg's dirty reputation. Krieg was then bowing his head and begging for food as well, and Jin was trying to stop him, tears in his eyes. But the Straw Hats, who were staying with their captain till he figured a way out of his dilemma and to constantly make fun of him, all knew that there was someone who was listening. Sanji had come in with a large bowl of food and actually kicked Patty out of his way, who couldn't believe what he was doing. But as Krieg eats, another chef by the name of Carne told Sanji and the rest of them about all the horrible things that Krieg had done over the years. And it was soon clear that he lived up to his reputation, for once Krieg had finished eating, he attacked Sanji and even Jin was shocked at what he was doing. Krieg even went as far to injure Jin's shoulder as the rest of the customers went screaming out of the restaurant in panic. Krieg glanced around at the restaurant and stated that he liked it. He said that the second reason he had come here was so that they could take the restaurant. His old ship would soon sink and he wanted the Bharati as his new vessel. He then demanded that they serve food for the rest of his crew. Predictably, they all refused and ready to fight. Krieg laughed as he yelled at them that he wasn't ordering anything, but that he was giving them all an order. And no one had ever disobeyed him before and lived to tell the tale. Holding onto his hurt shoulder, Jin apologized to Sanji, saying that he didn't think that Krieg would do this. Sanji stood up and was actually heading back to the kitchen, and the rest of the cooks were horrified and shocked when he said that he was gonna start cooking. The cooks, who each had giant knives and forks, were now pointing their weapons at Sanji ready to fight him if he set foot in that kitchen. He then explained as to why he is giving them food, how he was a cook and it was his one job, but was then smashed to the ground by Patty, who then turned a cannon on Krieg and attacked, asking him if he wanted dessert. Krieg complained how awful the dessert was and then pulled out a private arsenal of weapons and began firing on them all as he screamed out why he was the strongest. But before Krieg could get into another rant, Zeph almost knocked Luffy off the stairs as he had a giant sack with enough food for 100 people, which shocked the chefs. However, upon hearing Zeph's name, Krieg's jaw fell open in horror and he was gaping at Zeph. Zeph turned and looked like he wanted to leave the room. The rest of the cooks were all demanding to know what he was thinking for feeding them, about how they'd lose their ship for sure if the pirates got their strength back. That would be true, Zeph answered coolly, but not sounding at all worried, if they still had the will to fight, much to the other chefs' confusion. Tell me, Zeph went on as he looked back at Krieg. Did your will survive defeat? The words slowly dawned on them all. That Don Krieg had run away from the Grand Line and now they were all staring up at him, his face replaced with a very ugly look. But he never stopped staring at Zeph as Jin cowered by his side. Krieg then told the story about Red Leg Zeph, the once famous pirate who was both chef and captain, and that it was his ability to kick that gave him his name. How he could smash bedrock and even leave footprints on steel. The nickname, Red Leg, or even just Red Foot, came from the blood of his enemies. Krieg also stated that Zeph was supposed to have died in an accident years ago, but he realized that he had only lost a leg, which made him unable to fight anymore and forced him to retire as a chef of a restaurant, how he was now defenseless. But Zeph didn't show any fear as he continued to look at them with a bored expression. I don't need to fight anymore, he said coolly, as he held up his hands. I'm a cook. As long as I have my 2 hands I'll be fine. Now enough chit-chat. What do you want from me? The restaurant in Zeph's logbook was what the villain wanted. Since Zeph once went in the Grand Line and returned safely, Krieg said that he wanted the journal written at that time. Naturally, Zeph refused. Krieg said that he'll then take it by force. He stated that Zeph's journal will give him the information he lacked when he first tried to enter the Grand Line, eventually making him the king. This leads to a funny scene with Luffy stating in front of everyone that he will be the one to be the pirate king. The other chefs told him to back off, but Luffy wouldn't listen as Krieg snarled. This isn't a game, he said to him. Yeah, I know, Luffy said confidently, his eyes slightly becoming feral slits, but still, I'm gonna conquer the Grand Line. His words just seemed to tick Krieg off. No, you won't. It's true we didn't have the information we needed, but my fleet of 5,000 men were wiped out in just 7 days, you brat. That place is a nightmare. Most of the people in the restaurant were stunned to hear that, and when Krieg was about to fight, Zoro and Usopp made their presence known. Krieg saw them and mocked Luffy for having a tiny crew. Well, that's not all, Luffy said, holding up 2 fingers as his eyes went back to normal. I've got 2 more. I'm not a part of your crew, Sanji yelled in the background. Krieg then took the food and went to go feed his crew, giving them all a choice. He was taking the restaurant one way or the other, and their only options were to flee with their lives or to stay where they were and die. They had until they finished eating to make up their minds. I'm so sorry for this, Sanji, Jin said, and he truly sounded like he meant it. I never thought it would be this way. You have nothing to apologize for, sailor, Zeph said in an unusually kind voice as everyone looked to him. Every cook at this restaurant did what he thought was right, he finished. That's all there is to say about that. But boss, Patty yelled, sounding outraged, why are you acting like you're taking Sanji's side? This mess is his fault. As the other cooks tried to speak up to that as well, Zeph lost his temper. You fools don't know what you're talking about. Everyone was a little shocked at the sudden anger in his tone as he explained, none of you have any idea what it's like to be on the brink of starvation. To have no food or water on the open ocean. There is no way you could possibly understand what a terrifying prospect that is. It's the most difficult situation a man can ever face. What? Patty said, sounding lost. I don't know what you're talking about, Chef Zeph. Zeph looked over at them all, a strange expression in his eyes. The difference between all of you and Sanji is that Sanji knows. The chefs all looked completely lost at those words, but they weren't the only ones. The Straw Hats looked thoughtfully at the blonde chef. If all you're gonna do is stand around grumbling, Zeph went on, a hard look on his face. Then leave this place, and never come back. Not a single one of them moved. They all held up their weapons, ready to fight. They had decided to protect the Bharati, since it is the only place where they were accepted. Jin screamed at them to please leave, that they had no idea who they were up against. But Sanji walked forwards, moving one of the tables up and explaining that now that he fed them, he can beat them all, and he said all this with a terrifying expression on his face. Hey Jin, Luffy suddenly called out, you said you don't know anything about the Grand Line. I thought you'd been there. Doesn't make any sense. So Jin told them all what happened. How on the 7th day of their voyage through the Grand Line, their entire fleet was almost annihilated. He spoke it all as if reliving a terrifying nightmare. For that entire 50-ship fleet, to be completely eradicated by a single man. He gasped as everyone stared at him, choking in horror at what they were hearing. Jin explained about how as soon as this man appeared he began to slice apart the entire fleet, and how, if not for a freak storm, the flagship would have been sunk as well. It all seems like a terrible nightmare burned into my memory. Jin cried out, shaking in fear, his hands on his face, as if he hoped to claw out those images. I just want to forget. His eyes, they were like a hawk's. Sharp and murderous, his gaze alone felt like the cold hands of death. On the stairs, Zoro gripped the railing tightly as he stared at him, eyes wide. Well then, Zeph said as they all turned back to him. That can only be the one known as Hawkeye. Jin looked fearful that Zeph recognized who it had been. Your description of his heartless gaze isn't proof of his identity in and of itself, but the way he so easily decimated your fleet confirms without a doubt that it's him. Hawkeye Mahawk, Zoro repeated softly. Luffy looked up at him. You know him, Zoro? He asked curiously. Remembering the matter at hand, he took several calming breaths as he answered Luffy's question. Yes, I do, he admitted. He's the man I've been looking for. He's the whole reason I set out to sea. Luffy blinked up at him as Sanji asked Jin if Mahawk had some kind of a score to settle with them for him to go out and sink all his ships. We didn't do anything to him. Jin cried back to him. Zeph had an interesting suggestion. Perhaps you disturbed him during a nap. Stupid cook, Jin yelled in fury. Why would he destroy an entire fleet for something so trivial? Zeph smirked at Jin's fear. There's no reason to shout, he said coolly, as if telling a child to off for being too loud. It's just an example. I thought you'd like a little friendly advice on what kind of place the Grand Line is. Usopp gulped. And what kind of place is that? He asked in a croak. Zoro was the one who answered. He probably means that anything can happen there. Usopp on the other hand now had tears of fear in his eyes. Hey Luffy, do we really have to go there? He yelled at Luffy who was shaking at the foot of the stairs. Luffy, he gasped. But their captain was smiling as he cried out, that's so awesome. This is gonna be such a blast. Don't you understand the concept of danger? Usopp demanded loudly. Finally, Zoro said softly. My life's goal will be achieved on the Grand Line. What? Usopp gasped up at him. Zoro leaned up against the wall with a similar satisfied smirk. My rival is out there somewhere and I'm gonna find him. Sanji looked up at him and asked, are you that stupid? It's idiots like you guys who end up dead. That may be true, Zoro said as Sanji looked back at him, but lay off the name calling. I devoted my entire life to becoming the world's greatest swordsman. It was my choice, so I'm the only one who gets to call me stupid. Just then, outside they could hear the sounds of battle cries and knew that their time was up. The Krieg pirates were all ready to go again. But then something happened. Just when they start to attack the restaurant, the great galleon was suddenly cut in half, creating a lot of disbelief on everyone's faces and even a mini tsunami. Everyone was rocked around inside the restaurant and they were all trying to find something to hold onto. Zeph ordered them to raise the anchor before the ship sank in the waves, while the 3 Straw Hats all went running outside to where Nami and the guys were on the merry. They followed them and they found Yosaku and Johnny floundering in the sea. They explained that Nami took the treasure and ship and left. What did you say? Luffy, Zoro, and Usopp yelled together in panic. They heaved the two men onto deck as they told them the story of how Nami tricked them and took off with the Mary. Then Zoro lost his temper. He punched the side of the restaurant. Curse it, he yelled, she just had to make a bad situation worse. Usopp was looking angrier than they had seen him in a long time. The heartless thief, he yelled, Kaya gave us that ship. Luffy jumped up onto the railing and searched over the sea to try and get a glimpse of the ship. Wait, he called, I see a ship. It's the Going Merry. He turned towards Yosaku and Johnny. Tell me where your boat is. We have it moored to the restaurant, Yosaku said at once. Zoro, Usopp, don't just stand there. Luffy ordered, turning to them all, take their ship and go get Nami. Calm down, Zoro stated, as if he could care less. Let her keep the ship. Trust me, that woman's way more trouble than she's worth. Luffy frowned at him. She's the only one I'll accept as the ship's navigator, he said firmly, and it was clear from this tone that he wasn't going to change his mind. Zoro threw Luffy an aggravated look. For a moment, there was a nasty moment of thinking that he would actually refuse, but he then sighed. Fine, I'll do it, Zoro snapped in frustration, though it was clear that he wasn't happy about it. You're one high-maintenance captain, you know that. The ship's ready for action, big bro Zoro. Johnny and Yosaku yelled together, once again, showing that these two were really two peas in a pod. Hey, what about you? Zoro asked, looking at Luffy. I should probably stick around here till I get things settled with the restaurant, Luffy said, jerking his thumb at the building, you know what I mean. Well, be careful, the swordsman warned, a slight trace of worry in his face, the situation here could get really bad really fast. Luffy nodded, yeah, got that right. Just then they heard shouts coming from the floating pieces of the remains of Krieg's ship. Over there, it's that man, he came back, Don Krieg, the man who destroyed our fleet is back. Someone's voice screamed out above all the others, what are we gonna do? That got everyone, Zoro's especially, attention. They were all focused on a boat that was sailing towards them. As soon as they saw it, even Zeph's cool disappeared as he looked up, his eyes wide, that man is. And there, through the dust from the attack that destroyed the ship, the form of a single man slowly appeared. Zoro was shaking, sweat pouring down his face. On a small raft that was lit with several candles with eerily green flames, that looked as though something to fetch you from the netherworld. Some of them shivered at the sight of it, but their eyes were drawn directly to the man sitting in the boat. He was a tall and lean man with a short beard, mustache and sideburns that point upwards. His clothing was made of a wide-brimmed black hat decorated with a large plume, and a long, open black coat with no shirt underneath, with red, flower-patterned sleeves and collar. There was a small, golden cross-shaped necklace hanging around his neck and a large, black sword on his back. It had a beautifully curved black blade, in the shape of a cross, and with a golden handguard decorated by blue and green jewels, and a hilt wrapped in bandages, with a particularly big jewel at its edge. But underneath the hat they could see his eyes, cold yellow eyes that resembled a hawk that was hunting its prey. The Krieg pirates were all so full of fear that they couldn't move and were shaking in their boots as Mihawk sailed by them. That psycho followed us back here. He's gonna kill us all. Luffy stepped forward when he noticed that Zoro had frozen. Zoro, who's that? He asked him as he glanced towards Mihawk. The man I've been looking for, Zoro confessed as he watched his rival sail closer. Hawkeye Mihawk. So that's Mihawk, Luffy said seriously. He could sense the power inside Mihawk. His animal instincts were screaming at him just how dangerous this man was. Yeah, the greatest swordsman, Zoro said as he kept his eyes trailed on him. Zeph, Patty, and Carne were only a little ways away and were talking about him as well. That's gotta be the guy who destroyed Krieg's fleet, Patty said nervously. He sunk 50 battleships out on the Grand Line all by himself. Looks like he came back to finish the job, Carne said anxiously, but is that all he wants? Wait a minute, another chef said from behind them, he looks like any ordinary man. He doesn't even look like he has any special weapons with him. He carries his weapon on his back, Zeph explained and they stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible, Patty cried out in incredulity. He couldn't have destroyed a galleon like that using nothing but a sword. Carne cried in agreement. Zeph just stood there with his arms folded. Hawkeye Mihawk is a true master. He is without a doubt the greatest swordsman in the world. Here, Zoro was looking nervous, but excited at the same time. A wild grin appeared as he put his hand on the white blade. He was gonna fight. He was willing to fight Mihawk for his title, or die trying. You monster. One of the Krieg pirates yelled in a trembling voice, why are you doing this to us? What did we ever do to you? Mihawk glanced up at him in uninterested a way, as if speaking was a waste of energy, just killing time. Just killing time, another pirate cried out as he pulled out a pair of pistols and shot at him. But with the grace of a swan, he twisted his wrist very slightly, and just like that the two bullets were deflected and their courses were changed. What? I missed. The pirate cried out, not believing it, but I aimed straight for him. He diverted it, said Zoro's voice, appearing behind the pirate and making him jump. He changed the course of the bullet with the tip of his sword. That can't be, the pirate said in disbelief as Zoro coolly walked past them all, one hand on his swords, which caught the attention of the other pirates as the first demanded to know who Zoro was. He's got 3 swords. It couldn't be, another pirate gasped, looking up to his face. But that Zoro didn't pay them any attention as he turned his full attention to Hawkeye. I've never seen a sword handled so gently or with such grace, he said truthfully. Hawkeye's eyes looked over at him without even turning his head as he casually replied, there is no strength in swordplay based on force. Did you also use that sword to slice up this ship? Zoro continued on, though it was clear from the wild, excited look on his face that he already knew the answer. I did, Mihawk answered, as if telling him that what he did was something that anyone could do. Then it's true, he asked, still looking like a child who was promised a big treat, you're the best. He went to his black bandana and untied it from his arm. I set sail for only one reason, to meet you. And what is your goal? Mihawk asked with only a slight trace of curiosity in his tone. To beat you, exclaimed Zoro, still grinning wildly as he tied his bandana on. Mihawk smirked at him. How foolish. Zoro then out the white blade and declared, you got spare time. So let's do this. The Krieg pirates, as well as all the cooks, all suddenly realized who Zoro was. Don Krieg was watching the two with great interest. Really, it's the pirate hunter, he said gruffly, though they were still standing on the Barati's edge with Sanji. He heard what he just said and Sanji was stunned by that. Just then, Usopp was yelling at Luffy, telling him that they had to hurry or else they would lose sight of Nami and the Going Merry. But surprisingly, Luffy didn't even look at him as he watched Zoro and Mihawk size each other up. Or rather, Zoro sized Mihawk up. Hawkeye didn't even seem troubled. A fight, Mihawk asked him, with a tone that clearly said that he wanted to make sure that he heard right. You're a weak, pitiful creature. Before anyone could blink, the world's greatest was suddenly standing not 10 feet from the Straw Hat's first mate. If you are, in fact, a competent swordsman, Mihawk said in a skeptic tone as if he highly doubted it, you should see the disparity in our abilities before we even cross swords. I must ask you, why have you challenged me? Hawkeye went on, could it be your courage? Or, is it simply your ignorance? Zoro was grinning as he declared that it was his ambition that drove him to fight. And as he took out his swords he added, also I made a promise I intend to keep. There isn't a person alive who can beat Big Bro. Yosaku yelled from the boat as he and Johnny began cheering. He's already the best in the world. At the same time, Mihawk took the little golden cross that was around his neck and revealed that it was actually hiding a short knife that looked more like for cutting someone's toenails than fighting. Zoro had already narrowed his eyes, realizing that he was being mocked when Mihawk held up the knife. Funny, what do you think you're gonna do with that? He demanded. It'll be more than enough. After all, you wouldn't kill a fly with a cannon, would you? Mihawk asked him coolly. You may have quite the reputation in the East Blue. But that doesn't mean much to me. This sea is by far the weakest of the four. He sighed a little before he said that he didn't carry any blades that were smaller than this, and it was like he was apologizing to him that this knife was too big for him to handle. I've had just enough of your attitude. Zoro snarled and he actually bit down on the sword with such force that he ended up chipping off a piece of tooth. But he didn't care as he charged at him recklessly. Now you die. You have no idea how big the world really is, Mihawk said almost forebodingly as he held up the little knife. Onigiri, Zoro yelled as he struck, but to everyone's amazement, Hawkeye didn't just catch the attack, but he stopped all three swords dead in mid-strike. What the? Zoro gasped when he tried to move forward, but nothing budged. Zoro, Luffy yelled worriedly from where he stood, but didn't do anything else as he could only stand by and watch. What? Big Bro's Onigiri was stopped. Johnny yelled incredulously. But that's crazy, Yosaku shouted, also in disbelief, that attacks never fails to stop an enemy. What's going on here? Finally, either through a sudden burst of strength, or Mihawk simply grew bored, Zoro broke free of the standstill. I am not that far behind the world's strongest, he yelled as he attacked again, but this time no longer as calm or collective as he usually was in battle. It was here that they could fully see that Mihawk shook Zoro to the core. He now began to swing at Hawkeye viciously with his swords. But Mihawk barely had to defend himself as he parried each swing or merely stepped lightly out of the way, so he didn't even get a scratch on him. After a few moments of this, Mihawk stepped to the side and caused Zoro to fall to the deck, panting hard. You're just toying with him, right? Yosaku screamed, his eyes wide. Fight for real, Big Bro. Big Bro, added Johnny, sounding close to openly sobbing. But it was clear from the look on Zoro's face that he was past listening. You can't be that much better than me, he yelled, shaking with rage, and seeing the expressionless look on Mihawk's face just seemed to even angrier. Again, he got up and began to violently attack. There was no skill or plan here, just vicious slashes. Using the dagger to block another attack, Mihawk stated, such ferocious swordplay. Using his mouth, Zoro moved his sword up to strike, but Hawkeye stopped it, creating a shockwave from the strength that both swordsmen created. How can he defend against Zoro's three-sword style with such a small knife? One of the Krieg pirate yelled in astonishment. He's even more of a monster with a blade than even the great Zoro. Another cried. The swings were so quick that all they could see were flashes of light. As Zoro lunged forward, Mihawk moved and then hit the back of Zoro's neck with the side of his hand. They watched Zoro's eyes roll into the back of his head and they knew that he was fighting to stay conscious after an attack like that. The green-haired swordsman slowly got back up, though now dazed from that last attack. He was exhausted as he marched forward, trying again, but he was so slow and worn out that even a weak swordsman could have easily stepped out of the way. With nothing to hit, he fell forward again, gasping for air as he lay there, with Mihawk looking down at him, but there was something different in his gaze this time. Curiosity perhaps. What is it then? Mihawk suddenly asked. What weight do you carry upon your shoulders? Speak up, weakling. Johnny and Yosaku were both ready to defend Zoro for that insult. How dare you call him weakling? Yosaku cried, his hand on his sword. You'll pay for that. We'll teach you a lesson. Johnny added, and with screams they jumped, ready to get in the fight, but Luffy wouldn't allow it. No, he yelled, quickly grabbing them by the scruffs of their necks. Yosaku, Johnny, get back here. He then held them both down as he commanded, just stay put. But Luffy was clearly just as upset as they were about it. His teeth were grit together and were slowly becoming fangs, his eyes were slitted, and fur and scales were popping up in random places before disappearing once more. Even Usopp noticed it as he glanced over at him. Luffy, he began, but Zoro was up on his feet. Zoro was still looking angry, although it was clear that he was far from giving up. No, I won't lose, he declared, I refuse to be defeated. Mihawk didn't say a word as he watched him cross his three blades. Tiger. But Zoro barely finished finishing the attack when Mihawk rushed forward and impaled him with the small blade, just right above his heart. Despite the look of complete shock on his face, there was a steely-eyed determination there as he refused to back away from the blade. You are defeated, yet won't step back. Why not? Mihawk asked, as if wondering what he would do now. I don't know, Zoro answered honestly as blood trailed from his mouth and ran down the side of his face to stain his shirt. But, I will not run. Even if I retreat a single step I'd be shattering the promises I made. I can't run, I would lose my honor. You see, without that there'd be nothing left for me here. That's what defeat is, Mihawk stated simply. But Zoro merely answered, then I won't accept defeat. Then you die, Mihawk pointed out coldly. Looking at him dead in the hawk-like eyes, Zoro said without a trace of hesitation or regret in his voice, I rather die than give up. Hawkeye was now giving him a new look of respect as he pulled his knife out of his chest. He stepped back and resheathed it before he demanded Zoro's name. Moving his swords into an almost triangle shape, he proclaimed, I am, Roronoa Zoro. Mihawk reached behind his head to grab his black sword. I'll remember it, he informed him. No one as strong as you has come around in quite some time. So as a swordsman courtesy, Mihawk finished, showing off the bright gleam of the sword as he brought it swinging around. I'll use the world's strongest black sword to defeat you. Thank you, I appreciate it, Zoro said as Johnny and Yosaku pleaded for him to stop, which he naturally ignored. Spinning his swords, Zoro was ready to perform the strongest attack he knew back then. Mihawk charged. At first no one could see what happened, it looked as though Hawkeye merely ran past him, the two froze where they stood, and then. Time seemed to slow as the two katanas in Zoro's hands suddenly shattered into pieces. Only the white sword in his mouth remained as Zoro fell to his knees in defeat. The Straw Hats couldn't believe it, they had never seen him lose in such a way, it wasn't even close. Without saying a word, Zoro carefully put his last sword back in its sheath as Mihawk raised his blade up, to finish him off. But before he could finish the attack, Zoro spun around and stood up, his arms wide, and his white sword still in one hand. Even Mihawk looked startled at that and asked him what he was doing. Raising his head so that they could see the dark smile on his face, he answered simply, scars on the back are a swordsman's shame. Hawkeye returned the grin. Fine, he answered, and with a single slash, he cleaved open a massive diagonal cut across Zoro's entire chest. For a second there wasn't anything, but then blood cascaded out so that the Straw Hats all felt green at the sight of it. Unable to stand any longer, Zoro's body slowly fell backwards to the sea. Zoro, Luffy screamed in horror. You shouldn't rush these things, young man, Mihawk informed him coolly as Zoro's body fell. Zoro, Usopp screamed out, unable to believe what he was seeing. Big bro, both Johnny and Yosaku yelled, a fountain of tears falling from their eyes. No, Luffy screamed, tears also appearing in his eyes as he gripped the side of the boat so tightly that it looked as if he would break it into pieces. Suddenly another voice sounded from right next to them. Don't be stupid, Sanji screamed out just as Zoro fell into the sea. Give up your ambitions and live. Luffy was shaking from where he stood. Darn you, he growled out, unable to sit still anymore. With a roar that sent miniature waves away from the Barati, Luffy went into his chimera form. However, the form he took looked even more feral than normal in his rage, and he even looked bigger than normal at a staggering 20 feet tall, packed with animal savagery, claws, fangs, and muscles. Two leathery bat-like wings burst from his back as he rocketed himself over to deal with Mihawk himself just as Johnny and Yosaku jumped in after Zoro. Seeing his powers for the first time, everyone was freaked out as they watched, even Sanji had dropped the cigarette from his mouth. It looked as though Luffy was going to slam into Mihawk as he came flying right at him, but the world's greatest swordsman simply moved out of the way just in time so that Luffy crashed into the side of the wreckage in his blind rage. Are you that young warrior's comrade? Mihawk questioned calmly when Luffy got his head horns stuck and was now attempting to pull them out. I'm impressed with you for not interfering. Luffy managed to pull his head out and fell on his back. There's nothing to be upset about, Hawkeye informed him calmly, your friend will live. At his word, however, Luffy's eyes lost their savagery as he sat bolt upright at once and turned around to see that Johnny and Yosaku had already pulled Zoro out of the water. Big bro, say something please, Yosaku begged as Zoro hung over their shoulders lifelessly for a moment. Zoro, Luffy exclaimed anxiously, his voice slightly more bestial than it normally was in his chimera form. At hearing his name, Zoro suddenly came back to life and began to cough up water and blood. Zoro, Luffy called back again worriedly, shifting back to human as the two dragged Zoro back to their boat where Usopp was waiting for them. Together, they pulled him on board and Usopp went to get some medicine for him. It's still far too early for you to die, Mihawk said as he folded his arms and proclaimed loudly. My name is Dracula Mihawk, you're strong, but there is still much for you to learn. No matter how many years it takes, I will hold this title as the greatest in the world and wait for you. Until that day you must hone your skills. Then, seek me out, Roronoa Zoro. Chef Zeph had stood there the whole time with that composed expression. Not just anyone can earn the regards of Hawkeye Mihawk, he said, and there was also a tone of respect in his voice. Mihawk turning to Luffy and asking him what his one goal was. Without any emotion in his face, Luffy answered with as little hesitation as Zoro showed, to be the king. Again, Mihawk smiled. Your ambitions are even loftier than your friends, he informed him. That's quite the task. Even though you're strong, you both have a long way to go. Yeah, well you just let me worry about that, Luffy said defiantly, and even stuck his tongue out at him, letting him know just what he thought about that. He's alive, Usopp's voice suddenly called out and they all looked to the boat. He was just unconsciousness, he declared as Zoro continued to cough up blood and seawater. Johnny and Yosaku were trying to get him to say something as Luffy called out his name worriedly. Gasping for breath, Zoro proved that he was far from dead as he lifted his white katana into the air, the sun gleaming on the silver blade. Luffy, can you hear me? He gasped out so hoarsely that they could hardly make out words. Yeah, Luffy shouted, and they were all wondering just what he was gonna say. I'm sorry for disappointing you, Zoro gasped out, breathing hard as if every word was painful. I know you need nothing less than the greatest swordsman in the world. Luffy's eyes widened and he stood there, completely taken aback by what Zoro was saying, I've let you down, please forgive me. Zoro's was suddenly coughing up more blood and water as the three around him tried to get him to stop. But he kept going on, ignoring their advice as he declared for them all to hear, I solemnly swear, from this moment forward, that I will never lose again. And to their amazement, he was sounding choked up, like he was crying. Until the day comes, he went on, struggling for air, when I defeat him and take his title. Mihawk smirked at that, as if he was privately looking forward to seeing him try. But then Zoro finally called out, I will never, never be defeated, is that okay, King of the Pirates? There was silence at that and a huge smile spread over Luffy's face, yep. Mihawk seemed pleased also as he turned and headed back to his boat. You're a good team. I hope to see you again, Sunday. Hey, Hawkeye, Krieg yelled jumping down to face him. I was under the impression that you had come here to take my life, he said, sounding insulted. Weren't you here to kill Don Krieg, ruler of the East Blue? The thought had crossed my mind, Hawkeye admitted, not even bothering to look at him, but I've had enough fun for today so I'm going home to get some rest. Krieg cracked his neck as he said with a grin, I don't care if you've had enough, I haven't even gotten started. As Krieg's crew begged him to change his mind, Krieg suddenly revealed guns and miniature cannons from underneath his armor and attacked. He just won't learn, will he? Mihawk asked in a bored way as his hand went back to his sword. No one could see what happened to him, but when the smoke from the projectiles cleared, Mihawk was gone. Luffy had jumped over and was hanging onto the Barati, and the rest of the crew was on the tiny boat. Usopp, Luffy cried out, towards everyone on the boat, go on ahead, I'll leave Nami to you. Roger that. Usopp cried back, waving the straw hat around, don't you worry about a thing. Zoro and I are gonna get her right back, make sure you get the cook to join our crew, and then, he grinned wider as he threw the hat to him, the 5 of us will set sail to the Grand Line. Luffy stretched out to grab the hat, and he was grinning from ear to ear. Yeah, let's do it. The Creek pirates were getting ready to attack them again now that the threat was gone and Usopp took charge of sailing the boat after Nami. Hey Pops, Luffy cried out, still hanging on the side of the Barati. Can I stop doing these chores if I get those pirates out of here? Suit yourself, Zeph answered in a voice as if he couldn't care less. Grinning from ear to ear, Luffy leaned up to continue hanging from the railing as he looked at Zeph. Okay Pops, you promised me remember, he said, just making sure he understood everything. If I run those pirates off then my debt to you is clear, no more chores. That's the deal, Zeph confirmed with a nod. There's no telling how much more of my restaurant you'll screw up if you stick around. Luffy laughed in agreement and bonked his own head, letting them know that he knew how clumsy he was. So kid, Zeph said in interest, you said you were gonna be king of the pirates, were you serious? Well yeah, of course, Luffy answered without a doubt in his mind, I'm definitely gonna be king of the pirates someday. Zeph smirked. I've seen a whole lot of pirates in my day, but you're the first to state your desire so clearly and without a doubt. I heard that back in the day, you were a pretty awesome pirate yourself, Luffy said, so did you want to be king of the pirates too? Luffy asked curiously. Zeph looked up at the sky to see a seagull soaring above and answered, I do my best to forget about the past, I'm the owner of Barati now and that's quite enough for me. Krieg gave the command for the pirates to start attacking the Barati. However, the chefs were ready to fight. Luffy launched himself over them and momentarily was lost from view. However, a huge shadow suddenly formed over the Krieg pirates and they all looked up, causing them all to pale and quite a few to scream out, holy crap. Before there was a cry of, blue whale belly flop. With that, a huge blue whale, still wearing Luffy's hat on its head, crashed onto the pirates, heavily injuring most of them and knocking a large number out. The chefs cheered on their chore boy, which was quickly reduced to spluttering when the waves from the belly flop splashed most of them right in the face. It's hard to believe. The Grand Line is crawling with guys like these, Sanji asked, shaking his head, both in disbelief and to get the water out of his hair. Sanji, Zeph said, remarkably still dry, while staring ahead at the fight, but still addressing the Sanji standing next to him. Pay special attention to how this one fights, he said, don't take your eyes off him for a moment, until this fight is over, is that clear? Sanji gave a hesitant nod and went back to observing the fight. Luffy, who transformed back and was now hanging from one of the broken masts, was looking down at the pirates calling out, so let me see if I got this straight. You're attacking the restaurant that gave you food? I got no choice but to beat some manners into you. Krieg laughed, mocking him to fight on the water, which goes to show how stupid he actually is since he just saw Luffy plunge in and out of the water, as the whole restaurant began to shake. With a great rumbling noise, something was coming up from under the sea and some of them were screaming in fear. There was a cry from the chefs of, raise the fins, before dark wood broke through the surface. It turns out the fins were actually a wooden deck for them to all stand on. Suddenly, Patty and Carne pulled out a secret weapon that had been hidden in the fish head of the Barati and declared that they were going to use it to protect the ship no matter what. It turns out, however, that Krieg was more than just some armor and pistols. He was able to stop the weapon with his bare hands and had actually threw it back towards the chefs. Thankfully Sanji took care of it when he jumped up and with a single kick, stopped it in its tracks. The fish head smashed into the fin and leaving the restaurant unscathed. Bursting out from the wreckage, Patty and Carne were yelling at Sanji for almost killing them just as the conscious Krieg pirates jumped up to fight, boarding the fins and laughing. It started off as a standoff, but the cooks rushed in to fight, but they were no match for their sheer numbers. However, the worst part was listening to them brag at how strong they were. The cooks refused to take it. They said that this restaurant was their home and they weren't giving it up to them without a fight. Patty and Carne were a lot stronger than the rest of them and were able to fight them off, at least until another one of Krieg's men appeared. He was a towering man, was dressed with 2 large iron plates covering his front and back side, as well as 2 small plates on his hands with large pearls embedded in them. I am Pearl, the invincible shield, he cried out. Pearl had taken out both Patty and Carne, but when the pirates tried to take Patty's knife from his hands, Sanji kicked them out, outraged that they would try to touch a kitchen knife, a chef's soul. As the pirates charged him, he took them all out with a few kicks as Pearl mocked him about only fighting with his legs. I'm a cook, remember? Sanji demanded. I couldn't do my job very well if I ruined my hands in battle. He held up a leg and finished, so I'll be taking you down with my feet. Pearl merely went on to explain that he won all 61 battles without a stretch, that he never shed a drop of blood in battle. And no sooner were those words out of Pearl's mouth when Creek pulled out a spike ball and swung it around, trying to take Luffy out with it. Luffy was sent flying through the air, but when he landed, he ended up hitting Pearl in the back of the head with such force he gave him a nosebleed. As Pearl stared at the blood, his eyes were widening and he was shaking. The other Creek pirates were all telling Pearl to stay calm, that it was only a nosebleed. These people aren't just mean, they're dangerous, Pearl muttered, his face twitching horribly at that. The other pirates meanwhile were getting more and more frantic by the look on Pearl's face. So, Sanji said slowly, looking around at everyone, want to tell me why everyone's freaking out? Luffy, who was picking his nose, said, they're worried about a nosebleed? Pearl was banging the two shields on his hands together, looking close to freaking out, screaming out, danger, danger. Gez, what is that guy doing? Sanji yelled in annoyance. Just then, Pearl set himself on fire. Pearl set the ship and even his own crewmates on fire, and as the blaze spread, it had created a sort of wall of fire around him to keep any potential attackers at bay. Before you could blink, the fire spread and soon the entire fin was now in flames. Sanji couldn't take it anymore as he jumped high, over the wall of flames, landing a dropkick on Pearl's face. After working off a minor concussion, Pearl looked horrified. But these flames scare everyone away, he screamed out, looking ready to cry. Well, Sanji answered, holding out his cigarette, looking like he didn't have a care in the world at that moment. I wouldn't be much of a cook if I was afraid of fire. Pearl seemed to lose it completely as he shot out flaming pearls, aiming them directly at the restaurant, determined to set it on fire too. But Zeph was one step ahead of him. When the pearls neared him, he stood on his one good leg and used the peg leg to give a swift kick, and the gust from that attack had actually put the fires out and caused them to drop to the deck harmlessly. But with the fire still raging, Krieg had decided to take out the fin himself with the spike ball. When he threw it, he aimed it directly over where Sanji and Pearl were fighting, but with them both trapped by the fire, they had nowhere to go. But just before it hit, Luffy came jumping through the fire and saved Sanji by transforming his arm into a muscular, scale-covered claw in order to send the ball flying back towards Krieg with a hard punch. He tossed that thing right back. Sanji gasped in shock as Luffy was now attempting to put out the fire on his backside. The spike ball was flung into another broken mast, smashing it apart even further, and when it fell, it ended up breaking on Pearl's head, knocking him out and put an end to the fire. However, the Krieg pirates have not said their last word. While they were fighting, Jin had snuck up behind Zeph, and was now holding him at gunpoint. With this, Sanji was asked to surrender. Jin demanded to have the ship, then threatened to kill Zeph if Sanji fought back against Pearl, who managed to get back to his feet, but Sanji wasn't moving and he even went as far as to mock Zeph for the state he was in. However, the whole time, he tried to get Jin to come after him instead. Pearl launched another attack, and without raising a leg to defend himself, Sanji was slammed into the side of the restaurant. Sanji! Luffy screamed out as blood started dripping down from Sanji's face. Because, Sanji hissed to Luffy, answering his question, if I did, that rat over there would have pulled the trigger on Zeph. There was silence for a moment as that sunk in. Jin tried to plead into just giving up the restaurant and that he wouldn't get hurt, but Sanji just couldn't. He couldn't give it up, and he knew what was going to come up. This restaurant is that old man's life, Sanji declared from where he lay, lowering his head in guilt as he confessed. I've already took everything else that man holds dear. His power, his dreams, so while I'm around, he then screamed out, I'm not gonna let anything else get taken from him. Seeing this behavior, the other chefs asked Sanji what he meant by this before the blonde cook was once again attacked by Pearl, who took the opportunity for some payback, and had slammed his shields into his head, and blood was now pouring out of his mouth and nose. Sanji was able to raise his head and told the cooks everything. He explained that he owed Zeph his life. How that, 9 years earlier, when he was a child, he was working as a ship's cook on a cruise ship in the North Blue. One night, the pirate Red Leg Zeph and his crew attacked the ship and pilfered it for anything valuable. However, both ships were caught in a sudden storm, and were destroyed. As they sank, Zeph managed to save them both from drowning, but had lost part of his leg in the process, and the two were washed onto a rock outcropping, high above the sea. Apparently, the two of them were the only survivors, but despite living through the storm, the island they were on was like a slow and painful death sentence. There was little food for them. Only a few rations had washed onto the rock with them, but there wasn't any trees or plants, no animals, and no way to reach the water to fish. Splitting up what little rations they had, Zeph ordered Sanji to sit at the other end of the island, and look for a ship. Zeph had given Sanji enough food for 5 days, but he had been able to make it last for about 20, and how he had nothing left but a moldy loaf of bread. But still no one ever came. Weeks passed and then months. Finally it came to a point that it was like he had been trapped in a daze. He was stuck staring out at the sea for so long that he could no longer tell the difference between the sun rising or setting. After about 3 months, he was starved to within an inch of his life, hardly more than skin and bones. Emaciated and desperate for food, he decided to take a chance and kill Zeph for his food. But when he slashed open the old man's sack in a fit of rage, he discovered that there was only treasure inside. That was when he realized that, not only did Zeph give him all the food that they had, but Zeph had sacrificed his own leg for him as well. Soon afterwards, a ship finally appeared, and they were spared from death. Because of this ordeal, Sanji pledged to never refuse food to a starving individual, no matter how evil or poor they may be. The smoking chef was struggling to get back to his feet. His hand curling up into a fist, he gasped out, that old fart gave up his leg so that I could live. Everyone in the area stared at him as he got to his feet and declared, there's no way to repay the old geezer for his kindness unless I risk my life for him. However, not everyone agreed. Luffy's eyes turned dark and was just looking at him as Jin asked Sanji why he got back up. Sanji smirked as he said, afraid I can't do that. It's a little too much like giving up. The other cooks were trying to warn Sanji that he was going to get himself killed. Their words all fell on deaf ears because his eyes said that Sanji was ready to die for the Bharati. But then Luffy did something unexpected. He seemed to have lost it completely. With a dangerous look in his eyes, shaking in anger, he launched himself into the air before becoming incredibly large with a big snout and tough, grayish skin. No, don't, Sanji screamed. Understanding what was about to happen, Jin'll shot the old man. But Luffy was no longer listening as he screamed out the top of his lung, "Hippo," and like that, his body came slamming down from the sky so that when he landed on the fin, it was instantly smashed to pieces. As Luffy hit the fin there was a dangerous, wild look in his, still human, eyes that was nothing his normal, cheerful self as he finished declaring his attack, Cannonball. The world seemed to shake as his body came down and with a great booming sound, the shrapnel went flying every which way and the ocean water came down like rain. There was stunned silence for a moment as they tried to recover from what just happened. Luffy was smiling as he surfaced in human form, glad for what he did. But with fury on his face, Krieg ordered Jin to hurry and kill Zeph, except Jin seemed reluctant to do so. "I don't see why you're all so upset," Luffy said as Sanji tried to tell him off for what he did to the Barati, but as he got up Luffy finished, "But I'm gonna sink it," and by looking at the look on his face, they could tell that he was deadly serious. No one could seem to believe what they were hearing and Sanji even got right up in Luffy's face. "You moron, that's what you're doing," he demanded furiously, "you can't sink this ship." "But if the restaurant's gone then there's no reason to attack then is there?" Luffy retorted. "No," Sanji screamed at him, "this ship saved my life, I owe everything to her, and you will not take that away." "You're gonna die for a dumb old restaurant?" Luffy asked him, and for the first time it sounded like he thought Sanji was the crazy one here. "Are you stupid?" "What did you say?" Sanji growled. "Getting killed," Luffy yelled out as he grabbed Sanji by his jacket and pulled him right into his face. "That's how you're gonna repay your debt. The old man didn't save you so you could kill yourself. He did it so that you could do something with your life, not to die like a fool." "And so your big idea is to help them attack us?" Sanji yelled back, the two almost nose to nose again, like how he and Zeph usually fight. Meanwhile, Pearl was laughing, telling them all that they couldn't do anything so long as Zeph was their captive and that he was gonna kill them both himself. However, before Pearl could strike Sanji and Luffy, Jin suddenly abandoned his duty of holding Zeph at gunpoint and dashed forward so that he quickly defeated him, shattering his invincible shield in one blow with a pair of tonfas that had cannonballs welded to their ends. Krieg was yelling at Jin, demanding to know what he was doing, but Jin stated that he will be the one to finish off Sanji, that he owed him this much. Here, the chefs found out that Jin was Krieg's chef commander, his second in command more or less, and the rest of the Krieg pirates all agreed that he was strong and a merciless monster to them all. "Sanji, look, I'm just following orders," Jin said, sounding remorseful. "I don't want to ruin this ship, but I think it's too late for that." "Maybe," Sanji said to him darkly, "but if you think you're gonna get to this restaurant without killing me then you got another thing coming. Perhaps in our next lives we'll be friends." "Sounds fair," Jin said, lifting his weapon on his shoulder. "Then it'll be an absolute pleasure to kill you, my good friend." "Geez, that's comforting," Sanji said as he lit a cigarette, crap face. "You as well, sure boy," Jin added, looking over at Luffy. "Geez, thanks," Luffy said indifferently, but he didn't seem worried at all, "but I'm not afraid of any Krieg pirate." Jin was looking annoyed as the rest of Krieg's crew were all angry and were shrieking out insults and death threats, just outraged he had the gall to say something like that. "We are the Krieg pirates, the strongest in East Blue," one of the pirates declared without a doubt in his mind. Luffy looked at them all, as if pitying them and said, "Only because you outnumbered the other pirates in the East Blue." There was nothing but silence, all the pirates grinding their teeth, looking like they wanted to dismiss it, yet at the same time, they couldn't declare that was a lie. "Oh boy," Sanji said, "now you really ticked him off." "Guess I was right," Luffy answered. The Krieg pirates saw this as unforgivable and they started to rush in, ready to try and prove themselves. However, they were immediately stopped by Krieg, telling Jin to hurry up and kill them. The battle went on and soon it was Jin and Sanji going at each other. Though strong, there was no doubt in anyone's minds that Sanji could have beaten him if he hadn't been injured by Pearl. Jin was fast and able to keep up with him, as well as even breaking some of Sanji's ribs by the sounds of it, but in the end, the injuries were what was making it almost impossible for Sanji to attack without terrible pain. It ended when Jin managed to pin him down and have his weapon above his head. With Sanji in pain, Luffy went after Krieg, but Krieg releases his armored and planned to kill Luffy there. He shoots Luffy with bombs and spears. Luffy was able to use his knife to deflect most of the spears and his animal-honed reflexes to jump over the others, however the bombs blew him far away from the armored pirate. Then, Luffy asks if Krieg is not serious to fight with him as he brushed himself off from the explosions like it was an everyday thing for him. So, Krieg answers if the important thing in fighting is strategy to kill the opponent. Krieg jeers Luffy as a monkey because he just attacks without strategy, causing Luffy to gain a mischievous grin. With Luffy dealing with Krieg, something else happened. Just as Jin was about to land the final blow, Sanji found himself before a supposedly heartless pirate unable to kill him. Even with Krieg bellowing at him dead, Jin was crying, declaring that because of Sanji's previous kindness, he just couldn't bring himself to finish the job, he just can't forgive himself if he killed him. Krieg was disappointed with Jin. Although, before that, Jin was the person he trusted the most. Krieg sees excess in Jin's personality that will win in the battlefield with anyway. Then, Jin said that he always followed every order that Krieg had ever given him and that he will always respect and admire him. But, Jin still cannot kill him and begs to let the Barati's ship go. While this saved Sanji from being bludgeoned by Jin, it angered Krieg. "You little brat," Krieg yelled furiously as he stood up, "you think you can defy my orders and then tell me what to do?" Jin could say nothing as tears continued to flow down his face. "It's pathetic. Morality, sympathy, weaknesses I never expected to see from you," Krieg yelled. "You are not my chef commander anymore," Krieg continued to yell as he grabbed part of his armor and pointed it directly at the three of them. "Pirates," he called to his crew, "step aside." Just then, the skull on the shield opened its mouth to reveal the nozzle of a miniature cannon. At the sight of it, Jin gasped in horror. "No, not the gas," he cried. All the other pirates freaked out as well. "He's gonna use the MH5. We're all gonna die. Where's my mask? Just breathing it in can kill a normal person in just a few minutes to even a few hours." The pirates all fished masks out of nowhere and were covering their faces. "The only thing that matters in a battle is who ends up winning," Krieg stated before he smirked. "Even if more have got to die, poison gas is just a means to an end. Victory is all that decides what's right and what's wrong. If you're dead, no one's gonna hear you complain anyway. When you don't hesitate to do unspeakable, horrible things, Krieg stated, grinning ever wider, that is true power. Luffy's face was cold and they were all sickened at the thought. Might as well throw that gas mask away, ordered Krieg as he saw Jin pulling out his mask. You're no longer worthy to be a Krieg pirate. Luffy charged at Krieg, trying to make one last-ditch effort to stop him, and even proclaiming that he wasn't going to let him do it. You're wasting your time, shore boy, Krieg said as he punched the mask Luffy was running on, shattering it to pieces and causing him to lose his footing. In his desperation, Luffy dove into the water out of sight. The military pirates seemed surprised and pleased at this turn of events, thinking that he'd won as he prepared to fire the MH5, thinking that now he only had to deal with 2 small annoyances, believing Luffy to have drowned. Suddenly, a hammerhead shark, wearing Luffy's straw hat, burst from the water and nailed Krieg right in the stomach with a cry of, "Hammerhead butt." Unfortunately, the blow only knocked Krieg slightly off balance as he was still protected by his armor, and he was able to fire the gas bomb directly at the Bharati. Both pirates and cooks dove into the water as Patty and Carne took Zeph inside, but the 2 on the platform didn't have time to move anywhere. Thinking fast, Luffy dove back into the water to try and intercept the bomb, but he knew it would be too late as the bomb landed on one of the platforms. A giant explosion rocked the area and a wave of purple gas filled the air, shrouding everything in front of them so that they couldn't see anything. It was deadly silent. The only sound came from the cry of a seagull above them, but soon it fell from the sky, dead before it hit the water. They waited and waited, every minute feeling like it stretched on to an hour, but after a painful 5-minute wait, the gas finally started to clear for them to see just what happened. Luffy was safe as he hoped out of the water in human form, but the problem was Jin. Sanji yelling through his mask to get Jin off him, who was holding it there, making sure that he couldn't move. "Jin, are you okay?" Luffy gasped. Jin didn't answer him, but his skin was now a sickly, dark purple and he was struggling for breath, coughing up blood from his mouth and nose. Every single painful gasp was weaker than the last. "It's your mask, you gave it to Sanji," Luffy whispered, staring at the mask on the blonde cook's face, realizing what happened. Jin collapsed just as more blood erupted from his mouth. "No," Luffy yelled, heading towards them as Sanji quickly caught him and held him up as he fought for his breath. But when Krieg started to laugh at it, Luffy stopped and turned to glare at him. "What a fool," Krieg said, having removed his own mask, and was now mocking Jin's condition. "You're paying for a plate of food with your life? Oh well, maybe you'll learn when you're dead." Sanji was still holding Jin, who was gasping out Krieg's name. Whether it was in anger or pleading, it was hard to say as he wheezed for air. "Jin," Sanji whispered softly, "so it seems." He glared up at Krieg with disgust. "That Don Krieg wasn't the right man for you to follow, was he?" Krieg just laughed, and the sound of it was making them long to hit him. "It figures that you would still feel for that pathetic scum," he said loudly. "Scum," Sanji exclaimed in rage. "That's right. Anyone who loses focus and betrays my ship is worthless to me," Krieg said as he grinned again. He would almost certainly do it again. Putting him out of his misery is an act of mercy to keep him from dishonoring himself in the future and endangering my crew. The Krieg pirates, meanwhile, just couldn't believe that Krieg would kill Jin. No one was more loyal to Krieg than Jin, and the chefs all learned that when they escaped from the Grand Line and were being pursued by Full Body, Jin went out alone and masqueraded as Krieg. Jin always sacrificed himself to save Krieg and he did anything to win. That's why people called him Demon. Sanji turned to Patty and Carne and told them to get the kit used for food poisoning, as Zeph told him to put the mask on to detoxify the gas in his lungs and then to take him to the upper deck of the Bharati where the air was fresher. Krieg just laughed and claimed that because of the poison, Jin will die in 1 hour. Luffy suddenly spoke again. "Don't you dare die, Jin," he said, and though his words were quiet, everyone seemed to have heard it and turned to look at him. Even Jin raised his head a little to try and see him, though it was hard to tell with the mask over his face. "You can't let someone like him win," Luffy told him, his eyes as sharp and cold as Mihawk's had been as he glared at Krieg. "Stick around, now I'm mad. You'll want to see what I'm gonna do to him next." Jin, however, didn't believe that Luffy can defeat Krieg. Even Sanji tries to stop him too and yelled that he will be killed if he attacks him head-on. To make everyone stop worrying, Luffy just said, "I'm not worried," and then he started his attack at Krieg's front. "Go ahead and give it your best shot," he screamed as Krieg grinned cockily and Sanji cried for him not to do it. But Luffy ignored him as he charged ahead, and they knew that he wasn't going to back down this time. "You are only running towards one thing, shore boy, and that is," Krieg said as he threw several small bombs into the water, "your funeral." "My funeral?" Luffy repeated scathingly. The bombs went off to both blind the animal man and to prevent him from jumping back into the water. The water splashed up around him and that was when Krieg took out his spiked machine gun again and shot through the water. But Luffy still ran through it, and when he burst out of the waves the chefs noticed his body was covered in a shell-like material from the front of a turtle. Unfortunately, this didn't stop several of the spikes from hitting Luffy's unprotected limbs. But Luffy ignored the pain as he neared Krieg. Reeling his arm back, a scale started to cover it. Luffy cried out, "Turtle." Realizing that he was going to try an attack, Krieg revealed a robe made of dangerous spikes to deter any attacks. "Jab," Luffy yelled, as he went and punched him right through the metal spikes, the spikes scraping against the scales on his hand, and managed to strike Krieg dead in the face. Both pirates and cooks were staring in horror at what Luffy had just done. Someone then summed up all their thoughts by shouting out 3 words, "That's messed up." Luffy was standing there almost like a zombie for a moment before he went and began to pull the spikes out. It was then that everyone noticed that the cuts on Luffy's hands weren't much worse than paper cuts. Most likely the worst of the damage was blocked due to the tough scales. "So is this my funeral?" he asked as he pulled out the first spike and threw it to the ground and went on, "Or yours?" He went for another spike. "You can't kill me, with little spikes." Out came that one. "My funeral," he threw out the last spike, "will take more than this." Breathing hard for a minute and biting back the pain, he went on, "You'll have to do better than that, if you wanna beat me." He looked back up, grinned wildly, "'Cause I don't think it's time for me to die just yet." Sanji, who was nursing his wounds from Jin, was now looking over at him. "I know one thing, he's nuts," he said to Zeph. Zeph smirked down at him before he said, "I've seen 1 or 2 like him before." Stubborn kids who rather die and have to turn away from a fight once it's started. He'll stay, Sanji said knowingly. That's for sure. I'm glad he's with us cause guys like that are hell to fight, Zeph said conversationally. I don't care if he wins or loses, Zeph finished. I consider it an honor just to be able to watch him. So boy, it's not your funeral yet, is it? Too bad, Krieg snarled from where he lay and slowly began to lift himself up. Because one of us has got to go. And since I'm here, I'd really like to pay my respects. He charged Luffy and slammed one of his shields at point blank, die. He screamed as he fired a miniature explosion. But Luffy easily jumped to avoid it and even hooked his foot on Krieg's shoulder when he jumped over him, knocking him down twice in under a minute. You first, Luffy shouted out as the bulky armor hit the platform with a resounding thud. Unnoticed by all was how dark hair was starting to creep up the Chimera boy's limbs and the beginnings of a tail started to sprout from his spine. Meanwhile, this creates severe anguish amongst his crew members, as Krieg has always came out of a battle unscathed. It was the first time they had ever seen Krieg being knocked down and they were all wondering that he wasn't invincible after all and his reputation would be destroyed if a kid was able to defeat him. However, when one crewmate began to believe that Luffy might just be stronger than Krieg, that got his attention. Shut up, maggots. Never doubt me, Krieg screamed before combining his shoulder plates together to form his mighty battle spear, which he slams into the ground next to Luffy, creating an explosion. The Krieg pirates were finally rejoicing as they see Krieg's secret weapon, as he discards his cape and explained that it was stronger than the spikes he fired at Luffy earlier. While Luffy wondered out loud how the spear made an explosion as he hid behind a broken part of the ship, Krieg gave him an answer by bragging once again. My mighty battle spear, he boasted, it's different from any other. When this thing hits you, you won't just be wounded and failing, you'll be blown straight into the afterlife. Continuing the battle, the surrounding wreckage was eventually reduced to sunken rubble with both combatants having very little room to move on. Krieg swung it again, sending Luffy flying over the ocean, but after the swing was completed, Krieg couldn't see Luffy at all. Noticing that his spear felt heavier for some reason, the villainous pirate looked at the spear's end and was shocked to see Luffy hanging upside down from the head of the spear with a long brown tail wrapped around the shaft. Not just the tail, but Luffy's arms, legs, and part of his face were covered in dark hair while his feet had gained opposable thumbs, the pirate going for his monkey man form. Seeing the cheerful grin on the straw hat wearing monkey boy, Krieg lost what little patience he had left and started swinging his spear like a baseball bat in order to throw off the annoyance. Luffy was able to easily flip off the spear before he was thrown, however, and landed gracefully several feet away from the larger man before slipping into a battle stance. You said earlier that I fought like a monkey with no plan at all, Luffy chittered, well let me show you how a real monkey fights. Krieg gave a roar as he made several attempts at stabbing the agile monkey, all of which Luffy either dodged with ease with impressive acrobatic movements or was able to punch and kick the spear away before it could make contact. Krieg was looking slightly out of breath after 5 minutes of this and the Chimera man's victory looked assured, but just then Luffy's one leg buckled leaving him kneeling and trying to catch his breath, a dark reed starting to stain his fur from the wounds on his arms and legs. He's lost way too much blood, Sanji said, still holding onto his hurt ribs, he can't fight for much longer. This better end quickly. Krieg continues his assault on Luffy, who was now dodging for his life as the wounds started to take their toll. He jumped to the section of the ship Luffy was resting on and ended up blowing it up. On and on, Luffy was being attacked and was forced to only dodge until he found a way out of it. He was able to keep it up for a while before he finally lost his balance, which makes him wide open for an attack. However, just in the nick of time, Luffy grabbed the lance before it can hit him once more. Enraged, Krieg slams the spear into the ground, forcing Luffy to let go. Krieg proceeded to ram the spear at Luffy, who punched the tip, creating an explosion which sent him flying through the air. But already, Luffy was forcing his wounded body to get back up. And like before, Krieg swung the spear at him, and again, Luffy punched the blade, making it explode a second time. Krieg swung again, declaring that he was stronger than Luffy. Nonetheless, Luffy took each hit without budging an inch. Crap, Sanji hissed. There's no way that Chorboy can take much more of this. That spear is way too powerful. No, you're wrong, Zeph said to Sanji in disagreement. Even with 100,000 more weapons, our Chorboy can still bring him to his knees because he does not know fear. Sanji looked up at Zeph in confusion as Krieg dished out another attack at Luffy, and of course Luffy met it head on. Burnt black with his fur now smoldering, Luffy landed flat on his back on the wreckage, smoking lightly. Krieg smirked as he turned and walked away, sneering that it was too easy. But at those words, Luffy began to push himself back up. Stopping dead in his tracks, Krieg turned to look as he raised the spear back up. Now that's impressive, he muttered, but he was looking angry now. Stand or fall, Zeph went on, life or death, in a struggle for your very existence, you cannot have even the slightest bit of fear or you will be lost. But Sanji didn't seem to understand as he asked him what he was talking about. That kid out there, Zeph answered impatiently, as if speaking to someone dumb, as Luffy charged again and took another blast to the face. When he's fighting, Zeph said as Luffy pushed himself back up through the broken boards with a grin. He's not afraid of anything. Not even death. Still smiling, Luffy got up once again and went up for another blast to the face. Is it all instinct? Zeph asked suddenly, or all a plan? He grinned, as if he figured it all out on his own. We'll know soon, if he lives. What plan? Sanji asked him, killing himself. Krieg was getting more annoyed, veins sticking out on his head as he snarled at Luffy, cursing him out. But Luffy just continued to grin as the chefs all cheered from the background. I told you, Krieg yelled as he ran with his spear, today is your funeral. Another boom went off, I am invincible. Just then, Luffy threw himself back at Krieg one more time. Another boom sounded off and there was silence for a moment. There is no doubt that Krieg and his pirates are strong, Zeph continued one, but Chorboy has something they'll never have. Krieg may have more pirates at his command than anyone else before him, he may have terrible weapons of mass destruction to everything in his path, but he will never have that kid's heart. Sanji was just watching it before his one visible eye suddenly widened in understanding. No sooner did he say that did Luffy slam his foot into the deck, and the shockwave from that broke the tip of the spear, much to Krieg's confusion and horror. The great battle spear, Krieg yelled in disbelief. What did you do, boy? Luffy grinned at him. I just punched it in the head 5 times. It looks tired, maybe it needs a rest. Luffy's eyes narrowed as he said, now it's my turn. You ready for this? Because that was all I needed, Luffy said with a huge grin. Now that your little toy's broken, you're nothing to me. Krieg's eyes narrowed. Oh yeah, without the blade, it's just a bomb on a stick. And let's face it, that's pretty lame, Luffy stated. Krieg smirked again before going in for another attack, but Luffy dodged it and jumps up to the mast, swinging around like how an actual monkey would from the tree. Then Krieg breaks the mast, missing Luffy completely as he threw the mast like a javelin back at him. But, Krieg destroyed it by shooting fire at it from a miniature flamethrower attached to his wrist. Once they were on a stable platform, Luffy ran forward to hit Krieg with a series of punches and kicks with his animalistic strength. Krieg's armor, however, withstood the attack. Finally angry, Luffy ran forward, becoming more muscular as his tail disappeared, his gorilla man form, and reared back his arm so that he could hit him once again. When his fist hit the armor, they could hear the deep ringing noise like a bell when he hit. Luffy kept going, but Krieg hit him with the remains of the spear and he was sent back across the deck. As Luffy was trying to recover, Krieg jumped to the top of the tallest remaining mast and sneered down at him, calling to him to get him to look up. You don't stand a chance, boy. He yelled down. Real power comes from deadly weapons. They're the source of true strength. He sneered. See, only the strong are meant to live. And that's me. You're just a stupid, filthy animal. Krieg threw out bombs from his place on top the mast, but Luffy chased in to try and stop him. The whole time, there was an evil grin still on his face. Yeah. He challenged. That's what you think. He threw his muscular and hairy arms back when he got near enough to the cocky jerk. Krieg hit him with his weapon one more time, but it wasn't enough to stop the gorilla double hammer. That came flying at him. Through the explosion and smoke, Luffy charged through and finished crying out his attack, Krieg screaming in shock. And that was when he was sent flying into the air, his bombs falling from his hands. Something was wrong though, as there was a blank look in Luffy's eyes, smoke coming out of his mouth from that last detonation. That's it, Krieg bragged as he went flying backwards. After all that big talk, that's all you got. But then he blinked in surprise to see that his golden arm was cracking apart and was then yelling in disbelief about it. However, his smirk was back soon when he noticed that Luffy still didn't move. To him, his destroyed armor was enough of a price for this victory. But Sanji realized what those bombs were and screamed up at Luffy, it's a trap. Get out. The bombs Krieg's dropped exploded and destroyed the rest of the battlefield. There wasn't anything left but splinters. The rocking waves put everyone in the water in danger and Sanji cried out over the noise in fear. Once again, Luffy surprised them all, bursting through the smoke with his arms now changed into a bird's wings, Krieg screaming out in terror at the sight of his face, losing all his cool. What? Krieg screamed in utter shock. Luffy quickly shifted his arms back to human and then once more into their gorilla form and gave another yell of, gorilla double hammer, and when this attack hit, it did the job. He destroyed the armor by shattered it to pieces and sent Krieg falling to the ocean. I totally win, Luffy screamed out, his hands in the air in victory. This isn't over yet, boy, Krieg screamed, and Luffy looked taken aback by the fact that he was still in it. Krieg shot a steel net from the same arm that had the flamethrower and wrapped around Luffy. He was now trapped and Krieg was laughing as he pulled him to the sea, confident that Luffy would still get tangled up and drown in the net, believing he could only turn into larger animals. Krieg laughed in triumph as he pulled Luffy towards the sea. You can't escape, this is a steel net. Luffy struggled in the net, as Krieg screamed out triumphantly, it's over. That's the ocean down there. Looks like I'll be getting the last laugh after all, chore boy. But Luffy suddenly had an idea, transforming into a small hummingbird and slipping right out of the net before going back to human, much to Krieg's shock and horror. Falling towards Krieg at neck-breaking speeds, Luffy laughed out, I got that jerk right where I wanted him. Luffy began to grow bigger as his skin took on a grayish hue and his nose turned into a long trunk while sharp tusks poked through his mouth, turning him into an elephant. The straw hat-wearing elephant wrapped his trunk around Krieg's head and spun around to trap him, spinning like a propeller as he aimed it right at the Barati's fin. Time for me to end this, right now. Elephant, he cried out eagerly, the two were both screaming, but for different reasons. Giant hammer, and with that, Luffy slammed Krieg's head into the fin, shattering what was left of it, where Krieg finally lost and backed out. Luffy, going back to his normal form, grinned before exhaustion took over. He was out cold before he even hit the water. Scene break. Luffy was sitting up in bed, looking around sleepily and realized that he wasn't alone. Sanji was sitting in the window, looking out at the sea. Luffy blinked a few times, and they could see that he had several bandages wrapped in the places where he pulled the spikes out as he put his hand on his head and screamed out in panic. My hat, where's my hat? It's right there. Calm down, Sanji said loudly. Luffy's hat was sitting on a shelf with things like cigarettes and even a picture of Sanji and Zeph when they first opened the restaurant. Luffy sighed in relief and put it happily on his head. Have a good nap, Sanji asked as Luffy looked around the room. Hey, those pirates, Luffy asked in confusion, and it was clear he was trying to figure out how he got here. They're gone now, Sanji answered, all thanks to you. Me, he asked in surprise. Yeah, though you're lucky. One of those spikes hit a vein and with you both jumping around and changing so much, it's a miracle you didn't bleed to death. You're one freaky guy, you know that right? To which Luffy smiled sheepishly while scratching the back of his head. Sanji gave an amused chuckle before continuing, oh and before I forget, Jin asked me to tell you that he said he'll see you on the Grand Line, Sanji said, looking back out at the ocean. He did, Luffy asked in surprise, to you? No, to you, Sanji yelled back as he climbed out the window to the balcony and walked to the railing. There was silence all around them for a moment before Luffy reminded him that he didn't have to be chore boy anymore since he got Krieg out of here. That's the deal, Sanji confirmed for him. Hey, I was wondering. Luffy said, but Sanji already guessed what he was gonna say and beat him by telling him that his answer was still no, he wasn't going to become a pirate. That he was going to stay here at the Baratie until Zeph acknowledged him as a real cook. Luffy sighed, his eyes overshadowed as he told him that he finally gave up. However, his words and his actions didn't match. His arm became scaly and reached out to grab hold of Sanji's collar like a snake, and the blonde chef was gasping at him to let go. Sanji was telling Luffy that he couldn't leave just yet, but that he did promise himself that one day he would go to the Grand Line. Luffy beamed as he stretched out to join him on the balcony. Well, let's go right now, he said. It just isn't the right time. Not yet, Sanji said. They continued to look out at the sea for a moment before he said, there is one place, and without another word, he turned back to Luffy and asked, his face suddenly lighting up with exhilaration as he asked, say, have you ever heard of All Blue? No, Luffy answered bluntly. You've got to be kidding me. Question mark quote. Sanji asked, still never losing his smile. That sea is a miracle. Luffy's eyes widened as he went on and on about his dream of one day seeing the All Blue. In the All Blue there are fish from the East Blue, the West Blue, the North Blue, and the South Blue, he said breathlessly, that one stretch of ocean has it all. To us cooks it's a culinary dream come true. A place that fantastic has got to be on the Grand Line somewhere, right? Luffy was intrigued, because he talked to several fish by his island yet none mentioned anything like the All Blue. Of course, most fish aren't known for their attention spans. This continued on for some time about Sanji's dreams of seeing the All Blue and what he would make once he got there. When Patty screamed out that lunch was served, the two decided to go down and get some as well. But they came before a surprising incident. First, there wasn't any seating left and he and Luffy were forced to sit on the floor. Luffy decided to eat in dog form, since it was much more comfortable eating on the floor that way. That is until several chefs, including Sanji, whacked the clothed dog over the head, correctly guessing that he was the one playing the cute puppy act to win table scraps from the customers. Things settled back down as the chefs went back to their meals. Soon though it got nasty when all the chefs kept going on about how they hated his food. It ended with a big fight with Zeph and Sanji before he went charging out. The only one who didn't have something to say about Sanji's cooking was Luffy, who was gulping it all down. What's all the fuss about? He asked, ladling himself more and licking some off his muzzle. This soup's totally awesome. All of us know the soup is good, Zeph said, and Luffy looked up in surprise. I know he's an outstanding chef. Everyone here on the Baratie does, Zeph said. Not a single one of the other cooks disagreed, all of them nodding the same way and told him what they all thought. But the thick-skulled idiot wouldn't listen to us if we tried to reason with him, he said. Luffy continued to enjoy the soup when Zeph made a surprising request. Hey, listen, you were saying that you needed a cook for your ship, right? Well, this isn't something I wanna be asking anyone, but would you mind taking that little brat along with ya? Take him to the Grand Line. He smiled, that would be best for him. The Grand Line is his dream. Geez boss, you sure made us put on a heck of a show, Patty said, looking close to laughing. Oh man, Carne laughed, I was worried he was gonna figure it out cause of your bad acting. Patty laughed, come on, your acting was way worse than mine. But their fight was interrupted when Luffy said something that made them all almost fall over, no way. But earlier you mentioned you needed a cook for your ship, Zeph said loudly, and he was now sounding angry. Just what are you trying to say? That he's suddenly not good enough for you? Oh, he's good, Luffy admitted, turning back to his food, and I'd love it if he joined my crew and came with us. He swallowed and finished, but it seems like he really wants to stay here and cook with all of you guys. You can ask me all you want, but I'm just not gonna take him. So you're saying you can't agree to it unless he tells you himself, Zeph said, playing with his mustache. Is that right? That's right, Luffy said before he held out his plate in his mouth and asked for more food. Zeph thought it over before he said, well, I suppose that's fair enough. But who knows if that hard-headed little brat will ever agree to join up with ya. Yeah, Patty added, once that guy makes up his mind there's nothing anybody can do to change it. No sooner did he said that when something came with a crash right through the wall, causing Luffy to leap up into human form as he got into a battle stance. Through the dust they saw that it was a large panshark with Yosaku hanging from his mouth, and with Sanji underneath them. After they pulled Yosaku out of the thing's mouth, it went back to the water and took off as they heard what happened. They had Yosaku with a blanket and he explained that though they weren't able to catch up to Nami, they figured out where she was heading. But Yosaku also added that he came back here to get Luffy, explaining that they needed his help because the place they were going to could mean certain death for them all. Alright, Luffy said, I don't really get it, but I got it. Sanji was leaning against the railing outside as the two got up and walked past, going to get ready to leave. But as soon as Luffy walked past him, he said to wait. Your dream is foolish, he said when Luffy did stop to listen, but then again, so is mine. Luffy didn't look at him as Sanji looked up to the sky. Now's as good a time as any. Why not start my quest right now? Sanji, Luffy asked, turning his head slightly. Pushing himself off the banister, Sanji looked at him and said, I'll be joining your little crew on your journey to be king of the pirates. Luffy turned to stare at him as Sanji finished up, you hear me? I wanna be the cook on your ship. They sized each other up as he finished, alright, what'da say? A big grin appeared on his face and he screamed out, yeah. Of course, he and Yosaku were both jumping around, dancing and singing happily as Sanji looked up at the cooks. Are you guys happy now or what? He asked grumpily, but he was smirking when he saw their sour expressions, sorry, really. I'll leave now. Patty snorted and said that he wanted to throw him out himself for up and abandoning them. I'm especially sorry for making the lot of you resort to bad acting, Sanji told him. Hey wait, Patty yelled, how'd you know? I heard everything, you bunch of jerks, Sanji answered, now turning to glare at Zeph. Was stomping on my pride the best plan you could come up with? Was it, you old geezer? Every little thing has to be a fight with you, Patty yelled, holding up a fist. I'm sick and tired of it. Bring it on. But Zeph was holding Patty back as he looked to Sanji. I have never liked children. As a matter of fact, I hate children. There wasn't a day past that I didn't regret letting a useless little brat like you live, Sanji. Fine by me, you rotten old man, Sanji smirked back. Enjoy the rest of your miserable life. With that, Sanji made to leave with Luffy and Yosaku. He told them that he was going to get his stuff and that he would meet up with them later. Later, as he was packing, Luffy got a surprise when Zeph had offered him his logbook. But Luffy had refused, and caused Zeph to smirk again and leave. Soon, with everyone on board, Luffy and Yosaku were waiting with all the other cooks outside on the fins, that was patched together rather sloppily. Finally, Sanji appeared in the doorway with his knives in his case and a sack over his shoulder. He stood there for a minute in the doorway, as if realizing that this was all for real, he slowly walked forward. But Patty and Carne jumped him, ready to give him a beating. Of course, with 2 kicks, Sanji took them out. Really guys, that was just dumb, a chef said to them as they bled on the deck, and Sanji continued on as if no one interrupted him. It was silent after that as Sanji walked with all the cooks on either side of him, only the sounds of his footsteps and the waves could be heard. It was as if he was about to leave for a dangerous war and might never come back. Though, thinking about it, that wasn't impossible. He reached the boat and said, without ever looking back, let's get going. You don't need to say goodbye, Luffy asked, a little surprised. But Sanji smiled as he said it was fine, and was about to get in when Zeph called out behind him. Sanji, he said from the upper balcony, take care of yourself, okay? Sanji was standing there frozen at those words. Even after all this time, those words seemed to have echoed inside him. Though those simple words wouldn't mean much to others, to Sanji, those words meant so much. Zeph, a man who usually belittled him one way or another, asked him to take care of himself. He was fighting the tears that threatened to come out but was quickly breaking down as an understanding smile appeared on Luffy's face. Chef Zeef, Sanji screamed out, and to their astonishment he spun around and fell to his knees, his forehead touching the Barati's deck. He was so completely moved by what Zeph said, that he just couldn't hold it in. Thanks, you geezer. I'll never forget your kindness. I owe my life to you, old man, so thank you. Tears had also appeared in Zeph's eyes. Soon all the other chefs were crying as well, saying how much they were gonna miss him. There wasn't a dry eye around, and Sanji was smiling through his tears. Stupid words, Zeph said, his eyes bloodshot as he rubbed them. Real men should part without a word, let alone tears. Luffy stood grinning as they watched them all try and mop up their feelings, and Sanji finally stepped onto the boat. Let's go. Set sail, Luffy hollered, and they pushed off, with Sanji waving to them all, still crying the whole way. I will see you again, he promised them. I'll come back someday. The whole time the chefs waved him off, yelling they wished him good luck and that they would miss him. With an emotional Barati behind, they watched the 3 head off as the chefs waving him off even after he was out of their sights. Chapter 9. It has been a couple days since the group had left the Barati, in search of their absent crew members. Yosaku and Sanji were near the front of the ship and resting there as Luffy jumped around like a little kid hopped up on sugar. Finally, Sanji yelled at Luffy to calm down. Still excited, he came over to sit at the very front of the boat and turned to Yosaku. So, are we getting close to where Nami is? You know, the island. Suddenly, Yosaku slammed his hand down on his knee, and got their attention. Pointing an accusing finger at him, he yelled out, you're way too naive and way too young. Don't you get it? Don't you realize every second that passes brings us closer to the infamous Arlong? Yosaku spoke to Sanji and Luffy that, due to Nami's suspicious behavior being connected to their copy of Arlong's wanted poster, he and Johnny suspected that there had to be a connection between them. Of course, Luffy and Sanji didn't seem at all concerned as Luffy asked for food. Yosaku looked ready to fall over at how clueless they were and went on to yell about everything he knew about Arlong. But Sanji was starting to swoon at the idea of mermaids, and Luffy made gills appear on his neck along with a fishtail to mimic the idea, but was knocked out of it by a well-placed kick to the head courtesy of Sanji. Yosaku was getting frustrated and told them all about the 7 warlords and mentioned Mihawk and a member who was also a fishman and just how dangerous they were. Arlong has taken control of 20 towns since coming to the East Blue, Yosaku said with fear in his voice. His strength easily surpasses anyone you've encountered, including Don Krieg. He's devastating. But Sanji couldn't understand why Nami would go after him by herself, which Yosaku responded that she was trying to get his bounty, with Sanji now fantasying about her being a mermaid. Sanji then went to get food done as Luffy said they would worry about it when they got there. But as the 3 were sitting down to really enjoy their food, there was a rumble beneath them. Suddenly, what sounded like a moo came from beneath the waves. The sea rose up on the side of the boat, and through the giant wave were a pair of horns. Sanji looked overboard to see a giant sea cow rising up out of the sea. He had a big round nose with a gold nose ring, cow-esque face and horns, green spots throughout his body, with a great big seal-like body. Yosaku screamed in panic as Luffy and Sanji looked at it in mild curiosity. Luffy, wanting to know what the creature wanted, dived into the water, and suddenly another giant sea cow erupted from the water, startling everyone present. Yosaku screamed while foaming at the mouth before Sanji calmed down and pointed out the second sea monster. Unlike the first monstrous cow though, this one had black spots on its body, as well as a highly familiar scar under the eye and straw hat resting on the top of his head. The 2 creatures seemed to be talking to each other for a minute or two, the soft moos being the only thing the 2 humans could make out. Suddenly though, the black-spotted sea cow's eyes went white with rage and it gave a devastating headbutt to the first one, sending it flying back into the sea with tears of pain streaming from its eyes. The straw-hatted one suddenly turned back into Luffy, who landed gracefully on the railing of the ship before turning back to where he sent the cow flying, screaming out, "Bad sea cow! Stay away from our food!" As the sea cow mooed in anger and pain. Sanji told him off for that and went over to where the sea cow had swam to. He went to try to feed him, but as soon as it opened his mouth, Sanji kicked it so hard that he was thrown backwards into the sea. What the crap are you doing? You jerk, Yosaku bellowed at him furiously. He was gonna eat me with the plate, what could I do? Sanji asked casually, one leg up on the side of the boat, clearly waiting for it to come back up. The beast roared in fury, falling towards them, but Sanji ran up the mast and kicked him so hard in the neck that it hit the ocean, out cold. And to add insult to injury, Sanji and Luffy sat back down at the table to finish their food. You guys are insane, Yosaku whispered, staring at them with admiration and horror. Would have been a waste of good food, Sanji said causally. Soon enough, the boys finished their meal and tied a rope around the cow's horns once he woke up tearfully. Onwards cow, Luffy cried out, and a terrified sea cow set off. Soon they were almost flying across the water as the cow pulled them. Only 15 minutes later they spotted land in the distance. Luffy jumped to the bow of the ship, and enjoyed the ride, yelling out that he could see Arlong Park from here to the other two. The building, several stories high and Arlong's Jolly Roger at the top, was conspicuously placed at the coast to show that they had no fear of the law and where the pool on the outside was linked to the outer seas with a pair of steel gates that kept it closed. Luffy yelled excitedly from the front and yelled at the large cow to pick up the pace. I feel sorry for it, Yosaku said with his hand on his chin. Sanji's kick must have really taken its toll. The monstrous cow suddenly began to turn away from Arlong Park and headed more to the right of it. Not that way, Luffy yelled as he pointed back to the building, your other left. To the building, stupid. The cow ignored him and kept going in the wrong direction as Luffy continued to laugh in excitement as they headed straight for the shoreline. The cow then crashed into the shore with such force that when the sea cow hit, it knocked itself out and launched the little boat right into the air so that it was sent soaring across the island. Oh, it's almost like we're flying, Luffy exclaimed happily. We are flying, you moron, Sanji yelled as he and Yosaku clung on. No, we're falling, Yosaku screamed. Luffy gave a scream of delight as they descended into the forest and started to slide across the ground like a skate would on ice. Landing successful, Luffy cried happily. But Luffy suddenly stopped laughing and was shouting out, hey Zoro. The swordsman was standing there staring at them with a gaping mouth. The boat crashed into him, but the pain didn't last long however as they finally burst through the trees, over some wetlands and they finally crashed right into a high cliff, destroying the boat. Eventually, they tried to get out of the wreckage. As the smoke and dust of the crash disappeared, Luffy's voice was calling out, awesome. We're here guys. After dusting off his hat, he was standing up and looking around eagerly as a muffled voice beneath the boards. What the heck? Zoro forced the boards off him, screaming out at them all, what are you doing? What do you mean? Luffy asked innocently as he stood up. Sanji was still sitting on a crate, also a mess, but didn't seem to have moved from his seat. Yosaku on the other hand was in the background, his legs up in the air as the rest of him was buried in the debris. We're here to pick up Nami, duh, Luffy went on as if it was obvious. How come you haven't found her yet? He paused and thought as if he just remembered something. Oh yeah, and what about Usopp and Johnny? But then Zoro's eyes suddenly widened as the mention of Usopp. Usopp, he exclaimed as he stood up. Oh no, come on, we gotta hurry. He started to run off. Why, what's wrong? Luffy asked after him. That idiot was caught by Arlong, he explained quickly. We gotta hurry before they kill him. He's already dead, a familiar voice stated for them. Jumping at the voice, they looked up in time to see Johnny slowly coming towards them. He was looking tired and out of breath as tears fell from his eyes. What? Zoro exclaimed as he came towards them. We're too late, Johnny continued numbly as he fell to his knees in front of them. Big bro Usopp is dead. Johnny punched the ground bitterly and cried out, Nami, murdered him. You can't be serious, Yosaku cried out, but it was Luffy who was looking furious, shouting out, that's a lie. Yeah, it's true, Johnny exclaimed as he fell back to the ground and sat cross-legged. She was a traitor all along. She's been winning Arlong's favor so she could have the treasure buried in Kokoyashi village all for herself. He slammed his hand on the ground. That woman's just a cold-hearted killer. She won't stop till she gets what she wants. Nami had us fooled the entire. But Luffy wouldn't hear any more of it. He charged again and screamed out that Johnny was a liar as he grabbed him by his collar and shook him so violently that he even let his hat fall off. Say another word and you'll regret it. Easy Luffy, this has nothing to do with Johnny, Zoro said in a calm voice. Johnny turned his head. Go on, believe whatever you want. But I know what I saw. Nami killed big bro Usopp. Shut your mouth, Luffy yelled as he shook Johnny again, refusing to believe anything he said. His pupils had taken on a slit, feral appearance. Never in a million years would Nami kill Usopp. She wouldn't do that to her friends. But I saw it. Johnny stammered out as Luffy looked like he was ready to throw a punch. But then another familiar voice spoke up in a contemptuous way. What was that about friends, Luffy? They looked up to see Nami was standing on the road. She had changed into a green spotted shirt and was now sporting a tattoo on her shoulder of a saw-nosed shark turned to the left with the tail curving inward. Around the shark is a semi-oval with 3 curves emitting from it. She stood there with her staff in her hands, arms folded, and staring at them all as if they were strangers who were bugging her. Nami, Luffy exclaimed in surprise as he dropped Johnny, calming down almost at once and his appearance went back to normal. She didn't answer for a moment as her eyes narrowed coldly, and they all had their eyes widen in surprise. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice bored, as if she couldn't care less for the answer. What are we doing here? You're our friend, Luffy said in surprise, we came to get you. He picked up his hat, as she just jeered at him. What a pest, she said. Nami, Luffy questioned, wondering as she spoke in the same cold voice. Friends, huh, don't make me laugh. You're just pathetic enough to deserve each other, she said with a sneer that made her look quite unlike herself. Damn you, you killed him. I watched you do it. Johnny yelled angrily, pointing a shaking finger at her, and now, big bro Usopp is gone. Yep, that's right. So why don't you kill me, get your revenge? Nami said without batting an eye. What? Gasped Johnny, who seemed stunned that she answered him so causally. Word to the wise, fellas, she said sarcastically, because of your friend's stupidity. She looked to Zoro and rolled her eyes and explained, Arlong is preparing to kill Zoro along with his entire crew. And I don't care about how monstrously strong you guys think you are, you're no match for the real monsters. She played with the staff on her shoulder, and that was when they all noticed the thick bandage around her hand. I promise you, you stay on this island, you will die. So you have a choice to make between life and death. Nami finally finished as Zoro was now growling angrily at her. Sanji on the other hand was looking love-struck once again and cried out, her heartless face is so hot. He waved his arms excitedly as he swooned, hi Nami, it's me Sanji. Let's run away together. Can it, Romeo, this isn't the time or place for that. Zoro yelled in annoyance at him. Excuse me, Sanji challenged, love is like a hurricane. So back off. But Zoro was no longer listening as he turned his back to him and looked directly at Nami, something that ticked him off. Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. He was ignored as Zoro demanded to know where Usopp was. With the fishes, she answered, and some of the crew shivered at that. Dang it, he yelled as he pulled out his one sword, cut the crap. He looked ready to attack her, but Sanji stood in the way and Zoro had to dodge the kick aimed at his face. How sad, a swordsman attacking a lady, he asked him coldly. Idiot, Zoro growled at Sanji, can't you see what's happening here? You're starting to tick me off. Sanji just laughed. If someone stopped me that easily, I'd be mad too. What? Zoro demanded hotly, you should watch your mouth. I'll say whatever I want, jerkwad, Sanji growled right back, and it looked like they were going to have a fight as Yosaku was now trying to get them to stop from fighting. Big bros, we're all in this together, okay? He yelled, this is no time to fight. Your pal's right, Nami agreed darkly, now quit your bickering and leave while you still can. You outsiders have no right to butt into this island's affairs. Don't you get it yet? The only reason I got close to you idiots was so that I could rob you of everything you had. But now that you're broke, it looks like your dream's dead. So go, take your ship. Go on, find a navigator dumb enough to join you and go to the Grand Line. Continue on your quest to find the One Piece or whatever, she went on before she pointed her staff at them all, just leave here. You're an eyesore. Johnny and Yosaku growled furiously at her, looking like they wanted to attack. Convinced that she had scared them away, Nami sighed and her eyes were now being hidden by her bangs as she told them all goodbye. But there, her voice had changed, it was no longer cold or scolding. It was sad. Luffy just looked at her with a blank stare. Nami, he said softly. For a few more seconds he stood there before he closed his eyes and fell back onto the ground. Big bro Luffy, Johnny exclaimed in surprise. Sleepy, Luffy stated. Sleep, Johnny exclaimed in disbelief. Right now, in the middle of the road. Yosaku questioned him. Well, I'm pretty tired, Luffy answered coolly before he yawned. I'm not gonna butt in their affairs, not interested. But I'm not leaving either. Night. Yosaku's jaw fell open, unable to believe what he was hearing. Big bro, Johnny stuttered and even Zoro face-palmed himself at those words. Nami seemed to snap at this. She lost all coldness in her expression and she was now shaking with rage and she finally screamed out, whatever. Just go ahead and die. And without a backward glance she turned and went running away as fast as she could, as if afraid to stay near them any longer. When Luffy awoke to the yelling of Sanji and Zoro, he gave a shout of surprise as he rushed to Usopp, who was both alive and a mess. His face was smashed in from both sides as if he got stuck between two boulders and blood was dripping down from his mouth and crooked nose. Usopp, he screamed out, shaking him a little. Did Nami do all this to you? Luffy shouted, his eyes wide as he continued to shake him. Sanji answered by pointing to Zoro and explained, sorry, Zoro and I did that. No, you did, Zoro disagreed darkly. Usopp was slowly coming to and had to focus hard on Luffy. Luffy, you're here now. Yep, sure Luffy answered, sounding truly relieved that Usopp wasn't dead. I'm here too. Hi there, Sanji greeted and Usopp seemed to have instantly recovered as he stood up and began yelling, one of these days I'll kill you. Oh, you just made a full recovery, Sanji said, greatly impressed as he clapped him on the shoulder. Shut up, he yelled, knocking his hand away and looking ready to go into a shouting match before Zoro reminded them of something. Oh, and by the way, we kinda heard you were dead. Killed by Nami, he stated causally, as if they had been told that he went out to the store instead of getting killed. Usopp blinked, as if remembering that as well. Stupid Johnny, Luffy growled, getting up, he was sprouting nonsense that entire time. Well, Usopp stated, his anger gone and looking thoughtful, in a way, it is the truth. Blinking in surprise they looked at him. But I'm alive, he went on frowning, cause you see, she actually saved my life. They looked completely lost as he explained everything. The fishmen had captured him and were going to kill him, but he made things worse when he asked Nami for help, which made the fishmen suspicious of her. He then used a smoke star to try to escape but Nami intercepted him and announced that she would kill him herself. However, instead, she stabbed her own hand to make it look like she killed him before she kicked him into the ocean so that he could swim away. When they told him that Johnny said that he saw the whole thing, Usopp supposed that Johnny must have been watching from a safe distance and was tricked like the fishmen. So that's it, Usopp said, finishing up telling them, that's how Nami pretended to kill me and make sure I could escape from Arlong Park. He looked up at them and finished, looks to me like she's got some sort of hidden motive for hanging out with a bunch of renegade fishmen. Fine, Zoro said, his arms still folded, what next? Are we gonna destroy Arlong Park? But Usopp was waving his hands around in front of them, trying to get their attention before they did something they'd regret. Whoa, hang on just a second, he said loudly, don't you think we better find out what's going on with Nami first? Suddenly, another voice spoke up, it's no use either way. Looking up, the group saw a young woman was there with short, light purple hair and an even tan skin. Her right arm and chest were heavily tattooed, very similar to Nami's, but she was giving them all a dark and stern look. No matter what you guys do, Arlong's rule won't come to an end, she informed them. Nojiko, Usopp exclaimed in surprise. Who's she? Luffy questioned him. Nami's big sister, Usopp stated. Sanji was already smitten as he swooned. What? Nami's sister. No wonder she's so hot. What do you mean that it's no use? Zoro questioned her. Just trust me. Don't get yourselves involved here, Nojiko said bluntly, and for those who haven't met her could tell that she was just as stubborn and strong-willed as her little sister. And leave poor Nami alone. I'll explain the situation. Situation, Sanji repeated in confusion. Usopp was now giving her his complete attention. Do you mean that you can tell us why she joined up with Arlong's group? He asked. Yeah, Nojiko admitted, folding her arms. And if that doesn't get you to leave, I don't know what will. I'll pass, Luffy said as he walked past Nojiko and Usopp called for him to wait, but Luffy barely paid attention. I don't care about her past. Even as Sanji called out to know where he was going, he just kept going. For a walk, he answered coolly. A walk, Usopp yelled after him. Do you mean you're not gonna listen to this? Nope, he answered back before leaving the area. The Chimera boy walked for a while until he ended up on the edge of the village. But suddenly he saw a group of Marines closely following a man covered in scars and a spinning pinwheel on his hat. Luffy stopped walking and watched them walk past him. Luffy watched after them for a while when he said to himself, that pinwheel is so cool. Soon, Luffy was leaning his back up against a tree and staring up at the sky with a thoughtful expression. A pinwheel, huh, whispered Luffy's voice and brought them back to the matter at hand. When they looked, he blinked before he suddenly smiled to himself. I just thought of a new move. But all too soon there was a commotion not too far away and soon there was a gathering of people with the man called Genzo calling out for a doctor. Genzo, what is it? A man with a white coat and sunglasses yelled as he came running over and she stared at him as well. Nojiko's been shot, Genzo explained as he and Nami gently lowered a body to the ground. When Genzo explained, the villagers were all horrified. The Marines, the doctor repeated in disbelief. As Luffy spotted Nami and got up to head towards her. Her face was hidden by her hair and she was shaking hard with her teeth grounded together. As he got nearer, her sister's head was lying in her lap and she was holding her very gently. Nojiko, the doctor asked as he checked her. I'm all right, Nojiko whispered back through gritted teeth. Arlong has been working with those damn Marines, Genzo told them all and the doctor looked up at him in outrage. He's been lying to Nami for the last 8 years, he explained. He never intended to honor their agreement at all. That monster, a villager yelled out furiously, and soon there were shouts that were filled with anger and shock. Oh, no, a woman whispered, horrified at the thought. That means. That scoundrel, he lied to our Nami. Someone else shouted, but Nami just carefully moved Nojiko's head from her lap as she got up, her fingers curling into tight fists. Nami, the doctor whispered as she stood there. Hey Nami, Luffy greeted happily, waving as he came up behind her. What's up? Need help with anything? Instead of answering, she turned and glared at him so fiercely that the smile was wiped off his face. Her eyes weren't the cold ones she had seen before, they were full of rage that seemed to burn a hole in whatever she stared at. Why are you still here? She screamed at him as she grabbed him by the front of his shirt and pulled up to her face and continued to yell into his fearful face, stay out of my business. Just get away from our island. Tears were beginning to burn and she then threw him down to the ground as she went running off before she lost all control. Luffy picked himself up from the ground and went towards a nearby tree and leaned up against it much like before. He was looking deeply annoyed as he muttered darkly, what's her problem? And here he sounded like a little boy would when faced with a girl on the playground who didn't want to play with him. Luffy continued to lean against the tree as the other 3 crewmates arrived together. All of them were close together so that they could see what was going on, but out of the way so that they couldn't be seen. Here, what looked like the entire village was out holding weapons, mostly things like clubs and homemade spears that were knives tied to staffs. There wasn't even a gun among them as they all gathered around, with Genzo cheering them on to take up arms. 8 long years ago, Genzo told the townspeople, we promised we wouldn't live our lives in vain. No matter the pain and humiliation we had to endure under Arlong, we swore we would fight the long fight so that Nami could meet their demands. But they lied, he shouted out, getting them all riled up. They never intended to keep their end of the deal. Instead they stole our only chance at freedom. So now, his eyes were bloodshot as he finally called out, we should make those filthy fishmen pay for the years they manipulated a kind young girl. Am I right? Yeah, let's do this, someone yelled out. We've always been ready to fight those monsters. Someone else yelled. Time to show those lousy, stinkin' fishmen what we're made of. More shouts came and they were all ready to go. The 4 straw hats were all watching calmly. They looked like they wanted to join in, but something seemed to be holding them back. But what that was became clear when they heard someone shouting for them to stop. Looking up the road, they spotted Nami coming towards them with a big forced smile, but all present could tell she was fighting back tears as she came towards them. Calm down. It's not that much money. I can make it back in no time. I'll take care of it. Don't worry. It'll be easy this time, I'm used to it. I'll be fine, Nami said, still in that fake confident voice that fooled no one. Just relax, it'll be okay. Hey, it's nothing compared to back then. She came in front of them. Come on everyone, I'm perfectly fine. The straw hats each felt as if their insides were shriveling up at how hard she was trying. It was clear that she was still in denial, just trying to stop the people she loved so much from getting themselves killed. But Genzo wasn't fooled as he walked to her and embraced her tightly. She stood there frozen as tears fell from his eyes. You've done enough, he said softly but firmly. You have to know that there's no point now. You've struggled so hard, carrying our lives on your back this whole time. I can only imagine that joining them must have been more painful than getting stabbed in the heart. You fought very well. Genzo, Nami whispered in a broken voice as she also started to cry. Genzo pulled away, his hand firmly on her shoulder before he said, set yourself free from this village. Nami looked horrified at those words and she cried out, unable to believe what he was saying. Genzo. Nami, do it, Nojiko encouraged, now wearing a heavy bandage around her shoulder and arm. What, Nojiko? Nami yelled as she looked around for some support, but it was clear from the rest of their faces that the entire town agreed. Nojiko gave her a brave look, no fear in her face as she said, you're an exceptional young woman, and you have a dream. Everyone, listen, Nami yelled desperately, still trying to stop them. I won't let you go. And to some surprise, she pulled out a knife and pointed it at them with shaking hands. Just stay right there. I'm not going to let anyone else get hurt by these monsters. Her eyes were pleading as she told them, you'll all die. We know that, Genzo told her as he grabbed hold of the knife and gripped it so hard that he was starting to bleed. She looked startled at that as the doctor also spoke up in a grim way, Nami, it's no use, we've made up our minds. Still crying, she shook her head, not wanting to do it but Genzo wasn't taking no for an answer. Get out of the way. He finally yelled and she backed off, startled as he pulled out his sword and yelled to the people behind him, move out. We may not win, but we will give him hell. The doctor added, and without anyone showing any fear they charged off, past Nami, and heading towards Arlong Park. Nami just stood there, not moving as they ran past her before the knife fell from her limp hand and she fell to her knees. The young thief was shaking as she glared at the mark on her arm and dug her nails into it so hard that it looked like she might have ripped her own skin off. Tears fell as she stared at it and her eyes widened as she finally snapped. She hated that disgusting mark with so much loathing and detest and she couldn't stand to look at it anymore. And the tears of pure, uncovered feelings were smearing her face and falling fast as she grabbed the knife again and to some of the straw hat's horror, she began to stab her arm. With each stab with the knife she screamed out the venomous name of the pirate who robbed her of her family and her dreams, the one who had given her so much hopelessness and hatred. She kept going and probably would have gone on until she either bled to death, or simply severed her entire arm. But then it stopped. Luffy had come over and grabbed hold of Nami's wrist and stopped her from another stab. She didn't move for a second before she slowly turned to see who it was. Luffy's face was blank, his eyes hidden by the shadow of his hat, but also letting her know that he wasn't going to let her hurt herself like this anymore. Luffy, she whispered softly as her hand went limp a second time and she seemed to lose all strength as she let the blood-soaked knife fall onto the road. What do you want? Nami demanded in a choked-up voice. You don't know anything about this. You don't know what has been happening on this island for the past 8 years. Nope, I don't, Luffy answered honestly. She was shaking as her hands gripped handfuls of dirt as she cried softly. This has nothing to do with you. She said louder, I told you to leave this place. Yep, you sure did, Luffy said, without any doubt. So leave, Nami yelled as she threw a handful of dirt behind her. And with every word she threw more dirt, now desperate to get him to leave. I told you to leave. Get out of here now. Go away, go. But she finally ran out of steam and openly cried out, sobbing and no longer trying to hold herself back as she let out all the feelings she kept inside for those 8 miserable years. Luffy didn't react at all as he watched, just standing there as she finally said the words that he had been waiting to say. At the end of her rope, she whispered, Luffy. She looked back, tears in her eyes, help me, she finally begged. For a moment, Luffy didn't do anything. But then he silently took off his straw hat and placed it on her head, and for a moment the tears stopped flowing as he turned and walked a few steps away. Of course, he answered, that's what friends do. He suddenly stopped and took a deep breath before he screamed out at the top of his lungs. He's gonna pee. His words echoed around them and they could all feel the determination in that tone. He was going to clobber Arlongs even if it killed him. Luffy, Nami said, her hand to her face as the tears continued to fall again, only this time they were tears of happiness when she noticed the other 3 waiting for orders, all of them ready to fight. Let's go, Luffy ordered. They all looked up. Right, they said, and they left Nami there, not speaking a word to what they were going to do, but she didn't need it as she sobbed openly, her hand still on the straw hat. The 4 were all side by side as they walked along, no one speaking a word as they marched along the road. They were ready to fight for each other merely for the sake of defending a single friend as they got nearer to the gate. Thankfully, the villagers hadn't even made it past that point. Johnny and Yosaku were there, both looking severely beat up. When they neared the villagers, Luffy told them all to step aside, and they parted almost at once without a word. Zoro smirked wider as they walked past them all, as they stared in disbelief. It was worth it just to see the looks on their faces. Johnny and Yosaku moved aside respectfully as they got to the door. Take them out, big bros. Yosaku cheered on. Show them no mercy, Johnny added, holding up a fist and grinning. Luffy didn't even smile, as he cracked his knuckles and held up his own fist. Oh, don't worry, I intend to. Before they knew it, he pulled his fist back and punched the door enough times to make it seem as if a bomb went off as the front gate was smashed apart and exploded. Through the rubble, they could see fishmen of all shapes and types staring at them. And there, sitting in a lawn chair, was Arlong. Arlong was large and muscular. He was a light blue saw shark fishman and his nose proved that for its saw-like shape. His black hair sprouted from the back of his neck and reached down past his shoulders, but they could also make out a shark's fin on his back, and the gills on both the sides of his neck. Sporting the tattoo of the Sun Pirates on the left side of his chest, and the identical mark that he had given Nami was on his arm. His eyes were wide in shock as he looked at him. What the? Now, which one of you is Arlong? Luffy asked threateningly, holding up his fist and glaring at each one of them, daring them to speak. The fishmen all glared at him, all of them outraged that they had come here on their turf. Once the shock was over, Arlong leaned back in the chair, not believing that he was worth the trouble. Arlong, he repeated darkly, well, that just so happens that I'm Arlong. Luffy walked to them, his head held up high and without a fear in the world as he marched in. However, Arlong seemed to be different from the other fishmen. He was calm and relaxed, but there was something dangerous in him that seemed to earn the respect of the rest of the crew. Not sure why he thought he deserved it. Good, Luffy said as he gave him an empty look. I'm Luffy. Luffy, Arlong repeated, obviously not recognizing the name, and clearly wondering just what he was doing here. What are you supposed to be? A pirate, Luffy answered bluntly. Hold it right there, one of the fishmen said as he and another attempted to cut Luffy off. Where do you think you're going? You wanna talk to the boss? The other asked. Well, you gotta talk to us first. Get it? They smirked evilly as they put their hands on his shoulders, but Luffy banged their heads together and knocked them out as he told them to all move it. The other fishmen looked startled at that as he walked right up to Arlong. So what does a pirate want with me? Arlong asked causally, though there was a hint of irritation in his tone. Luffy stopped in front of Arlong. He glared at him for just a moment longer before he seized his wrist and threw it back, and by the time he swung it back, he sucker punched Arlong so hard that he was launched from his chair and hit the ground, rolling over several times before was smashed through the wall. As Arlong pushed himself from the rubble, everyone was staring, slack-jaw, at Luffy. Who the heck are you? Arlong demanded furiously. Luffy's face was filled with nothing but fury, his face making look like some kind of monster as steam actually came out of his nose. That's for making our navigator cry. He yelled at him. Sanji came running up behind Luffy. After this declaration of war, the fishmen started to attack Luffy, but the cook easily took them all out with a few kicks. Back off, you're out of your league, Sanji yelled, kicking their asses and walked on to stand next to Luffy so that he could scold him for going in by himself, which Luffy responded not to worry about him, and that he could take care of these guys on his own. You fool, Sanji said in annoyance, I never said anything about being worried, I just don't want you hogging all the actions. Oh, Luffy said in understanding. Well, Usopp said nervously, also coming up, I just want to let you guys know that I don't mind it if you hog it all. Zoro came up and rolled his eyes. I see that you're raring to go, as usual. As soon as he saw him, an octopus fishman named Hachi cried out in anger that Zoro tricked him before. But soon Hachi screamed in fear when he saw that Usopp was alive and a ray fishman, who was named Karubi snarled that Nami was a traitor. Arlong began to laugh and sent waves of cold down the villagers' spines. A pirate, of course, Arlong said, highly amused, this is all starting to make sense now. You've been after Nami this whole time. He burst out laughing again, louder than ever, the girl is mine and I'm not giving her up. Hachi also laughed as he walked up confidently, a bunch of idiots like you aren't worth Arlong's time. He declared, we know how to deal with you. And he blew through his long mouth like a trumpet. Suddenly, the giant sea cow appeared from the waves, still sporting a giant, swollen lump on its head. Hachi then greeted him as Momu. It leaned forward to see what he wanted, but it stopped dead as soon as it saw Luffy and Sanji there. Oh, look who's back, Luffy said, folding his arms. Seems he's a friend of the fishmen, Sanji nodded in agreement. Momu was now crying as he saw them and mooing softly to himself. Momu turned and was about to leave, still crying as Hachi yelled after him to come back. But the sea cow didn't stop until Arlong told it to. Just a few words from him had apparently scared him enough to want to attack, too bad for him that Luffy was ready for it. Luffy stuck his legs firmly into the ground and transformed his arms until they resembled the tentacles of an octopus. He then used them to grab Momu's horns, showing off his powers. As everyone else freaked out, Zoro yelled at Sanji and Usopp to get back as Luffy yelled out, time for something new. And with his great strength, he was actually able to pick up Momu and was spinning him around, just like a giant pinwheel. Everything in their path, fishmen and the building behind them was either being taken out or destroyed. By the time that he was finished, there was only Arlong, Hachi, and two other fishmen who were left standing while the front of Arlong Park was smashed to pieces. But Luffy focused only on Momu. In the end he was finally able to throw the sea cow as far away as he could from them while the rest of Arlong's crew lay out cold all around them. Everyone was staring at him in shock. Once he caught his breath and transformed his arms back to normal, Luffy was yelling out, all right, that's it Arlong, I'm done playing games with you, I didn't come here to beat down all your cronies. I came here to teach you a lesson. He pointed at him in a challenging way and yelled, so step up. They looked to Arlong. Though he was still smiling, his eyes were now angry. Oh, I will, don't worry. Actually I was just thinking about how painfully I'll end your life. He said this in what sounded like a purr, but they weren't sure Luffy heard this as the other three Straw Hats gathered around him and told him off for that stunt. That was the worst plan ever. Sanji yelled, kicking his head. Yeah, were you trying to kill all of us too? Usopp yelled in his ear. The citizens behind them however were amazed and were cheering them on. They even heard the doctor scream out, I just can't believe there's a human who can throw that giant monster. What are you doing? Usopp screamed with bloodshot eyes as Luffy was now trying to get his feet out of the ground, are you ruining something else? Luffy just looked down at his feet in polite confusion. How dare you hurt our brothers? Hachi demanded, waving his 6 arms around crazily. Very well, Karubi added, it seems like we must join in on this fight. Now you'll get an education on the inferiority of your species. Chu, the remaining fishman with the long lips, who was named Chu, spoke up. Oh, really? Zoro smirked, I'd like to see that. Arlong chuckled to himself as Karubi and Chu both declared that they'd take them out for him. Please let us kill these weaklings, Hachi yelled. All right, Arlong answered agreeably, they're all yours. Sanji and Zoro were both looking confident, however, Luffy was looking to the others and said a little nervously, guys. There's something I should tell you. But just as Sanji mentioned the best way to cook octopus, Hachi attacked them with an ink jet, squirting black ink at them. Though the other three were able to dodge it, Luffy stayed behind and was quickly doused with ink from head to toe. Because of that, he was now blinded, and Zoro was yelling at him to why he didn't dodge it. Hachi then picked up a large chunk of the building that Luffy had destroyed when he threw around Momu, and turned back to Luffy, his attention all too clear. Usopp was screaming for him to run, but then came the sad truth, Luffy couldn't run, his feet were stuck. But you're the one who stuck them into the ground in the first place. Usopp yelled. Zoro smacked himself in the face frustrated. Thankfully, when Hachi threw the broken stone on top of him, Sanji stepped in and destroyed it with a single kick. You're such a pain, he hissed in annoyance as Luffy cheered him on. But then he smirked again as he confessed, looks like I picked one hell of an idiot to be my captain. We all did, Zoro added in light amusement. Sanji added, though in truth, our idiot captain is far better than a gang who prey on a lady. A lady huh? Kurubi asked skeptically, you rush into certain death for one lousy girl. I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Sanji glared at him. Lousy girl, he repeated, and they could hear the anger in his voice. If you insult Nami one more time, I can promise you'll go from fishman to fish sticks. He took out his cigarette and said threateningly, got that? Kurubi didn't look concerned nor the least bit impressed. Your skills are quite exceptional, he admitted after a minute, for a human. But I must admit chivalry from a pirate seems just a little fake. Sanji sneered back at him as he admitted smugly, I'm dead good at what I do, he said as he put the cigarette back into his mouth. And I guarantee that there's nothing fake about my desire to help a beautiful lady in need. Sanji and Kurubi faced off as Usopp tried to pull Luffy's feet out, as the monkey-brained captain started picking his nose. Hachi picked up more stone and was determined to go after him, but Zoro was one step ahead of him. He pointed his sword threateningly at him, taunting Hachi to come after him instead. It worked. Furious Hachi yelled out, you're Zoro. I forgot. He threw his stone at him which Zoro dodged easily as he finished yelling, you can't get away tricking me. That stuff's old news octopus man, Zoro said, holding up the white blade. I personally don't care what reasons you have for wanting to kill me, the situation is changed. You see, the tables have turned. Holding his blade and carefully unsheathing it so that no one could miss the gleaming blade, you're not the hunters anymore, understand? Now it's you fish freaks who are being hunted. Luffy, Usopp screamed out at his moron of a captain as he just realized something. Use your powers to transform your legs. That way they'll become unstuck, he explained. Luffy bopped his fist into the palm of his other hand and you could literally see the light bulb go off over his head. With a minute of concentration, Luffy's legs seemed to increase in mass and become grayish like that of an elephant or a rhino's, and the resulting pressure cracked the pavement around his legs, allowing him to easily pull his now human legs out. Usopp cheered but then noticed the last fishman, Chu, who had killing Usopp in his sights. However, Usopp went running off past all the citizens so that Chu was distracted for a moment. Once Chu realized that they were all there, he was planning on killing them all as well, but Usopp sent an exploding star at him from a safe distance away. Did you think that it would be easy? Usopp challenged him. You're dealing with me now. Enough, Chu yelled, losing his cool completely, and went charging after him. I'm going to get rid of you right now. As they watched them go running off, Genzo was asking who he was. Brave one minute and cowardly the next, the doctor said confused, he's a baffling man. Arlong finally got up from where he sat and walked towards them. You morons are a pathetic sight to behold, he growled, now sounding ticked off. I'm sick of watching this, so get out of my way. But sir, Kurubi said quickly, there's no need for you to go on a rampage, think of Arlong Park. Don't worry, Arlong said, I know. I'll make sure this will be over quick. Luffy charged at the approaching fishman and his arms became scaled as he balled his hand into a fist. Going for a clothesline, Luffy cried out, lizard lariat. However, Arlong simply opened his mouth wide and bit into Luffy's arm, causing him to cry out in pain. Fortunately for Luffy, the hard scales on his arm prevented a majority of the damage. The worst of it was a few small lines of blood under some broken scales. Growling like an animal, Luffy used his other arm to punch the evil pirate across the face. Arlong cried out as the rough scales grazed his face, but like with Luffy, his rough skin prevented a majority of the damage. You stupid human, Arlong raged as he grabbed Luffy by the head with both hands and prepared to slam his face with a rising knee. Thinking fast, a hard shell started to coat the Chimera pirate's forehead, blocking the blow. Phew, I'm glad Hercules beetles have such hard heads. Luffy sighed in relief, confident that blow would have definitely hurt. His relief didn't last long, however, as he gave a yelp when Arlong tried to spear him with his saw-like nose. Gritting his teeth, Luffy shouted out, let's see how you like it. As his nose suddenly gained the long horn of a rhino. Rhino rapier, he cried as he used the horn to stab Arlong right in the shoulder. The shark gave a cry of pain before he gritted his sharp teeth and pulled Luffy out of his shoulder. Curse you, let's see how well you can fly, Arlong screamed in rage. Grabbing Luffy by the head, Arlong got into a pitcher stance and threw the animal man with all his monstrous strength. Luffy cried out as he was flung far into the air. He sailed out of Arlong Park and was far out over the open water before he was able to slow down enough to transform into a seahawk and started to fly back towards the island. Unfortunately, due to how far he was flung and his own bad sense of direction, it still took Luffy a good 15 minutes before the park was back in his sights. When he flew to where he started off at, a bad sight greeted him. It was a mess, the whole battlefield was mostly destroyed, and Arlong was on his feet, holding a wounded Zoro by the throat. Suddenly something was sent flying high in the sky, and Luffy's voice was screaming out, I'm back. Luffy saved Zoro by switching places with him and actually throwing him off into the distance. Luffy, he was now launching several attacks against Arlong. They seemed to be inefficient against him, though Luffy claimed it was just warm-up. Arlong pulling himself from the side of the building that Luffy knocked him through. What a bunch of fools, he hissed menacingly. You think you can actually beat me? You were better off flying over the ocean. No, I don't think so, Luffy answered back, still stretching out. I like it down here, yep. Arlong glared up at him before he snarled, do you not understand my anger? He then got up on his feet. I saw my brothers crushed like worms. You'll realize soon enough. You should have quit fighting long ago. Luffy, Usopp cried from a hole in the wall, and they were surprised to see him there with blood dripping down from his face. I got your back, pal. If he loses, Sanji's voice said out, and they looked up to see him soaking wet and leaning up against the wall with Genzo and Nojiko. One. He was trying to light a wet match before he just gave up. Then we'll all, he flicked the match away, die. Yeah, Genzo agreed softly as they watched the match go flying off, almost as if in slow motion. We will. If that happens, Nojiko also added softly, it's the end of the East Blue too. After a few minutes of silence, Arlong finally spoke. Do you know what the biggest difference between you and me is? He asked conceitedly. The nose, guessed Luffy, and as a joke he turned his into that of a saw shark's too. The jaw, Luffy then suggested, baring his now sharp teeth before then held up his hand, webbing. As webbing grew between them, Arlong's eyes turned white in rage. Species, he screamed and he lunged forward to try and bite him, but Luffy easily dodged it. Again and again Arlong tried to bite, like a wild animal, but Luffy moved back. They went at it until Arlong had finally grabbed hold of his head and slammed him against a pillar. He would have bitten him here, but Luffy shrunk into a mouse that got out of the way so that Arlong bit the pillar and shattered it into pieces. Luffy snuck away from the collapsing building. Arlong turned back to sneer at him as if he just proved a valid point. You see, he asked him mockingly, this is the inherent power of fishmen. While you may be able to look like a fishman, you are but a pale imitation. I feel sorry for you humans for having been created with such limited powers. He slowly walked towards him, still taunting him the whole time. We've been on a different level since the beginning of time. You are inferior, it only makes sense for you to bow before us. He stopped and stood before him as he proclaimed, you're so weak. Your presence on this planet is deplorable. Don't you think your time has come to an end? Arlong demanded again. He chuckled, as if he told a funny joke, I'll show you. Show you the real difference between you and I. Luffy just smiled as he turned back to human. Sure, he told him pleasantly, go ahead. There's no way I'm losing to a big fish. Because, I'm gonna be king of the pirates. Arlong picked up a piece of the stone pillar and tossed it up and down like a ball in his hands. King of the pirates, don't be foolish. A puny human like you couldn't possibly conquer the Grand Line. You can't even crush a pillar with your jaws. And like that he crushed the rock with little effort. Yeah, so what? Demanded Luffy. He then went and broke through the stone with his fist. Stop your bragging. You aren't that awesome. Besides, smashing stone with your teeth's not that smart, Luffy added, holding up a fist. That's right, you're the best big bro. Tell him like it is. Yosaku cheered on in the back. Yeah, yelled Johnny, also agreeing, what idiot bites a rock anyway? Vein stood out on Arlong's neck. Fools, he yelled out furiously, knowing that he was being mocked, that's not the point. Every member of the human race is ignorant and weak. Arlong pointed at Luffy and demanded, what good are you if you can't even pull yourself out of the water? He then flew at him for another bite as Luffy dodged it and was able to grab hold of a couple swords that lay discarded. As a matter of fact, Luffy said, pulling the swords back and then getting right into Arlong's face, I'm worthless without my friends to help me out. Luffy chuckled as he held out the swords and took everyone by surprise, thinking that he knew how to use them as he swung and attacked. But he wasn't really using them, just swinging them around much like how Zoro did when completely losing it against Mihawk. Arlong effortlessly broke the swords, but it turns out that it was a ruse. With Arlong overconfident over destroying the swords, Luffy delivered a powerful blow, shattering his teeth. Luffy stood up and thought it all over for a moment. You're right, I don't know how to use a sword, you bastard. He yelled after the brief pause. I'm a terrible sailor. I definitely can't cook, and I can't even lie. Without my friends to help me I would have been dead a long time ago. Arlong chuckled from where he laid his hand over the place where Luffy struck. So you fully admit how pathetic you are. You may be a fool, he said as he sat up, but you're certainly honest. How much your crew feel tolerating this idiocy day in and day out. I bet they're sick of it. But that makes me wonder why they tried so desperately to save their half-wit leader, Arlong finished. Luffy glared at him as Arlong held his hand to his mouth, still to his broken teeth. Someone like you doesn't deserve a ship or a crew. What good is a helpless whelp of a captain to them? Arlong finished. What can you possibly do? I can clobber you, Luffy responded confidently. Usopp and the rest of villagers cheered him on as Nami smiled. Even Sanji said irritably, well, get to it, you numbskull. Cheer all you want, but it won't change a thing. Arlong shouted out, and within seconds he regrew his teeth. Luffy gasped out. He's got new teeth, he said in shock. I'm a shark, Arlong reminded him. New teeth will grow one after the other. And with each set, I will grow stronger and stronger. Within seconds, his teeth had regrown and, using this, he pulled his teeth out to create handheld castanet weapons for each hand. And when he attacked, they thought the worse for a minute as he laughed hysterically at each attack, one after another. However, it took him some time for him to realize that Luffy used one of his crew as a human shield the whole time. Enraged, Arlong hollered at such a dirty tactic and screamed about how he dared to use his own crewmate as a shield. What are you talking about? Luffy asked, as if he was being scolded by his parents for something that someone else did. You're the one who attacked me, don't you remember? Don't move a muscle, Arlong warned, clinking the teeth together, animal boy. Luffy thought it over before he said, say, now that's an idea. Again Luffy was forced to dodge it before he was able to get in another kick. When he came back up though, his body was much bulkier as his skin took on a bluish sheen complete with gills, webbed digits, and a small dorsal fin. Luffy grinned, showing rows of razor teeth similar to Arlong's. Let's see who's got the bigger bite, the shark boy declared as he rushed at the enemy fishman. The two got into a grappling contest for a few minutes before Luffy saw his opening. Rearing his head back, the shark-like man was able to sink his teeth into Arlong's side, causing him to yell in pain. Snarling like a mad dog, Arlong was able to get Luffy's arm inside his mouth. Big bro's gonna get his arm bitten off. Yosaku screamed and Nami looked horrified. But to everyone's surprise, Luffy reached up and grabbed Arlong's hair. In the end, he was able to pull him down so that he could slam his foot into his head to get him to let go. They both fell to the ground exhausted, lying on their backs, both now injured. Arlong had gotten up, and quick as a flash, he jumped for the sea. Luffy also got up as he shrank back down to normal and pulled the teeth out of his side. He was already looking around just as a dark fin appeared above the water. Nami was screaming for him to look at the water. Wow, a shark, he said eagerly, and the Straw Hat sighed. Really, he hadn't noticed who it was. Usopp almost fell over and yelled, "No, that's Arlong." The fin suddenly disappeared and they were waiting for him to come out almost anxiously. Luffy got ready to dive in after him, when suddenly Arlong launched himself like a torpedo. His attack shark dart's increasing speed was able to break through all solid objects. Luffy was sent flying and crashed painfully on the ground as Arlong went smashing through an upper floor of the building. Through the hole in the building, he stood there, still cocky. "Wow, I'm impressed you could dodge that," Arlong proclaimed as Luffy looked up. "Good job, but the longer you evade death, the more painful it will be." The fishman dashed down with another attack and landed like an arrow with his nose embedded in the concrete, posed there perfectly on his nose. Thankfully Luffy had been able to dodge it in time and Arlong's nose eventually broke through the solid stone. Pulling out to face Luffy, he went flying towards him again. Luffy had no time to transform into one of his quicker or sturdier forms. He narrowly missed a death shot, but there was still blood splattered. After a third failed attack, though Luffy was sent flying, Arlong dove back into the sea again. The others were all screaming for him to hide before Arlong came back out as Luffy regained his footing, but he was shaking in anger as he declared that he wasn't going to hide this time. "Stop being so stupid," Sanji yelled at him angrily. "Go run for cover before you become a target." "No way," Luffy yelled back stubbornly. "I'm not running anywhere. I'm gonna catch him and break his nose." He turned to the water and yelled, "Come on, you shark. Didn't you hear from us to go somewhere and hide?" Usopp yelled at him furiously. "You barely escaped his last attacks. One direct hit will kill you. Luffy, listen to us. Go and hide." Ignoring him, Luffy dived into the water, much to the shock and horror of the spectators. The water was still for a moment before waves started to pick up, as if something was thrashing under the surface. Bubbles came to the surface and before anyone could blink, Arlong was shooting out of the water once more like a rocket. However, he wasn't alone this time. A black dolphin, one with a curious scar under the one eye, was quickly darting after the fleeing fishman. The dolphin was suddenly right on top of Arlong and it cried out in Luffy's voice, "Dolphin slam." With a mighty swing of his tail, Luffy was able to send Arlong flying right into the side of the main building. The wall easily shattered on impact as Luffy, now fully human, landed gracefully on the shore. Here, it was the last straw. Arlong snapped, and his eyes changed to a wild, insane look that's similar to a monster. "Oh no," Sanji stated uneasily, "it's the same expression that a sea king makes just before they snap." He must have snapped with Luffy's last attack. "I guess he finally went over the edge," Zoro said as the red veins were standing out in those cold eyes, his head swirling around wildly, trying to find him. "His eyes," Nami whispered, her hands to her face, "I've never seen them like that." "You wretched human," screamed Arlong as he grabbed hold of Luffy by the head and swung him around like a lasso before slamming him into the building. Luffy was sitting up. "Whoa, that was crazy," he said to himself. "It didn't really hurt but I can tell he's really like, matter." Arlong jumped towards him and then punched through the wall when Luffy hopped on cricket legs to safety. But judging how indifferent he was to this, they couldn't help but wonder if this was what Arlong had planned from the start. Now the fishman fumbled his hand around for a moment inside. He knew the building well enough to know exactly what he was reaching for. And when he pulled his hand out, they saw just what it was that they stared at it. It was a giant black pole with 6 saw-toothed patterned black blades, resembling a shark's saw-like teeth with a katana handle. "The saw blade," Nami screamed. "That thing's gigantic." Johnny screamed as Yosaku screamed in terror. With a battle cry, Arlong was now determined to end it as he jumped to the first roof with Luffy having to jump higher and higher to avoid it all. Up and up they climbed, with Arlong destroyed everything in his way. On the top floor Luffy had finally ran out of room, but then noticed the window next to him and went diving towards it, smashing through the window. Luffy came crashing through the window with Arlong screaming up that he no longer has a place to run. They were in a room that was filled with maps. Thousands of them were scattered everywhere in stacks, some of them still hanging from the ceiling as they were left to dry while there were shelves full of books and tools. Luffy was up and was now trying to catch his breath. That was a little too close, he gasped. Arlong came walking through, stepping on the shards of the broken window and glared at Luffy, the saw-like blade still in his hand. "There's nowhere else to run," Arlong said in a low voice. "You and me, here, the highest level of Arlong Park." He grinned evilly, and they knew that he was planning something terrible. "At last, the time of your death has come." But Luffy was looking around at this place. "What is this room? Lots of paper." "This isn't just any room," Arlong explained. "This is the room where I had Nami draw all of her sea charts for me." "This is Nami's room," Luffy questioned, now looking around with a more focused look. "These sea charts are all that she's worked on for 8 years." Arlong paused for a moment as he looked almost fondly at the maps. "Just look around you. These maps are more valuable than any amount of treasure. You see, to us fishmen, collecting data about the ocean is a simple affair. But assembling that information into a usable chart is a difficult task. That's why we needed a navigator. In fact, that's the sole reason why I'm so keen on keeping that woman in my possession. She's absolutely brilliant. The accuracy of her charts is beyond comparison." Luffy continued to blankly look around at everything. But Arlong didn't seem to be expecting an answer. "She's too good for human trash like you," he went on. "Her talents should be used solely to build up the mighty Arlong Empire." Arlong pointed the weapon at him, still grinning. "Now listen. Nami belongs to me. Is that so? Luffy's voice suddenly said. And you're interfering in our business, Arlong said smugly, you human scum. Luffy narrowed his eyes dangerously as the shark saw was now being pointed at his head. He then sneered as he said slowly and carefully so that he couldn't hope to miss his words, she's not your friend. Luffy sat there for a moment without saying anything. But then, I don't care, he answered, still staring defiantly at him. I don't care what you say, he said firmly as Arlong looked annoyed that he wasn't agreeing with him. But with his eyes not showing any signs of fear, Luffy declared loudly, because Nami is our navigator. 1. Kurubi had dragged Sanji underwater in hopes of getting an advantage, but the fight ended up like in canon. 2. I would imagine for a proud fishman like Arlong, having someone like Luffy being able to mimic a fishman's appearance is a grave insult. However, he isn't as surprised by Luffy's powers as the previous villains have been, because he had seen similar things on the Grand Line. The same could be said for Buggy, but he's a cowardly idiot, so it's no wonder he was caught off guard.